Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Deku became the Relentless Dreamer Part 1. If you guys enjoy this what if and want to see Part 2, comment down below. And let me know before I start. Please do support for more awesome content and leave a like. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel. And also share this video with your friends and check out the description in my playlist. The author of the story 𝗧𝗵𝗲 𝗧𝗏 209 from fanfiction. So let's start the video. The beginnings. I know that no one is born equal, muttered a 4-year-old Izuku Midoriya shakily as he stood in front of the injured boy that was being bullied before he intervened. His small body trembled as he held up his shaking fists, green eyes wide in terror as he stood his ground. But that doesn't give you the right to use your quirk to harm others. Kakin, he shouted vehemently, his body language betraying his fear. Stop this, Kakin, you're hurting him, said the small boy with bushy green hair and green eyes in a loud voice, looking at the group in front of him, but he was still trembling in fear. Oi, Deku, said an ash blonde-haired kid with red eyes as he started to grin evilly. Who the hell do you think you are, telling me what I can or can't do, huh? He smacked one first into his other palm, and the sound of a small firework resounded in the curiously deserted park as a small explosion resulted from the actions of the red-eyed kid. Izuku shook his head in disbelief as he stared at his former friend. While Katsuki Bakugo had never been what you would call a nice kid, he never used to go out of his way to hurt and belittle others before his quirk manifested. After that happened a few months ago, Katsuki changed for the worst, and now he never let any chance to bully anyone with a weaker quirk than him, or with no quirk at all. And while Izuku fell on the second category, as his own quirk has yet to manifest, he was not about to stand aside and do nothing while Katsuki used his gift to hurt others. If there was one thing Izuku hated above all, was when those with power preyed on those weaker than him. Being so young, he couldn't put into words, but Izuku knew that with certainty. Those with the gifts of a quirk should only use them to help others or humanity progress in general. That was the reason why he stood in front of the defenseless kid, even though he was defenseless himself. Intellectually, Izuku knew that he didn't have a chance standing up to Katsuki and attempting to stop him from doing what he wanted to do. His heart and his sense of what was wrong and right, however, prevented him from listening to the recommendations of his brain to just run away and leave the situation be, since it had nothing to do with him. His morals told his heart to help the kid, and his ear responded in the affirmative, forcing his brain to move his body in order to do what was right. You are worthless, yelled the chubby kid from his position on the air, his red bat wings being the reason why he could fly. Actually, he is quirkless. But it's basically the same, shouted the other kid, whose fingers on the left hand were stretched until they were longer than he was tall many times over. Izuku grit his teeth as he shakily stood his ground. My quirk has yet to manifest, that's true. But if you use your quirks to harm others, then you don't deserve them. The two boys flanking Katsuki glared at him, and the ashen blonde-haired boy twitched, and his face contorted into an ugly scowl of anger and scorn. You are overreaching, Deku, he shouted before he shot himself forward, followed by his lackeys, and they began to hit Deku all over his body, making him cry in pain as tears leaked from the corner of his eyes. While this happened, the kid that Izuku was trying to protect quickly stood up and ran away without looking back. Izuku saw this, and while it saddened him that the kid ran away without hesitating to see if he could help him, he was still glad that he managed to help him. In the end, that was what mattered the most to him, to be able to help others. That was why he couldn't help for his quirk to manifest, so he could become a hero. Even though he was the only kid his age in town whose quirk has yet to manifest, he was still hopeful. Izuku suddenly covered his face, and he shouted in pain as his arms were burned due to the small explosion caused by Katsuki's fist smacking against his forearms instead of his face, which apparently was what he had been intending. Through the pain and his tears, Izuku lowered his arms a bit, and he glared at Katsuki in defiance. Now that he was hurting too much to be afraid, Izuku could find the courage to consciously stand up to Katsuki. His green eyes like steel as he grunted and cried due to the pain caused by the continuing strikes of the other two kids. A particularly nasty shot to Izuku's flank, however, made Izuku close his eyes as he shouted in pain. Now in a world of pain after being hit in the liver, Izuku wished for it to go away. As much as he wanted to help, like any other sane kid his age, he disliked pain of any kind, and when pain that was above of what could be endured, the first instinct was to stop interacting with the cause of that pain. Since Izuku was being pinned down from all sides as he was punched all over, he couldn't get up and escape, as the desire for the pain to stop grew stronger the more he was hit. That was unnoticed by everyone but Izuku, as it was covered by his burnt and ruffled clothes. For a moment, Katsuki faltered as he felt something that made the hairs of the back of his neck stand up as a shiver went down the length of his spine. He looked down at Izuku to see him glaring up at him from behind burned arms. And after a strong hit to the face from the boy with long fingers, Izuku had enough. Izuku yelled at the top of his lungs, and the three bullies were startled by the sudden noise, causing them to stop their assault for a second and back off. Izuku used this time to stand up at shaky legs, his hair covering his eyes. The green boy stood up in front of his bullies panting. But not from exhaustion but anger. He was feeling anger at his best friend for becoming a bully. Angry that these two idiots followed him like lost puppies. Angry that he was easily beaten at like a punching bag. He was so angry to the point he was seeing red. Izuku took a step ahead, his dark and green hair covering his face. "You're pathetic," Izuku spoke in cold voice, making the kids flinch. "You use your gifts to prey on the weak and defenseless." Izuku lifted his head, and his eyes were cold and had no light in them, only darkness, and it scared Bakugo. Izuku took another step and roared, "Get lost." A wave of dark mist exploded from Izuku's body, freezing the kids. And as they looked, they saw a monster in the form of Izuku. After a few seconds, the wave stopped, and the two goons that follows Katsuki ran off, while screaming about a monster. Katsuki, on the other hand, was frozen in place, not processing what happened. Until he saw Izuku still glaring with the same intensity and determination, and his instincts screamed for him to run, so he did, but not before shooting Izuku a glare. Izuku watched in confusion as Katsuki ran away. What happened? Was this my quirk? Thought Izuku, confused. XXXXXXXXXX. You better give up. It is impossible for you to develop a quirk, said the doctor almost uncaringly as he stared, seemingly bored, at the young kid and his mother. Midoriya's eyebrow twitched in irritation at the way the doctor had so crassly said something that could possibly crush her dear son's spirit. Her eye flicked towards him, and she gave a sigh of relief when she saw that he was more confused than anything else, though he was also speechless. She had taken him to the doctor to treat the injuries he sustained at the park for falling to the ground. That was, he told her at least, while he was playing, and they had taken the opportunity to check why his quirk has yet to manifest. Is there something wrong with him, doctor? Other kids his age have already manifested their quirks, and my Izuku is the only one in his kindergarten that hasn't yet, she said, her voice sharp when she asked the question, but turning worried as she continued speaking. The doctor hummed in no for a second. You are a fourth generation, if I'm not mistaken, right, madam? I am, of course, speaking in terms of quirk. Inko nodded, and she wiggled her fingers, and the All Might figurine that had been resting in her son's lap came floating towards her. Yes, I can attract small objects to me and manipulate them a bit, she explained. Her countenance darkened a bit, and her eyebrow twitched in irritation again. And my dear husband can breathe fire. As much as she loved Hisashi, Izuku's father, his penchant for getting jobs abroad, and only being home for a total of maybe 2 months per year, was a source of anger for Inko. The doctor nodded, and he motioned towards an X-ray of Izuku's left foot. The norm for a quirk to manifest is 4 years old at the most. Your son has already reached that age a few months ago, and he has yet to manifest his quirk. If you take a look at this, you can see that your son has 2 joints on his pinky toe. As quirks began to manifest in people, the presence of a second joint in the pinky toe has been proven to be absent in those who have developed quirks. This means that the chance for your son to develop a quirk, even as a late bloomer, of which there have been a few cases throughout history, is less than 0, he explained bluntly. Inko resisted the urge to hurl the All Might figurine at him, and she settled for glaring at him for the ungentle manner in which he was crushing her son's dreams. She turned towards her Izuku to assure him that everything was going to be all right, and that she loved him with all her heart despite him not having a quirk. Her eyes widened, however, when saw her gentle and polite son glaring heatedly at the doctor too. It seemed like he had inherited something more than her looks from her. You are lying, he shouted with vehemence she had not witnessing from him. He hesitated for a moment. I lied about these injuries. I didn't fall, it's Kachin and his goons who did this to me. When they were beating me, I felt like I sent a wave of power that scared them off. The doctor stared at him for a moment before he shook his head. That's impossible, I assure you, he said uncaringly. Already fed up with his attitude, Inko sharply stood up before she grabbed Izuku's hand and gently pulled him off his own chair. That's quite enough, doctor. Thank you for time. I will leave your payment with your secretary at the front door, she said stiffly before bowing slightly. Pulling her son along with her, she left the doctor's office. As he was being dragged away, Izuku turned around and glared at the doctor. Said doctor locked eyes with Izuku for a moment, and he shuddered as he felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand up, and he froze in fear at the child's cold glare. Everything went back to normal when the mother and son duo disappeared behind the door that was closed with more strength that was strictly necessary. Shaking his head at the odd occurrence, the doctor turned back to his work. XXXXXXXXXX, Izuku. Why did you lie to me about how you got hurt in the park? Asked 𝗵𝗃 not unkindly, but with a certain sternness that told Izuku that should he lie to her again, he was going to regret it the moment they got home. Izuku faltered for a second before he looked down to his feet. I didn't want for Kaken and the other to get in trouble, said Izuku honestly. As much as he hated what Katsuki Bakugo had turned into after getting his quirk, he was still friends with a Katsuki Bakugo that didn't have a quirk. It was because of those fond memories that he didn't want to get his former friend in trouble. Seeing the conflict in her son's eyes, and knowing that kind of relationship he used to have with Katsuki, 𝗵𝗃 sighed with fond exasperation as she knelt down in front of him and wrapped her arms around him. Being so noble is something worth admiring, Izuku. But if you don't let Bakugo-kun learn that his bad actions have bad consequences, then he is never going to learn that what he is doing is wrong. And if he doesn't learn that soon, then he will eventually mess with someone that is not going to take his bullying. Someone that will strike back harder than even he could handle. Izuku looked up at his mother as she told him this, and as he analyzed her words, he nodded in understanding and acceptance. Izuku was smart enough, even at his age, to understand what she was saying. For a moment, he wished he could be the one to teach Katsuki the wrongness of his ways. But the fact that he couldn't control his own quirk, and his surprising lack of interest of renewing his friendship with him, lead up to his decision of just letting him be. If his mother was right, Katsuki would learn eventually. He just hoped that when that time came it wouldn't be with dire and permanent consequences for him. Seeing that she managed to make her son understand, 𝗵𝗃 smiled. Though if one looked closely enough one could see how strained it was. While Izuku was unwilling to let Katsuki be punished for his bullying, 𝗵𝗃 had a very different opinion on the matter. It seemed like she was going to have a talk with Mitsuki very soon. XXXXXXXXXX hours after they got home, 𝗵𝗃 was on the phone with Hisashi, telling him what she just learned while Midoriya was watching a video on her computer. So, Izuku is quirkless? Hisashi replied, letting it sink in. What do I tell him? You know how much he wants to be a hero, and yet. And then part of me is. 𝗵𝗃 asked, barely keeping it together. Hisashi didn't immediately respond, taking time to think of his reply. Dear, what you should or shouldn't say isn't something I can tell you. Be honest with him, keeping his dream alive. That's up to you, since right now, you have to give him the support that I can't from here. You know that quirkless heroes haven't been a thing since the second half of the 5th generation. Though if saying he can't be one is right or not depends on both you and him, so. All I can say is do what you believe is right. After all, neither of us can truly understand how he must be feeling right now. Hisashi said, trusting her judgment on this matter. 𝗵𝗃 let out a sigh, nodding her head. All right, I love you, she replied. I love you too, and good luck, he replied. 𝗵𝗃 hung up the phone, and then walked into her room as he began replaying the video for the dozenth time that night. Hey, Izuku, she began. That mom? He unintentionally interjected, his voice shaking. 𝗵𝗃 paused as that. There's always a smile on his face, no matter how bad things get. Even when things seem impossible. He never gives up. Midoriya turned around, and then the tears she had been trying to hold back started to spill. Then, he said what she feared. Do you think I can be a hero too? He asked. Half of his eyes were filled with tears, threatening to pour out at the right moment. 𝗵𝗃 had decided it was better to tell him the truth and wished that things had been different to spare him the pain. But those eyes. Once she saw those eyes. Izuku. She slowly walked over to him, before collapsing on her knees as she gave him a hug. Please, don't give up on yourself, she begged. It hadn't been what he wanted to hear, but it wasn't the words he dreaded either. So, he kept believing that his dreams weren't dead, kept believing that there had to be some small flicker of hope that he could become a hero. Plans for the future and inspiration. Izuku was sitting across from his mother on the table in the living room. He was eating the katsudon she made to cheer him up, and he was enjoying it as much as possible. He looked at his mom and frowned. It's been a year since his diagnosis, and it wasn't a very nice one. Kids were mean to him and teachers never cared to stop it. He got into a scuffle today with a bunch of kids. Katsuki wasn't one of them, which was weird. Ever since the day he was diagnosed, Katsuki never talked or even looked at him. Not that he minds, which was out of character. But it made things easier for Izuku since other kids weren't as hard to fight. Yes, he got hurt, but so did the other kids he fought with. Izu, we need to talk, said 𝗵𝗃 with a frown, and Izuku followed her example. She looked upset, and he couldn't blame her since he got hurt really badly. He had a split lip, cuts, bruises, and some burns, but nothing too serious, so nothing to worry about. Plans for the future and inspiration. Izuku was eating katsudon with his mother in the dining room. He got into a scuffle with some kids, but he won. Katsuki wasn't with them, so it wasn't too hard. He looked at his mom and winced. She looked very worried, and to be fair to he got some good hits on him too. But she should have seen the other kids. "Izu, we need to talk," said 𝐭 with a frown, and Izuku followed her example. She looked upset, and he couldn't blame her since he got hurt really badly. He had a split lip, cuts, bruises, and some burns, but nothing too serious, so nothing to worry about. "Can you tell me what happened?" "Well, a bunch of kids tried to gang up on me, so I fought back like you told me. It was self-defense, so nothing bad," Izuku said, and 𝐭 frowned. "How many?" "4 of them." Izuku winced as his mom's eyes widened in disbelief. "Well, I'm going to talk with the principal tomorrow." "It doesn't matter, Mom. I can handle them. Please let me stand up for myself. They won't leave me alone until I scare them off. It training and fighting experience, so let do 𝐎𝐻𝑖ghs," Izuku begged, and his mom sighed in defeat. She led warmly and hugged him. "Well, if you see it that way, then fine. Promise me on me thing though. Promise me one thing," said 𝐭 seriously. "And that is?" asked Izuku curiously. His mom grinned. "Give them hell and don't hold back," 𝐬𝐻𝑑 said with a mischievous smile, and Izuku laughed loudly at her choice in words. It was actually nice to have her support and love. He started doing runs around the neighborhood and exercising, and when his mom saw him working, she told he can in fact be a hero. They cried waterfalls that night and flooded the house. After dinner, he went to do his homework for the night to give it tomorrow to the teachers. It wasn't hard to finish, and in fact it was too easy for him. When he finished, he saw his mom talking on the phone, probably with her lawyer. His mom and dad were divorcing. His told him a few days ago, and he wasn't as sad as his parents thought he'd be, probably because he rarely if ever saw his father, so it wasn't a big deal to him. 𝐭 noticed her dear son walking to her, so she ended the call and looked at him. Confusion and curiosity were evident on her face, so Izuku decided to answer the unspoken question. "I finished my homework and wanted to use the PC, Mom. Please, I'm bored," Izuku said with puppy use, and 𝐭 sighed. "Fine, but stick to what you usually watch. And if you search on the internet, tell me first," his mom instructed, and Izuku nodded. He grabbed the PC and turned it on. He started watching some videos on local heroes and famous ones, and started taking notes into his hero analysis for the future. The ones that caught his attention was a new heroine called Rukiu. Her quirk lets her partially or fully transform into a dragon, which was really cool. Their WSS also the videos that fans keep uploading on All Might's fights, and Izuku watched them with admiration. He liked the way All Might kept collateral damage to minimum. It's a reminder why he was the N1 hero. But of course not all people are as careful. 𝗵𝗲, Izuku growled lowly. The man was like an older and more aggressive Katsuki, if that was even possible. 𝐭 heard her son growl some name, and looked to see a video of the N2 hero playing, and frowned at the sight of him speaking rudely to the press. "Not a fan, are you?" asked the green-haired woman, amused at seeing her adorable son disliking a hero. It was almost comical. Izuku growled some more and nodded. "He's a despicable jerk who looks down on everyone, and is a total bastard to his fan." Izuku explained his reasons for hating 𝗵𝗲, and his mother nodded. "Well, maybe he'll get hurt by a villain and retires early with horrible wounds and a lost limb," his mom said with a smirk. And Izuku cackled. "When that happens, I'll throw a part," he said with a grin. After that, he started Googling some research on physical training for different ages, and he started looking between websites. It took some time, but he eventually found a site that describes the best routine for physical fitness for those who wish to be heroes, and Izuku grabbed his notebook. Then the boy started writing down every detail and information he might need. He also took the tips and advices some people wrote for others to read. The site seems to be a popular one because a lot of people put comments and tips in here. Not that he was complaining for the extra info, since it was helpful. He started making a schedule for the next few years, starting from when he wakes up to school hours and training hours, what he should eat, what he should drink, the TJPS of exercises for each day of the week, and some days off, since a retired pro said that overworking was more dangerous than not working at all, so he made sure to put on some days for rest. After he was done, he closed the PC, and to the game console his father sent from USA to him. Funny thing about divorce that the parents end up giving their child a lot of presents to make the change easier, and he was grateful for that. Izuku went to the TV on the living room and activated the console. It was a PS6, and it even had some famous games from USA, and it was hero games from comic characters. He started one of the games and watched. It was a game called Batman Arkham Knight. It was actually very famous in the West, so he was excited. He watched the game start, And as he started playing, he was getting more and more fascinated by the main character. He was quirkless just like him, and with just training and some gadgets he was able to run around the huge city of Gotham and fight criminals, monsters, and even supervillains. He lost track of time as he played. He also kept his notebook close to write down about the gadgets the vigilante used through the game. They were actually things that was possible to make, and not that fictional, so he was actually considering becoming like this character. The type of hero that makes criminals fear the dark streets, that makes people easy to sleep at night. That was more tempting the more he thought about it, since as quirkless, he wouldn't be able to just walk around on patrols. He wasn't some powerhouse like All Might, and didn't possess a destructive power like Endeavor. Then he realized something: he was neither of these two. He has to be his own hero. A hero that's like him, but still takes inspiration from his idols and role models. So with that thought, he decided to start learning everything about martial arts and support gear for heroes, so he can create his own gear and weapons for fighting crime. He was gently grabbed by the shoulder. He looked behind to see his mom looking at him sternly, and he realized that he played for a good time now. 2 hours passed by, and it was 10 p.m. As he prepared for bed, he had one thought in mind. Maybe he can be his own hero like the hero in the game. A hero whose name brings terror to the villains. He thought to hero costumes. He and Katsuki drew together and grinned. His name was going to be Rabbit Man, and he would become the most fearsome hero ever. He went to bed, and as his mom kissed him goodnight, he quickly fell asleep. That night he dreamed of being the strongest and scariest hero, and the whole city was safe as he was watching from a high rooftop in a dramatic pose. But his dream was cut short by his alarm clock. Stupid school. The fight, and in 𝐭𝐸's new job, Izuku was gathering his things after school. The last period has just ended, so he was preparing to leave the building. He put the last of his books in his backpack and pulled over his shoulder. He started walking to the door and noticed some kids looking at him with malice. Even at 7 years old, it seems that other kids are getting more aggressive and annoying. Well, I guess a bit more practice wouldn't hurt anyone. Well, not me anyway, Izuku thought cheerfully as he walked to the door. He exited, and the other kids started following him. Izuku rolled his eyes at how obvious they were. When following him, they weren't even quiet in their chase. Izuku pretended that he didn't notice them and walked outside of the school campus. He kept walking in the normal route to his home, so they wouldn't suspect anything. But he then turned into an alleyway and ran into it. Izuku heard the kids yelling at him to come back. Well, Katsuki and his 2 goons aren't with these guys. Shame, I wanted to fight Katsuki, but these 5 will do. Izuku stopped in the middle of the alley and turned to face the fools. So what do you want, morons? I think I made it clear in the past 3 years that I won't hesitate to pummel anyone who bothers me to the ground, said Izuku in a flat tone, his eyes narrowing at the 5 kids. One of the kids stepped ahead of the others and grinned. He was a boy with hair that seemed like a rock. You were annoying in class today with your muttering, Deku. And when I told you to shut up, you looked down on me. So we're here to remind you of your place, said the boy while punching his palm. Both his hands and arms turned to stone into the elbows. Great, another moron with a superiority complex. The other bullies followed the leader's example and activated their quirks. The boy in the left got his fingers turning sharp like claws. The one on the right had his jaw and teeth getting bigger and sharper. The other one behind seemed to have a water quirk, and the last had balls of light in his hands. Izuku looked at all of them and analyzed them and made a strategy. Then he smirked in confidence. Bring it on, yelled Izuku, and the leader did as told. With a battle cry, he charged at Izuku, who took a stance. Izuku had his fists on both of his sides and his knees were slightly bent down. The boss kid attacked with a left hook. Izuku dodged and grabbed his wrist and elbow with his hands. He used his momentum and pulled him in the air, then judo slammed him to the ground. The boy gasped and yelled in pain. But Izuku didn't give him time to recover as he punched the boy in the face as hard as possible, knocking him out. The other kids were startled, but the boy with claws attacked from behind. It would have been smart if he didn't yell out that he'll teach Izuku a lesson. Izuku grabbed the boy's wrists so he can't stab him, and then hit him with a headbutt. Not letting go, Izuku kept hitting the boy in the forehead until it started bleeding. Then he let go of his hands and punched him in the face, knocking the kid out. The boy with a huge jaw tried to bite Izuku. Are they trying to kill him? But he dodged. Izuku grabbed a plastic bag of trash and threw in the boy's mouth, then uppercut him and finished with a kick to its face. He was hit in the back, and he looked back to see the kid preparing another attack. But Izuku wasn't letting him. He grabbed his backpack and threw as hard as possible at the kid. Then, as he was stunned, Izuku ran to him and punched with all his might in the face, knocking him to the ground. Izuku grabbed his backpack and started walking away. But he took one last glance at the brats that were wailing in agony. This isn't over, the idiot boss groaned, but Izuku ignored him and left. He exited the alley and started walking home. He started to feel the aftermath of the fight. Now that the adrenaline worn off, he could feel his forehead burning from the repeated headbutts and his back was aching. But he won, and that's all that matters. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX. Izuku walked on the street into his home with a proud smile and his head held high. Some people looked at him with disgust because he was quirkless, but he was proud of it. He didn't care if people looked down on him for it. They weren't that special at all, and when he become a hero, he'll prove to everyone. He reached his house and pulled the keys. He unlocked the door and walked in. He heard his mom talking and someone laugh loudly, and he recognized the voice as Auntie Mitsuki's, and he smiled. He entered the living room to see his mom chatting with the Bakugos while Katsuki was playing with the PS6 the rude prick. "I'm home," Izuku said loudly, gaining everyone's attention. They looked at him and the Bakugos looked shocked at his state, while his mom looked exasperated. "What the hell happened to you, brat?" yelled Mitsuki, worried for him. "Were you attacked?" asked Uncle Masaru with concern, and Izuku shook his head. "Honey, can you please ignore the kids instead of fighting them?" said Inko, carrying a first aid kit that she probably prepared. "This happened before," yelled Mitsuki, and Inko sighed. "It's usual for him to fight other kids. He says that facing them is much better than running. This time it seems like he wasn't hurt much," said Inko. And he Bakugos looked stunned. Mitsuki crouched in front of Izuku with a frown. "You got into a fight because you seem hurt." Izuku nodded at his aunt and grinned. "You should see the other kids. I left the 5 of them wailing on the alley. It was great," he said, and Mitsuki cackled. "You fought 5 kids and won?" asked Masaru, and Izuku shrugged. "They were weak. I'd rather spar Katsuki any time of the day since he's a better fighter," Izuku said, and Katsuki scoffed. "Of course I'm better than them, nerd," said Katsuki, still watching the screen and playing. "Because you have guts and they don't. You also don't run away but fight head-on, so you're more fun," shrugged Izuku as his mom led him to the couch. "Now tell, how badly did you beat them?" said Inko with a teasing grin as she started treating his forehead, and Izuku nodded enthusiastically. He started telling what happened and the others listened to him. By the end of it they were amused. His aunt cackled while Katsuki snorted in sarcasm and Uncle seemed surprised. "So, cackles *. You beat them up and left them crying." Cackles *. Izuku shrugged. "Well, honey, I have some news for you," said Inko, and Izuku looked at her. "I'm going to model with your auntie as a part-time job, but I might take it as a career later," she explained, and Izuku smiled. "Makes sense. You're both beautiful, so it makes sense for you to model together," Izuku said. Into blushed, and Mitsuki ruffled his hair. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXX. He stood up and went beside Katsuki. He grabbed a controller and started playing with the blonde. "What are you doing?" asked the blonde, irritated, and Izuku hummed. "Playing with my PS6 with my guest," said Izuku flatly. They were playing a 2-player video game about knights and magicians. Even though they never got along, their team was never something to scoff at. They played for what seemed to be hours and ignored the 2 women discussing modeling with Masaru, as well as them changing and taking pictures every 10 minutes. "Sucks to model. You just keep changing clothes and taking damn pictures. Happy I'll be a hero," said Katsuki with a huff, and Izuku snorted. "Please don't jinx us, dude. They might drag us into it to piss you off," said Izuku, and Katsuki scoffed. "They can't make me do shit," said Katsuki, and Izuku raised a brow. "Even if mom gives you her, I am not mad, just disappointed look." "That's what I thought," said Izuku with a snort. Just then Mitsuki came to them with a grin neither of the boys liked. "Well, we have some clothes we'd like you try for the next set we're designing," said Mitsuki. And before either of the boys could escape, she grabbed them both and started dragging them to the homemade studio the adults made. "Let me go, old hag," yelled Katsuki as he struggled, but to no avail. "I told you jinxed us," said Izuku with a sigh. After that, the 2 boys were given a bunch of clothes to wear and take poses in front of the camera. Uncle Masaru complimented both of them, and the women gave few teasings about forgetting heroics and becoming models, but they both scoffed, and the fact that they agreed on something says a lot. They took a bunch of pictures, but they grew tired of the same process over and over, and eventually Katsuki snapped. "This no more pictures," yelled Katsuki, while tossing a leather jacket. "Yeah, I'm tired, and you won't convince us to do more," said Izuku crossed his arms. The women looked at each other with a smirk, and Masaru smiled at them. "Did we mention that you get paid by the hour?" asked Masaru with a smile. The boys looked at each other as they silently conversed. They signed after a minute of mute speaking and went back to work. By the end, they both were given 1,000 yen each, so they weren't complaining. After that, they had dinner together and chatted. While eating, the boys talked about school, and the adults made some comments and threw some jokes. The night was spent with a lot of fun, and by the time the Bakugos had to leave, it was around 9 p.m. "Goodbye, Inko-chan/Mitsuki-chan." The women hugged each other with smiles on their faces. The boys looked at each other with unreadable expressions for a minute, until Izuku broke the silence. Well, next time you guys come you better help me with the game, Izuku said, extending his hand to Katsuki to shake. After a few seconds the boy scoffed and shook it. Well, I'll help you because you can't do it yourself, nerd, said Katsuki as T walked out the door to the car and the parents followed. And with that an old friendship was slowly being rebuilt. Alder is doom, every single school had one. Someone at the top of the food chain. An acme. Someone who could do things under a teacher's nose, escape consequences, and terrify other people. Someone who looked down on everyone else like they were prey. An apex predator. And Izuku couldn't count on teachers and adults to protect anyone. Something Izuku had learned, the very hard way, was that there would always be someone who tried to put their boot on his throat. But he always fought back, and showed those who tried to put him down that he doesn't go down without a fight, and a very big set of painful injuries. Katsuki had always been that someone until they got a mutual respect for each other as rivals. Katsuki was always a lion stalking its prey and playing with its food. An apex predator. Izuku liked to think he had an upbeat view on life, and didn't hold a grudge, but he was still realistic. Izuku heard stories from his friends online with Katsuki, the ones he played games mostly army, cars, zombies and wars, and had a server for their multiplayer online games with. And the stories were always the same. Bullies were everywhere. And sure, heroes were great. Izuku loved heroes. But he also wasn't stupid. There were a lot of heroes, too many that were bullies. Endeavor. Not all heroes were good people like All Might or went out of their way to create programs to help their communities like Ingenium, or donated most of their pay to charity like Present Mike. It wasn't something he told anyone about or talked about. Why would he? It would only spread, slowly, and draw attention to him. Because people let little things slip accidentally, even if they didn't mean to. He decided to prey on Aldera and burn it to the ground, dance on its ash and scream to the heavens in joy. Not just his elementary school, but the entire district. And to do that he needs to get info. He needs evidence and resources as well as allies. And to get allies he already had an idea who to start with. So let me get this straight. Katsuki crossed his arms with his signature scowl. But it wasn't hostile but confused. You want my help in burning down our school and getting our teachers arrested. Not just our school, but the whole F** district. Did I get this clear? Izuku nodded and Katsuki sighed before grinning. I'm in, you damn nerd. Izuku smiled at that. Perfect, now he just has to plan this carefully. So what's your genius plan, nerd? Well, you might not know this, but you have quite a high place in our school's food chain. Terrorize other kids. The bad ones, to get evidence on each other. I'll get the dirt on teachers since I learned the basics of hacking a year ago. Why do you know how to hack? It's a funny story actually. It started when. Flashback. Izuku was outright fed up with easy school subjects. He was 5Y. Oh, it was too easy to understand, and he felt he was going too slowly for his liking. So he did the most responsible thing he could. He went to his mom and whined, moaned and sulked like a toddler and wailed for a solution. But his mom actually gave one. Mom, why is school too easy? Because you're too smart, honey. So why don't you do online courses? It's common for kids whose schools are too slow for them to do online schooling in their free time. So try it, sunshine. And Izuku did. He went and searched through websites until he found a site that was self-paced and didn't have an age requirement. He started using the site, and in a year he finished elementary school and went to junior high courses. He did the normal subjects, but he was intrigued by the extra courses. It offered also programming and electrical engineering, and he sighed for those courses. By the time he became 7, he already knew how to hack into police database and the city's security camera system. End flashback. Katsuki didn't know what to say to that, so he decided to just stick to the plan. And they did. In the remaining of the year, the two got a lot of work done in the Alder case, and it was a matter of time before the school knew the district fell. Izuku used his notebooks, but them alone simply wouldn't cut it. Not for the entire school. He'd started a habit of skulking around during lunch, going unnoticed, as usual, because he was very good at that after going through middle school with Kaken, taking note of the loudest people, and anyone who looked aggressive or people avoided. He ended up seeing some fairly interesting personalities, but nothing too bad yet. But he was sure he'd find something. There was always a king, a ringleader, a queen bee, an apex predator. Izuku had gained a lot of online friends through the games he picked. It was too simple to say, however, that he found others with useful skills just through games. He would inevitably start up conversations and enter servers with others, and talk about everything from quirks to who had the best cinnabons in town. As he hashed his way through the internet, he inevitably came across a few people who hacked their way instead. It wasn't always necessarily illegal activities. Some of his friends just used their skills to get better at their games. But still, he knew someone who could crack open a database or two. She went by the online name of 𝗵𝘃𝗶 𝗺𝗏. Izuku. didn't really quite understand the origin of that name. But it was very easy to remember. And she liked him. Apparently she was older. In a gap year older than him, and thought he was a cute little munchkin, and hunted down pretty much everything he asked for. She did say he asked for pretty weird things, but did it anyway. Still, he felt bad calling her anything with bitch in it. So she said he could use Himi as a nickname. Can you get me any middle school files for these students? Sure, kid. You stalking anyone? No, just making sure they aren't bullies. Fair enough. Can you look into someone for me? Just say what it is. Munchkin kid. She was busy, so she taught him the tools of the trade herself. He would need it for when she wasn't around. Izuku is a master at recognizing patterns, a skill he learned from games to get better scores and beat other players, and he does not like the pattern he found. Every investigation into 𝐲𝗪𝗓, which always have been dropped, had officially been settled out of court. What concerns Izuku is the law firm representing the 𝗲𝗪𝗓 district. Most of their clients were large corporations, like Feel Good Inc. How did a relatively small school district afford such good lawyers? No wonder none of the other schools had been able to touch 𝗲𝗪𝗓. After a long sessions of hacking with 𝗵𝘃𝗵𝗃 2.0, they were able to get a huge set of footage from previous years, and not this one. You ask why? Simple. If there's one thing Izuku and Katsuki liked, it was all might and crushing victories, so they had to get all they could get. There was evidence, so much evidence that Nezu could likely get 𝗲𝗪𝗓 Junior High shut down within the hour. But Izuku would never settle for a small victory in this case. Patience. Izuku takes a deep breath. Anger will only make him sloppy. As frustrating as it is, Izuku knows that this situation is delicate. If he acts carelessly, the 𝗲𝗪𝗓 district will burn the junior high to save the elementary and high school, or do the opposite if he goes to any other of them alone. He'll need a significant offense, preferably more than one, that would justify investigating the district itself, and not the school. Criminals are much like bugs, Izuku decides. The moment a threat presents itself, they scurry out of sight to continue another day. Izuku will not give them that other day. Currently, the 47th clip of a boy named Satomi Kaigo, a boy with a strong quirk called Iron Control, and Misashi Koro, a boy with a weak quirk that lets him see a bit further than normal people, played on his PC screen. And much like the previous 46 clips of these particular students, the moment Kaigo was anywhere near Koro, it ended. No one could deny that this footage was altered. But without the originals, Izuku wouldn't be able to properly bring Kaigo to heel. It was, however, another nail in 𝗲𝗪𝗓's sizable coffin. And Izuku was dying to be a grave digger today. It took him longer than he would like. But Izuku has almost catalogued every instance of altered footage. Not all of it was as blatant as the removal of every interaction between bullies and victims. Then he got a message from Katsuki. The evil grin that took on Izuku's face scared his mom to no end. His mom knew he was plotting something, but she never asked, so he was grateful that. Izuku looked at the evidence, and a message from his best friend/rival/partner in investigation told him he'll get the photos and other things tomorrow. Perfect. Now he only has to compile everything to one file and figure the deal with the legal team. Then it's game over for 𝗲𝗪𝗓. Some edits were more subtle, shifting the camera's focus away from incidents of bullying, or moving to obscure that a teacher had been present. Izuku sports a feral grin as he compiles the results of the investigation into an email to the Mustafu Department of Education. Izuku would prefer if everyone involved gets thrown in Tartarus, but he'll have to settle for letting the Ministry of Education and the police handle it from here. 𝐒𝐭𝐲 likes having the news on when Izuku is at school. It gives her some white noise, so she isn't alone in a silent apartment. We're low on milk too, she mutters, jotting it down on her grocery list when the current report catches her ear. Department of Education have closed the entire 𝗲𝗪𝗓 school district, pending further investigation of negligence, abuse, unlicensed quirk counselors, and encouraging illegal quirk use, among other crimes. The students have been let out early, with no word of where they'll attend in the meantime. 𝗵𝗃 fumbles for her phone. Mitsuki's phone buzzes on her desk. She yanks it and shoves it to her ear. Ifuku, I do not care that those colors aren't in season right now. They're what the client ordered for that dress, and they're what they'll get, got him it. There's silence over the line for a second. Then, Mitsuki. That's not the voice of her coworker. Maybe Into wants to do another photoshoot sessions together. That would be ideal. Yeah, she's still waiting for a response. 𝗵𝗃, I'm sorry, I thought never mind. What's wrong? Mitsuki, the 𝗲𝗪𝗓 was just shut down. Only years of living with slick sweat prevents Mitsuki from dropping her phone. XXXXXXXXXXXXXX 𝗲𝗪𝗓 Junior High shut down due to discrimination and villainy. Izuku had taken every bit of evidence Katsuki gave him, the bullies had given him, and compiled it together. It took some time, but he managed to secure the chance to present it all to the education board. All those photos, videos, and victim testimonies painted quite the unpleasant picture. That had been quite the meeting. Despite the pile of evidence, Izuku was certain it would take at least a month for the board to make their move. Instead, the school was raided by both cops and heroes within a few days. Izuku, Katsuki, and his along with the innocent kids, quietly moved aside as the teachers and principal and various bullies had been hauled out. Most of the bullies, such as Kaigo, were loaded onto a bus to be taken to juvenile detention, where they would be held until their respective trials. The principal and his fellow teachers were loaded into an armored car and taken to who knew where. The news reporter stood in the front courtyard of 𝐒𝐵𝐺𝐻 Junior High. Guilty students and staff were still being carted away, while the few not guilty teachers stood next to a group of students. The reporter took a few extra seconds to straighten her hair before looking at the camera. "Good afternoon," she announced to the cameraman. "Sakura Harami here, with the Musutafu News Network. We're here in front of 𝐒𝐵𝐺𝐻 Junior High. Mere hours ago, the HPSC launched a raid on the school. According to our sources, they were provided with information proving that much of the staff were terrorists, and at least half the students had committed various illegal acts. Around half a dozen of them were actually marked as juvenile villains and are being taken to an official penitentiary. Let's see if we can get some words from the students who brought this villainous activity to light." Harami and the cameraman moved towards the crowd, who noticed their arrival. The teachers initially moved between them and the students, but some of the students were too curious and leaned around the staff. Among them was a short boy with curly green hair and a blank expression. "Hey there," Harami greeted. "We're with the MNN, and we're wondering if any of you know how exactly this all happened." "I can answer that." The green boy raised his hand with a blonde boy standing beside him with a grin. "Oh, thank you. What's your name, kid?" "I'm Midoriya Izuku, and I guess you could say I'm the one who started all this." "Really? What happened was I got really tired of being assaulted and decided to do something about it. I knew all of the abusers had done illegal things usually when no one was looking, and knew if word got out, things wouldn't end well for them." "You compiled all the info the commission received?" Harami asked. "How did you accomplish that? And why was everyone attacking you?" "I'll answer that last question first," Izuku replied. "You see, miss, I'm quirkless. As such, everyone decided that meant I was worthless, useless, and existed only to be used and abused," Izuku explained. "It occurred to me these guys would do anything to put themselves in a better spot, or just survive someone's wrath, ma'am. That included betraying each other. So, I asked my friend who has a fearsome reputation in beating up bullies black and blue to help make them get the incriminating evidence on each other. Photos, audio files, anything they could get their hands on." Izuku explained, motioning to Katsuki, who was grinning ear to ear with pride. The blonde boy looked at the camera and said, "I'm gonna be a hero, so why not start catching villains already?" "So your friend used his reputation to make the bullies to gather intelligence on each other?" Harami asked, visibly impressed. "That is quite the feat." Nedzu watched and re-watched the interview multiple times ever since it premiered a few days ago. When he first watched it, he cackled like a maniac and likely scared most of the teachers in UA. Now he was down to a sinister chuckle. He listened to Izuku's testimony of what he did countless times. He was fascinated that a child, 8 years old, was capable of such cunning. Using his abusers' arrogance and greed against each other and adding threats and fear to the mix was something he himself had done to tear apart so many villain teams and criminal organizations. It was brilliant. Nedzu wanted him. Nedzu wanted this boy in his school. Very rarely did the mammal want something with such intensity. But first he had to deal with the funders of 𝐒𝐵𝐺𝐻's legal team, the boy mentioned in the email he sent him. The boy said that something shady was about it, and he was right. Thank you for the enlightening conversation. Harami nodded to Izuku. "Is there anything you'd like to say to the camera before we head out?" Izuku thought for a bit and looked at Katsuki, then shook his head. "I think we'll let our future actions do the talking. The shutdown of the MLA. Nedzu has just finished watching the news on 𝐒𝐵𝐺𝐻 and the legal state. The boy has got the evidence, but they might get away if he didn't ensure their defeat." Nedzu turns his attention back to his computer from his huge TV screen. While this opening move should be decisive, he doesn't want to risk any of the bugs escaping back to their nests. And that means ensuring their defeat in court. The worst thing that could happen now is acquittal. Unlikely, highly unlikely, but not impossible. And that means researching their lawyers. About an hour later, Nedzu knows the name of every damned fool who accepted the position to defend one of the 𝐒𝐵𝐺𝐻 monsters. Now that's strange. They all work for the same firm. But it isn't the firm I expected. 𝐒𝐵𝗃 demonstrated a disturbingly powerful legal team previously, the one that silenced every earlier inquiry as to why their students acted like entitled brats. A legal firm that specialized in defending the interests of major corporations. Why change things now? 𝗵𝗃 could tell at a glance that this new firm was odd. Practically a shell company when it opened. Now apparently a better legal team than 𝗒𝐵𝗃 had before. It takes another hour for 𝗵𝗃 to trace the payments and identify the owners of the new firm. Of course, he mutters. Of course it was you. And like a particularly gruesome puzzle piece sliding into place, every oddity about 𝗒𝐵𝗃 comes into focus in sickening clarity. The proximity to 𝐒𝐻𝐢 had not gone unnoticed by 𝗵𝗃. Though he had not found a connection at first, at closer inspection he saw it. The illegal quirk use was worrying, but 𝗵𝗃 mistook it as a symptom of the negligence and incompetence of the administration. The extreme quirk bias and quirk supremacist ideology amongst the staff had been the entire origin of the investigation. He should have known how deep it truly ran. But 𝗵𝗃 failed to grasp the situation for what it was at first look. He thought of 𝗒𝐵𝗃 as a school district corrupt from the top down. He was wrong. 𝗒𝐵𝗃 had never been a school. 𝗒𝐵𝗃 was an indoctrination facility. And the proof blinked back at him on his computer screen. 𝗵𝗃 learned a long time ago how to hide his emotions. It was a survival skill in the lab that experimented on him day in and day out. Hiding himself behind a mask of calm serenity was now a long-ingrained habit. Hiding anger was easy. It was much harder for him to hide wrath at the thought of children suffering because of the ideology of psychopaths. 𝗬𝗏, 𝗵𝗃 says into the phone, trembling in his fury. Be at 𝗬𝗏 once classes end. Is there something wrong? The symbol of peace asks cautiously, catching the edge to 𝗵𝗃's voice. I need you for a war meeting. When 𝗵𝗃 sent an alert to the teachers' group chat that there would be a war meeting after school, 𝗧𝗪 felt the ice creep up his spine. 𝗵𝗃 always made sure to refer to meetings as they were. In all his time there, 𝗧𝗪 had only attended a single war meeting, when a student had been attacked by a local gang. 𝗵𝗃 had organized the teachers into destroying the gang so thoroughly that within 18 hours of the meeting, the entire gang had been arrested, and several were catatonic. Those had been the poor bastards that 𝗵𝗃 had personally dealt with. He shuddered at the memory. 𝗧𝗪 is the last to arrive, as usual. He sits down at the conference table, noting that All Might is present in his skinny form. 𝗵𝗃 sits at the head of the table, ears pulled back and teeth visible. 𝗧𝗪 swallows. Now that we're all here, I can give the situation report. 𝗵𝗃 produces a folder and tosses it onto the table. 𝗧𝗪 catches the word 𝗳𝗏𝗏 on the cover. The situation is as follows. The 𝗒𝗵𝗃 school district is here in the heart of Mustafu to make it attractive to those aiming for here at 𝐒𝐲𝐢, the premier hero school in Japan. The district is, in fact, a scheme to produce pro-heroes who have certain beliefs, which they can then impress on the public. What beliefs are those? 𝗬𝗏 asks, looking troubled. Good. 𝗵𝗃 calling a war meeting meant troubling news. Beliefs, 𝗵𝗃 spits, agreeable to the revived Meta Liberation Army. XXXXXXXXXXXXXX. When 𝗵𝗃 sent an alert to the teachers' group chat that there would be a war meeting after school, 𝗧𝗪 felt the ice creep up his spine. 𝗵𝗃 always made sure to refer to meetings as they were. In all his time there, 𝗧𝗪 had only attended a single war meeting, when a student had been attacked by a local gang. 𝗵𝗃 had organized the teachers into destroying the gang so thoroughly that within 18 hours of the meeting, the entire gang had been arrested, and several were catatonic. Those had been the poor bastards that 𝗵𝗃 had personally dealt with. He shuddered at the memory. 𝗧𝗪 is the last to arrive, as usual. He sits down at the conference table, noting that All Might is present in his full glory. 𝗵𝗃 sits at the head of the table, ears pulled back and teeth visible. 𝗧𝗪 swallows. Now that we're all here, I can give the situation report. 𝗵𝗃 produces a folder and tosses it onto the table. 𝗧𝗪 catches the word 𝗳𝗏𝗏 on the cover. The situation is as follows. The 𝗒𝗵𝗃 school district is here in the heart of Mustafu to make it attractive to those aiming for here at 𝗬𝗢, the premier hero school in Japan. The district is, in fact, a scheme to produce pro-heroes who have certain beliefs, which they can then impress on the public. What beliefs are those? 𝗬𝗏 asks, looking troubled. Good. 𝗵𝗃 calling a war meeting meant troubling news. Beliefs, 𝗵𝗃 spits, agreeable to the revived Meta Liberation Army. A moment of silence hits the room. 𝗧𝗪 studies 𝗵𝗃 carefully, but he already knows what he'll find. 𝗵𝗃 isn't the type to make idle threats. He called this war meeting because he is already certain. The Meta Liberation Army, a stunned 𝗬𝗏𝗄 asks. That quirk supremacist movement? Weren't they disbanded decades ago? 𝗧𝗏's army was eventually defeated, and most of its members incarcerated. 𝗵𝗃 responds. Most of, says 𝗬𝗪. 𝗵𝗃 nods. Indeed, 𝗧𝗏 in fact had a son. A second wave of shock sweeps through the staff. It was the opinion of the government at the time that the child should not bear the sins of his father. 𝗵𝗃 pulls several papers out of the file he placed on the desk. As it turns out, a closer eye perhaps was warranted. The survivors of his father's army thought he should carry 𝗧𝗏's legacy instead. They raised 𝗧𝗏's son, 𝗧𝗏𝗃 𝗵𝗃𝗲, to lead a new meta-liberation army, one which he has raised in secret. And 𝗪𝗪? 𝗬𝗪 asks. As it turns out, the legal firm representing the 𝗪𝗪 staff is owned by the 𝗳𝗏𝗏 company, of which 𝗧𝗏𝗃 is the CEO. 𝗵𝗃 retrieves more papers from the file. There is also a tangible financial connection between each 𝗪𝗪 staff member and 𝗳𝗏𝗏. In other words, every member of staff is a member of this new MLA movement. It's a rather elegant plan. If they encounter students who have a reasonable chance at heroics, they groom the child to believe in MLA values. Meanwhile, the other students, when taken out of their influence, will feel oppressed when they are suddenly forced to follow public quirk use laws, likely finding their way to the MLA proper. A hollow silence fills the room, the implications settling. Young Midoriya, the quirkless child in 𝗪𝗪, All Might breathes in horror. Shit. All Might's right. A quirkless child with dreams of heroism surrounded by a quirk supremacist cult. 𝗬𝗪 sighs, retroactively impressed Midoriya managed as well as he had. How many? Asks Hisashi. 𝗵𝗃 grimaces. Based on what I could find tracing financial records? 40,000. Perhaps more. God damn it. 𝗬𝗪 runs a hand through his hair. Next to him, Hisashi's clenching his fists tight enough that his knuckles are completely white. All Might clenches his fists in rage. Kayama looks sick, and Kan isn't far behind her. 𝗵𝗃 smiles. Sometimes, 𝗬𝗪 forgets that 𝗵𝗃 is not only an animal, but an animal who has experienced some of the worst humanity has to offer. This smile reminds him. After all, we only need to worry about 𝗧𝗏𝗃 himself. His army isn't our problem. Excuse me? Kan voiced. We are heroes, Kan, not soldiers. We do not fight in wars, 𝗵𝗃 responds, his grin widening. We have a perfectly good military for that. XXXXXXXXXXXXXX. When 𝗵𝗃 presented his case to the government, he almost immediately received support from the Ministry of Intelligence to identify MLA members, a task he took to with gusto. Names, addresses, ages, blood type. 𝗵𝗃 found as much as he could on as many operatives as he could find. The operation was straightforward enough. Strike teams, with 2 heroes as backup as a precaution, would strike at meta-liberation army sympathizers across Japan in preparation for a final raid on 𝗧𝗏𝗃 himself. Nimiri stands next to Kan, both in costume. Across the street, the Japanese military ambushes a small pack of MLA forces attempting to reach the airport on foot. 𝗵𝗃 was right. They didn't even need us, Kan laughs, watching the soldiers subdue the last of the meta-liberation soldiers as they attempted to flee down the street. Probably for the best that way. Heroes are public servants. Using us in armed conflict would set a dangerous precedent, Nimiri replies. That might be an interesting topic of discussion for my art history classes. True enough. Kan turns. I just hope everything goes this smoothly, he said with a grin. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX. 𝗧𝗏 straightens his jacket. Over the past 48 hours, his meta-liberation army has been besieged. And for the life of him, he has no idea who is responsible. MLA cells around Japan suddenly went dark. Reports from his supporters in executive positions stopped. Some of his more high-profile allies dropped off the map. His pro-hero supporters had been called away by the HPSC, then vanished. Someone had hit him hard, and they hit him fast. Anyone sent to investigate never returned. Even Tomoyasu had vanished when he insisted on locating Hanabata. Too subtle for the Yakuza. Too quiet for the heroes. Too large-scale for a villain organization to go undetected. Government? Kazuki, what's our status? He asks. Of his top brass, only he and Kazuki remained. The 2 of them had gone to ground at the central tower of Deka City, along with 5,000 soldiers. They were now one of a handful of meta-liberation army forces he could account for. We lost communications with another cell, the Hasu branch. No response since. She bites her thumb. What could possibly be happening out there? What indeed, 𝗃 mutters. The thought that his dear comrades may be lost brings tears to his eye. A shrill alarm blares throughout the tower. His soldiers whirl, looking to identify the source of the commotion. Sir, Kazuki calls, leaning close at her computer screen, we have visual. Who is it? It's Kazuki's blue skin pales. It's the Japanese military, and with them is Endeavor and All Might. Oh, XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXNG scoffs, backhanding another so-called meta-liberation soldier. He had been called out to deal with this rabble. Xiaodo could easily have handled a force this pathetic. Another group charges out from the central tower. Most of them fall to the soldiers' gunfire. Allegedly, the guns weren't lethal, some prototype being developed as riot equipment. In practice, these whelps were being used as live fire test dummies. He doesn't particularly care. He never saw the point of letting a villain live to strike again. Another way he did a better job than that blonde oaf beside him. Take care of the fodder, he barks to All Might. I'll push through and take 𝗧𝗵𝗲. Endeavor, wait. The almighty idiot bellows, but Enji ignores him. He runs ahead, wreathing his right hand in flames. Once he's close enough to the approaching force, he slams his fist into the ground. Raging assault hell minefield. The ground erupts from underneath the meta-liberation soldiers. He smirks. With no time to evade, the enemies fly backwards from the blast. His opening created, Enji rushes forward, slamming a burning fist against the occasional enemy. Soon, he finds himself at the base of the central tower. Standing just outside is his target, 𝗧𝗵𝗲 𝗔𝗂𝗁. The CEO glares at Enji, but he refuses to be cowed by a mere insect. It's time I show that fool what a real hero looks like, Enji says, sliding into a battle stance. With your defeat, I begin the liberation of Japan. 𝗧𝗵𝗲 strides forward, loosening his tie. Enji shifts his weight, concentrating the flames on his hand. Flash fire fist jet burn. He punches forward, a burst of heat blasting forward and engulfing 𝗧𝗵𝗲. Enji keeps the fire going. Underestimating the leader of the revived meta-liberation army could get him killed. The seconds tick by, the roaring heat in front of him pressing his limits. Enji pants. Forcing a super move so far immediately after using his hell minefield pushed him further than he'd expected. No matter. He'd already won. The flames flicker and die, and Enji grins, expecting to see the down form of his opponent. Instead, he sees a monster. A black, hulking figure looking down his nose at him. 80% liberation. This is 80% of my stress made into physical power. Endeavor. Isn't it glorious? This is my meta ability. The monster swipes an arm at Enji, and he barely pulls himself out of the way. Physical force isn't going to slow this thing down. NHE launches dozens of small fire blasts at the transformed 𝗧𝗵𝗲. The muscle-bound man winces, and the fire burns through his clothes. But Enji can tell the man's quirk hasn't increased, only his offense. Probably resists just about everything like that. Damn. Enji ignites his flames again, but before he can react, a wave of flashing black overwhelms him. Stress output burden. The wave smashes into Enji, launching him back. He slams into the ground and bounces, rolling further and further away. His careening body smashes straight through wall after wall. He tries to use his fire as propulsion to stop himself, but as out of control as he is, it takes his all just to slow down. Finally, he tumbles to a stop against a wall, deep inside some office building. Enji struggles, pushing himself to his feet. But his body refuses, and he collapses once more. The last thing he sees before fading to black is the rebar sticking through his side. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX. All Might smacks another goon into a wall, eyeing him long enough to know he won't get back up. The ground rumbles, and he looks up in time to see a massive wave of black energy send Endeavor flying. From the corner of his eye, Toshinori sees the soldiers faltering behind him. There's a perfect pause, a moment of calm on the battlefield as everyone gawks. Then a cheer carries on the wind from the meta-liberation forces. Friends and comrades, the crowd cheers again, and Toshinori knows the voice. It's been featured in commercials for years now. 𝗧𝗵𝗲, Toshinori snarls. Forward steps a giant, bound in dark muscle. Toshinori can barely recognize the man he is here to defeat. We are on the back foot now, yes. But now, your Grand Commander 𝗬𝗏 has taken to the field himself. Do not lose heart, for this is the era of the meta-liberation army. In the name of my father and his ideals, our true freedom is at hand. Not so, Toshinori roars. Your freedom comes at the price of millions of children around Japan, discarded and destroyed because they have no value to your philosophy. He still sees young Midoriya wailing on a rooftop whenever he closes his eyes. Toshinori takes a step forward, bustling with energy. What would you know about that? 𝗧𝗵𝗲 snarls. Have you not heard of Aldera, friend? All Might calls. 𝗧𝗵𝗲's giant form stiffens. You claim to be for the freedom of quirks, and yet your followers allowed, no, encouraged the abuse of a child because he wasn't born to your standards. Yes, a quirkless child brought your crimes to light. Thanks him we can stop you terrorists. And in my eyes, he's a hero, and there's nothing you can do about it. Your creed is nothing more than an excuse to further your own power. No child will ever be hurt that way again. The fact an entire school district neglected their duty of care in favor of this man fills Toshinori with incandescent rage. He takes another step, and the meta-liberation soldiers step back. The tyranny of your so-called true freedom will never come to pass. Why? Toshinori launches himself forward, rearing back his fist as the goons between the two titans scramble out of the way. Because I am here. The N1 hero roared in rage as he charged. Izuku can't look away. Can't even blink as on the television in front of him, All Might trades blows with a towering mass of muscle. He called me a hero. He's fighting for me. Izuku swallows, tears pouring from his eyes as all of Japan is watching. It didn't take a genius to see that All Might was the one winning. He was brutally smashing Yotsubashi through buildings. Come on, All Might, he mumbles. I'll make tea, his mother declares, slipping off the couch and into the kitchen. Snacks please. It's more fun to watch All Might beating the hell out of someone while eating. Called Izuku out, got it. Katsuki grins savagely as he sees that long-nosed loser being thrashed around like a ragdoll. That's what you get for trying to make me your servant. 𝐵 All Might. The reporter, the extras on the field. Even his parents are acting like this is some big deal. All Might is the best of the best, so this is just a show. Until I surpass him. All Might would never lose to an extra like that. This fight is just a way to showcase how damn strong Katsuki is going to be someday. At least he will enjoy watching the villain getting smashed into next week. Rikiya Yotsubashi. Or do you prefer Ridestro? I guess it doesn't really matter in the long run. Your army is coming to its end today anyway. The symbol of peace spoke with barely contained anger. All those children that you've beaten, abused, and manipulated. All those people who've had their lives ruined by those following your twisted ideals. All the mutant quirked people you've manipulated into your army. And all the quirkless children you've pushed over the edge, just because they didn't fit your own values. All of that ends today. All Might stood tall, and Ridestro had to suppress a shiver when he realized the normally hammy #1 wasn't smiling. Because I am here. Ridestro grunted as another punch from All Might sent him back. So the commission sent their poster boy after us. How typical. The man grunted. The commission had nothing to do with this. All Might growled. The president doesn't even know what's going on. This was all the diet. Ridestro roared. 100% liberation. The behemoth charged at All Might, slamming his fist into the man's jaw and sending him flying. All Might landed onto the ground, coughing. So this is the absolute limit of your power. Yes, this is the true power of liberation. This is the power that will tear down this disgusting society, and I guess I was worried for nothing then. Yotsubashi blinked. Then his eyes widened in realization as All Might charged at him. Fuck. Was all he got to get out, before a flurry of fists struck him. He dug his heels into the ground, doing his best to outlast the symbol of peace. But it was all for naught as the man reared back. Detroit. All Might threw himself forward, slamming his fist into Ridestro's jaw, the large-nosed man seeing stars as he was sent flying into the remains of his tower. Smash! A large explosion of dust alerted most of the fighters to the scene. And it didn't take long for most of the MLA to realize that not only was All Might on the scene, but he had taken down their grand commander. Most of the MLA soldiers promptly surrendered, though a few kept fighting. Or tried to anyway. A battalion of fighters led by Trumpet quickly went up in flames once Endeavor had cooled down enough. All in all, it was the final end of the Meta-Liberation Army. And All Might is still standing. He raises a single fist and laughs, the sound echoing across Deka City. The soldiers raise their guns and cheer. The Meta-Liberation forces those that are still standing, that is, see their leader defeated and turn tail. Toshinori lets them. After all, there are only so many ways in and out of Deka. Their own defenses now trap them. The irony is hilarious indeed. Toshinori gives one last look at the ruins of Deka City as he was helping in the evacuation. The grave of Destro's ideals. The Meta-Liberation Army is no more. Toshinori gives one last look at the ruins of Deka City. The grave of Destro's ideals. The Meta-Liberation Army is no more. Izuku sips his tea carefully, his hands trembling. His mother pulls him into a hug, and he leans into it. He did that for me, Mom, he whispers. He did. You're worth saving. Izuku cries, but for the first time in years and years, it's from happiness. Ever since the whole ordeal with 𝗲𝗲𝗏 and the MLA, the country was in state of shock. It was terrifying for the public that some quick supremacist cult was hiding under everyone's nose on the form of a company that supposedly helps people in their everyday lives just to be the reason behind the discrimination in the society. It's been a month, and the media is still covering the news about the matter. It's rather surreal to be told you aren't going to school because all of your teachers were arrested. It's been a month since the police sent him home with the other students, and Department of Education is still tearing the 𝗲𝗏 district apart. Most of the district administration has either resigned, been arrested, or both. It was decided that since the teachers actively groomed students to act out, his classmates would not have any black marks in their records, but their turbulent histories were noted down for future schools to look through. Only the ones who committed acts beyond normal bullying were arrested for criminal acts. Schools could not officially refuse the 𝗲𝗏 students, but Izuku doubts many of his ex-classmates will enroll anywhere notable. Checking social media confirms that the 𝗲𝗏 scandal is national news, but Izuku doubts anyone in the prefecture hasn't heard about it. He's still adjusting, to be honest. This was something he was certain about. The sun rose in the east, All Might was number one, and quirkless people were as worthy of fair treatment as everyone else. And then when the police dragged his teachers of the district out of schools in handcuffs, he felt satisfaction. With school out, Izuku's spending time at home with his mother and doing online courses, which was better since he's close to finishing junior high now in the sight. The government had launched an open investigation on all the school districts to find all the other indoctrination facilities around the country, which, much to the public's horror, there was at least 2 facilities in each district. The Department of Education also gave the teachers a test that secretly tested if they would discriminate a student for his quirk or lack of, and the result was sickening. 47% of the teachers in the country were found to be the type to commit discrimination, if possible to get away with it. He talks to her about it over dinner that night. It's a hard conversation. His mother and the 𝗵𝘃𝗧 had met and talked the evening the news broke. Aunt Mitsuki and Uncle Masaru were proud of Katsuki for having Izuku's back, but he just waved off with the nerd would have screwed up without my help. But it was obvious he was happy with their accomplishment. Izuku was now going to use his free time to find and train in a dojo, since he no longer can depend on fending off bullies as training. And something he noticed in the past month were the looks of fear by his peers. He became the apex predator of this place. Only Katsuki rivaled him, and it was fine. "Hey Mom, I'm 𝗲𝗏𝗏, Izuku shouted as he entered the house. "Hey Izu? How was your day? Did you have fun in the beach?" 𝗏𝗏 asked her son in a testing manner. She found it weird that he goes to a beach full of trash, but he explained that he picks heavy objects to train different muscles. "Yeah, I found an old set of weights to use," he said, and 𝗏𝗏 noticed the box in the doorway. "All right Izuku, you should go get ready. We'll leave after we have lunch." "Okay, but before that," Izuku said before showing her a list of names. "You want me to help you pick out your hero name?" she asked. "Yeah," he said excitedly. "I can't decide which one I like most." Later they were going through some of his names. "Now let's see," 𝗏𝗏 said. "We got Mighty All Man, or Mighty Boy, or All Might Jr. "Yay, that's me," Izuku said as he raised his fist up. "Mighty Man, or Captain All Might," 𝗏𝗏 continued down the list. "Whoa, I like Super All Might." "Super," Izuku said. 𝗏𝗏 used her quirk to pull Izuku towards him as if he were flying. "Super," she said while Izuku giggled. Izuku and 𝗏𝗏 got into the car and drove off to the address in one of the pamphlets 𝗏𝗏 had kept on the car seat. The first one was a grand dojo, bigger than the Midoriya household itself. It had 3 floors and loud noises of shouting, and the breaking of wood and glass alike could be heard. Izuku looked in amazement. "Whoa," he said. He even saw a picture of All Might. Someone arrived in front of them. He then began singing Man Out of You by Milan in an attempt to get Izuku pumped. 𝗏𝗏 looked at the man with orange, as if something was wrong with him, and then chuckled. "So what brings you by, little broccoli dude?" he asked. Izuku pumped his fist in the air. "I'm here to work out so I can be a quirkless hero," Izuku answered proudly. Dojos were the best place to get a good workout. 𝗏𝗏 chuckled at her son's motivation. "That's a nice motivation you got there. You will surely be great at whatever you want to do. I can just see it." The name Ryujin Kendo. "That's a nice motivation you got there. You will surely be great at whatever you want to do. I can just see it." The name Ryujin. "I'm the master here." "Nice to meet you, little broccoli dude. We would be happy to have someone as motivated as you here." The man smiled. "Mom, can we join here? I like this place. I want to join here, please." Izuku asked his mom, who was going through the pamphlet she was given by Ryujin. 𝗏𝗏 smiled. Are you completely sure about this one, Izuku? This won't be the only dojo you join. She asked her son, who just nodded his head vigorously. Inko couldn't help but smile at his enthusiasm, even though there were other options they had. All right then, Mr. Ryujin, when can Izuku start his training? Inko asked the master. Well, anytime you like. He can start anytime this week, or he can start tomorrow. It's your wish, ma'am. Ryujin told Inko. Mom, can I start now? Izuku asked his mom. All right, Izuku. Mr. Ryujin Izuku will begin his training from now. How much and when should I pay for the classes? Ma'am, we can discuss this on a later date. Money is not my first priority. I won't ask for money till I believe Izuku has completed his journey as my mentee. Ryujin answered. Are you sure, sir? It doesn't feel right. You are teaching Izuku all your skills, and not paying you for your time doesn't feel right. Said Inko with a frown. Ma'am, as a teacher, all I need is the current generation to grow and become stronger heroes to fight the forces of evil. I am just doing this out of goodwill for the next generation, and not for money. Said the master, and Izuku cheered. Izuku had started his classes at the Reiken Dojo. His first lesson was a basic vocal exercise he had to perform. The exercise wasn't too hard for our little problem child, since he was used to intense workouts from his own training. After that, he started performing moves and katas with the other kids. The room was for kids between 7 to 11, so Izuku was with kids his age. He was finding the moves easy to mimic, and the master noted that they kept going like that, doing multiple moves and combos on wooden dummies, and Izuku appreciated having something to practice the more damaging takedowns he learned from video games, mostly Batman Arkham games, and practiced them until the master called out. Okay, Midoriya, I want you to spar one of the students. She's my daughter, actually. Her name's Itsuka, said the teacher, and Izuku beamed. I didn't have a nice fight in a while, exclaimed Izuku, and walked to the small arena in the middle of the room, and an orange-haired girl came in after him. I hope we have a good match, she bowed. Do you want me to go easy on you? She smiled, and Izuku grinned. Only if you won't lose. I'm very experienced in fighting, Izuku said, and took his normal stance since he wasn't used to the new moves yet, and Itsuka took the stance taught in the dojo. Both kids looked at each other. Ready? Start, called the master, and the kids charged at each other. Izuku went for a punch to the gut, but Itsuka grabbed his wrist and elbow with her hands and twisted his arm. But Izuku kicked her off before she could pin him to the ground. Thanks to his reflexes and years of fighting others, she recovered quickly and charged at him again, and Izuku had to admire that she didn't fall on her back like most kids would have. She went for a palm strike and moved a step back, then grabbed her arm and turned to judo throw her over his shoulder. But she kicked off of him and jumped back. Izuku followed her, and there were right hook quickly, but Itsuka blocked it with her arm and kicked him in the gut. Her kick hurt more than most people he fought, but he just grunted and grabbed her leg. Izuku threw her up and kicked her in the back. She fell to the ground but stood up just as Izuku went for a punch. She grabbed his fist in her hand and tossed him over her shoulder. Izuku stood up quickly just as Itsuka came for him. She went for a round kick which he blocked and countered with a punch she dodged. Itsuka tried to sweep his feet, but he jumped a couple steps back. She followed him. They kept trading blows, and it seemed like they were in a draw, and Izuku was nearing the edge of the ring. Itsuka went for a punch to the gut to push Izuku out of bounds. She expected him to dodge, but he took it head-on, which surprised her. Izuku grinned as he grabbed her forearm and elbow, and before she could react, he judo threw her over his shoulder and out of bounds. Izuku wins the match, called Ryujin, and everyone clapped for the two. Izuku helped Itsuka up, and they shook hands. Where did you learn fighting? You seem experienced, asked Itsuka, and Izuku shrugged. Nowhere. I'm used to fighting other kids. You get in trouble. No, it's trouble coming to me since I'm quirkless. Nobody tried to help you. Itsuka frowned in worry. I went to Aldera. Itsuka winced, and everyone hissed in sympathy. Well, I don't mind that you're quirkless. Wanna be friends? Itsuka beamed, and Izuku blushed and shook her hand. Katsuki was bored out of his mind. Ever since Aldera was shut down, he was doing online courses, which was boring as hell. The only thing he could do was hanging out with the nerd to play video games and doing modeling together, which was making it too good of a success, boring and annoying. The thing that sucked the most was that Aldera wasn't just some shady-ass school with the shitty quirkiest workers, but a 𝐹*ing facility for some quick supremacist cult or whatever. The bastards never saw Katsuki's potential. They just wanted him to follow their long-nosed leader, the fools, and the worst thing is that they tried to brainwash him into hating the nerd and seeing him as worthless, and they succeeded. But All Might said they were wrong. The best hero said they were wrong, and Katsuki believed him. He also in the past few years watched Deku Izuku turn from a weak little brat to a tough kid that beat up anyone that screwed with him, even older kids, and Katsuki respected that. And when he worked with Izuku to take down Aldera, he came to fear the nerd's mind. Izuku could be cruel and petty when he wanted, and Katsuki would never ever get on the nerd shit list, thank you so much. But he growing tired of staying home, so he signed for another school. And that's what led him to this moment. Katsuki was fixing his new uniform. In front of the mirror. It was his first day in his new school, and he wanted to stay out of trouble, or he might not be accepted into U. So he had to make some friends that he can stand and keep his grades up. That was the plan. He took a shower earlier and brushed his teeth, and went to have breakfast. After that he left the house and took the train. The school wasn't fancy, but was in a much better shape than 𝗲𝗏, so he wasn't complaining. Bakugo walked to the place in map where his class should be and opened the door and went in. All right, settle down. The teacher, Sakuchi-sensei, a woman with a small set of wings consisting of blue feathers, called, causing the class to quiet down. We have a new student joining us today. He transferred here from 𝗲𝗏. She nodded towards Bakugo. Please introduce yourself to the class. Bakugo stepped forward. My name is Katsuki Bakugo. And no, I'm not like the assholes from that shithole of school 𝗲𝗏. If any of you have any questions for Bakugo-kun, please ask them now. Fudakuchi-sensei stated. A girl with what looked like some kind of heteromorphic bird quirk raised her hand. Yes, Amara-san? What's your quirk? Asked the bird girl, and Bakugo rolled his eyes at the stupid question. Don't feel offended, she's a quirk enthusiast. She gets excited about every quirk she sees, said a girl with blonde hair that was floating in the air, and Bakugo thought of Izuku, so he decided to answer the question. My quirk is called explosions. I sweat a substance like nitroglycerin that I can ignite in my hands. The power varies from a small pop to a grenade, Katsuki explained. Whoa, that's so manly, exclaimed a boy with black hair and red eyes. Katsuki looked at the boy with a raised brow. He went and took a seat that was actually beside the boy. Yo, I'm Ijoro Kirishima. My quirk is hardening. It lets me harden the skin on my body to be harder than stone, said Kirishima as he hardened his fists and hit them together. Katsuki looked impressed, since the guy seems to be able to tank his explosions if trained hard enough. Hardhead kept making a conversation, and Katsuki tried to speak without snapping. The first day wasn't all that bad. He met a kid with potential who seems to be aiming for you. A 2, and he didn't snap at anyone even once, so it was a good day. Support gear. Izuku stretched, looking away from his computer. It's been 4 years since the downfall of the MLA, and a lot happened since then. With the arrest of 𝗲𝗏 and his followers, Japan has been far stricter with laws against discrimination. Not only against quirkless people, but those with quirks too. Mainly the people with weak, heteromorphic and villainous quirks too, after the expose of 𝗔𝗏 and the discovery of pro-heroes. That supports the MLA's ideals. The public lost a lot of faith in faith, which made the HPSC try to regain that trust by standing up for the discriminated and improving its image, resulting in people living a much happier life. And that all thanks to him and Katsuki. Their move on 𝗲𝗏 created a butterfly effect that resulted in the takedown of the MLA and crushing its ideals. Speaking of the blonde, in the past 4 years Katsuki has matured a bit and cut off his bratty attitude. Yes, he still snaps when ticked off, but the boy is nowhere near as aggressive as he used to be. He even befriended a couple of kids from his new school, and Izuku actually did like them. Unlike his past friends, his current friends weren't some lackeys that followed him around, but real friends. The type you could hang out and joke around with. And they saw for himself and not his quirk, which was a reason Katsuki tolerated them at first before he warmed up to them and accepted their friendship. All in all, everyone was happier in Japan since the fall out of 𝗲𝗏 and his followers. With that thought in mind, Izuku looked at his laptop and started his courses with a smile and a motivation. In the past few years, he proved to be much more intelligent than most people, much to his mother's pride. He graduated high school 2 years ago, and when he did, his mom filled the house with tears and the street got flooded. His and the Bakugos threw a party for him when that happened, and his aunt was filled with pride with his success. She bought him gifts and a big cake. Izuku insisted it wasn't necessary, but Auntie Mitsuki likes to spoil him, not that he complains, and his mom, Uncle Masaru, was as happy, and he bought Izuku a new modern phone since his was a bit old. Even Katsuki seemed proud and said, I'm bragging to everyone in school that my future partner is a genius, which in his manner of speaking means he was happy they were friends. After high school courses, Izuku moved to college, and his mom flooded the house again out of happiness and signed up for advanced programming, electrical engineering, and much to his delight, quark science. He already got a diploma in the first and second courses, but he was still learning about quark science since it was a vast field of knowledge, and Izuku found himself attracted to the subject. Katsuki joked, I'm in the kitchen. How was you courses, honey? He heard the voice of his mother yell from the direction she told him she was. He yelled back an acknowledgement and an assurance to her just before he went into the bathroom and closed the door behind him. He cleaned himself to go out, then went back to his room. It wasn't big nor small, and due to the discipline of conduct that was instilled in him by both his mother and his martial arts masters, it was very neat and organized. Not even the number of posters of his favorite heroes that littered the room gave his room a disorganized feel. Izuku left his notebooks and notes on courses on top of his desk, right next to his laptop, and put his phone to charge since he was going to need the extra power in it for the next few hours. He then took off his pajama and put in the basin that would indicate his mother that it needed washing. Not pausing for a second, Izuku went into his closet and pulled out one of the many sets of workout clothes he owned. Since it was the summer, he went with a sleeveless zip-up shirt that had a hoodie, running shorts and sneakers that went above his ankles. Izuku then exited his room and went to the kitchen, where he found his mother typing on her own laptop, while sitting in the kitchen table, documents arranged around her. After she got a considerable amount of money from her divorce, she looked into many investments plans she could follow in order to be able to provide for herself and her son without the aid of her ex-husband. It was even to that point that she didn't want him on their lives anymore. But Izuku still spoke to him on the phone sometimes, and his mother never minded since she didn't 𝐎𝐴𝐷𝐺𝐸 her husband, only felt lonely with him. Following those plans, she had been very successful, and she had enough money that she was never going to worry about it in the future, and she could spend a considerable amount of it on a whim without too much thought. And in any case, neither she or Izuku desired fancy things or a lavish lifestyle, and merely settled for buying things they needed and for their hobbies, which were collecting anything hero-related, video games, and a membership at the local gym for Izuku, and watching movies, reading books, and getting the latest clothes for 𝐭, which wasn't that hard considering her work with Auntie as a part-time model. Mitsuki always tried to attract her bestie to be a full-time model, but 𝐭 had other things like following her investigations, and Mitsuki was satisfied with the answer, and even asked for help to assist her and Masaru in management of business. Even though 𝐭 was far from vain, she was still a woman, and she liked to feel attractive, even though she didn't have a partner, nor interest in having one. It was the reason why she also had a membership at the local gym to which she frequented regularly. Because of that, 𝐭 had hardly changed in the past 10 years. Hell, if one asked someone that knew her from back there, they would say she had gotten even more beautiful with the years. "Hey Mom," he greeted casually as he made a beeline for the fridge, where he procured a special drink that had the electrolytes necessary for him to get the most of his exercises. As he prepared his drink, he nodded upwards in the direction of her laptop. "What are you working on over there?" 𝐭 waved one hand airily over her head. "Nothing much. I'm just comparing the income of Mitsuki's clothing shop from this year with the one from last year. I also need to check the current income and predictions of future incomes of the companies and business I have actions in, and that is going to take me what's rest of the afternoon, so that means we are probably going to have to order something for dinner." Izuku's eyes lit up. "Can we get katsudon from Moriyama's?" he asked hopefully. That was his favorite food, and Moriyama's had the best by far in the entire town. Also, it has been almost 2 weeks since he had any. He needed his fix ASAP. 𝐭 rolled her eyes with a snort of amusement. "Of course, we can, Izuku," she agreed easily. While she preferred curry, they had that a few days ago, and she had to admit that Moriyama's katsudon was divine. She peered at her son with curious eyes as he downed red drink that he claimed helped him with his exercises. "How was your day at school?" Izuku finished his drink, and he smacked his lips, enjoying the light flavor of strawberry of the drink he just drank. Quirk science is the best. I learned today about the mechanics of transformative type quirks," said Izuku excited, and 𝐭 giggled. "God, when you're back you can tell me, but slow down so I can keep up, okay?" 𝐭 told her sweet son cheerfully with a bit teasing. Izuku was her son, but whenever he talks about she feels dumb, and he has to go in a very slow pace for her to keep up. Like her son, 𝐭 took some courses online, but in business, and Izuku helped tutoring her, which was embarrassing in math, and she got a degree. Katsuki got into a fight with a boy with a strength quirk. Izuku sighed in exasperation. He did it for a good reason, to protect a girl that was being bullied in his school for having a weak quirk. I had to blackmail the bully's parents to not sue Katsuki for beating their brat to a pulp, and even had to cash some favors so he wouldn't get suspended. Izuku threw his up in exasperation. "Why can't he stay out of trouble?" Izuku yelled, and 𝐭 giggled. "That's because of the ridiculous number of hormones going through his body right now," she said offhandedly. When her answer was silence, she looked up to see the raised eyebrow that Izuku was giving her, and she snorted. "Don't even think of you comparing yourself to him on that matter. While you are the same age, the number of mental and control exercises you put yourself through every day make it only so your body is affected by those hormones. And don't let me get started on the effects of you working out. And with your fame as models, both you and Katsuki Ken will end up attracting all the girls in you. 𝐻𝐻𝐚𝐲 meant that. She might be his mother, but she wasn't afraid to admit that her son was attractive. Her friends never failed to mention it whenever they got together. She knew that he was going to have to beat off girls with a stick in the very near future. Izuku blushed at the pointed and appreciative look his mother gave him, and he coughed uncomfortably into his fist. Yeah. Okay. Speaking of working out. Next morning I'm going to up the intensity of my routine. I like to improve my routine every year to maximize the physical improvement without stunting my growth. 𝗵𝗃 chuckled and nodded in understanding. I'll make sure that all of your meals from Monday onwards complement your new routine. Knowing you, you are going to work in speed and strength, right? She asked, focusing back on her computer so she could make a reminder in effect to that. Yep, nodded Izuku. Thanks, Mom. You are the best. I'll see you when I come back from my camino, he said before wrapping an arm around his mother's head and bringing it into his hard stomach for a hug. She laughed as he did so, and she 𝐻𝗵𝗲 in happiness when he bent down to give her a kiss on the top of her head, and then she raised a brow at his destination. Why are you going to Camino, Izuku? Asked 𝗵𝗃, and Izuku shrugged with a grin. I got an internship request to give to a support company. If I do well, I'll get a job, and maybe they'll allow me to create some support items for myself. Izuku explained, excited, and 𝗵𝗃 giggled and nodded her head in acceptance. Izuku kissed her on top of her head again and walked back into his room in order to get his smartphone. He strapped his phone to his pocket, and he then stepped out of his house, stretched for a bit the moment he reached the streets, and started a slow jog after pulling the hood of his zip-up shirt over his XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX will take him to Camino. After the train ride, he exited the train and started his way to the company he was going to. Following the directions on his phone, Izuku drove the car to the downtown part of Camino, until he was directed into building. There was a large sign on the side of the building that spelled Hatsumi Industries, with an LED glow behind it. Izuku walked up to the desk and the woman asked, Did you have an appointment? I believe the name would be under Midoriya. They said to arrive whenever possible, Izuku said, unsure of what to say as no real plan had been made. So she was unsure if an official appointment had been made. The intern. If you could take the elevator to floor 6, you'll find Mr. and Mrs. Hatsumi waiting for you. But aren't you a little young, sweetie? The receptionist asked, and gesturing to the elevator that was to her right. Izuku just smiled. Actually, I have a degree in electrical engineering, so I'll be fine, Izuku thanked the woman, and then walked over to the elevator. After calling it down and riding it up to floor 6, the elevator dinged and the doors opened. Upon fully opening, he saw a man in a mechanic's clothes fully covered with grease. Izuku figured the man was working on a big machine or something. Izuku walked out of the elevator. Mr. Hatsumi noticed them and said, Midoriya. Glad you could come. I talked to you through the phone. In your request you asked to intern here, so you could build your own support gear, right? The hero scoffed, and Mr. 𝗧𝗵𝗲 turned his attention back to him. Oh, I'm sorry, Crimson Dynamo. We weren't expecting him so soon. Traffic must have been light. Crimson Dynamo huffed and looked at Izuku. He's your possible intern. Crimson Dynamo was a tall and muscular man. As he stood up, he was easily comparable to All Might, but not as big. So to him, Izuku looked like a little twig that would snap under his foot. More like a possible recruit. Mr. Hatsumi stated, writing something on the tablet, and then turning it off. He looked a little flustered, but quickly hid that with a smile as he put the tablet on the table. Whatever. Just make sure you fix my equipment as soon as possible. Crimson Dynamo stood up and walked to the elevator. He had to lean a bit to fit, then quickly closed the doors. Izuku looked back at Mr. Hatsumi. He has a rough personality, but he's a good man at heart. Mr. Hatsumi waved off their concerned looks, got into a fight with some thugs, and they managed to bust some of his armor. Mr. 𝗧𝗵𝗲 then dropped the piece of armor in his hand onto the table. More important is discussing the internship. Young Midoriya. Mr. 𝗧𝗵𝗲 pulled out his own tablet and turned it on. I used some connections to get a hold of your quirk file. Perks of being in the hero business. Mr. Hatsumi cleared his throat and then began reading Izuku's files. Izuku Midoriya, quirk. Quirkless. You wish to be a hero, right? Izuku nodded. Well, you'll need support items for that. Izuku nodded again. Do you have any ideas on what you want to make? Izuku grinned and gave the man some blueprints. Mr. Hatsumi scanned the blueprints with a raised brow and interest. A grapnel gun, glue grenades, explosive gel spray that detonates with a remote button on the spray, a gliding cape, projectile discs, and a cryptographic sequencer. You sure have a lot in mind, young man, said Mr. Hatsumi, impressed and surprised at the detailed design, and Izuku smiled at the man for not rejecting him for being quirkless. Yes, sir, I'll work for you. And if you hire me, you can cut the expense of my gadgets from my pay, since I don't really need it," explained Izuku, and the man chuckled. "Well, I know you got a degree, so you're hired as a part-time worker," said Mr. 𝗧𝗵𝗲. After that, they went to a place where Izuku would start his work. Izuku went to open the door until it exploded at his face. Izuku was thrown back. He looked to see a girl with pink dreadlocks on top of him. Izuku blushed and Mr. 𝗧𝗵𝗲 sighed. "May get off him please," said Mr. 𝗧𝗵𝗲, and the girl nodded. "Sorry about that. My baby exploded in my face," said the girl cheerfully, and Izuku looked at her baffled. "Your baby exploded?" Izuku asked, and Mr. 𝗧𝗵𝗲 laughed. "That's what my daughter calls her inventions," said Mr. 𝗧𝗵𝗲, and Izuku sighed in relief. May show inside and help get accustomed to the workshop. He's a new part-time worker. The girl nodded happily and dragged Izuku inside. Time skipped 2 years later. "Izuku, can I come in?" asked 𝐒𝐽𝐽 as she knocked on the door of the basement. Or what used to be a basement, since her son turned it into a small workshop, with many pieces he brought from his work, with a set of chemistry tools and chemicals for building his gadgets and weapons. "Come in," Izuku called from his workshop, and 𝗏𝗏 nodded to herself before opening the door and entering. Unlike most workshops, Izuku's was organized and clean, except the smell of chemicals from any grease or dirt, showing how well organized he was. "Hey Mom, you going to the photoshoot already?" asked Izuku as he was gracefully mixing chemicals, and 𝗏𝗏 nodded. "Yes, there isn't much work between me and Mitsuki-chan, so it shouldn't take long," Izuku nodded. "So what's wrong?" 𝗏𝗏 looked at her son with a frown. "Why don't you go for a run? You like to jog in the early mornings, or are you still bored because Itsuka's family moved? It's been a year now." It was true, the Kendo family left to another prefecture for business matters, and the dojo was closed, which is the reason Izuku has a membership in the local gym. 𝗏𝗏 looked at the device he was holding that looked like a grip machine. "And what are you making?" asked 𝗏𝗏, and her baby boy grinned with joy and excitement, making her smile. "It's called zipline cable. It basically should be able to shoot a cable ahead of me and behind me so I can zip line between buildings," he explained. "Should be. Well, I haven't finished it yet." "Oh, I see," 𝗏𝗏 nodded in understanding. She couldn't help but feel overwhelming pride at her son. She never brags to her friends, but she always feels proud of her son. In the past 10 years, her son turned from a small, shy kid to a strong, determined, and intelligent young man that was well respected and feared by his peers. "So I made you some juice before you go," said 𝗏𝗏 cheerfully, and Izuku smiled. Izuku went to the bathroom and took a quick shower, then changed into one of his many gym clothes sets that he had. He went downstairs and ate a small snack with his mother's special juice, then grabbed his phone and prepared to leave. "Don't forget your notebooks. You always come back to take them," 𝗏𝗏 called from the living room. Izuku turned back and ran to his room. He grabbed his My Hero analysis for the Future N15 and went back down. He has 28 notebooks, 15 for heroes. "Thanks for the reminder, Mom. You're the best," Izuku called as he ran out of the house. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXX. Rah! Hearing that sound, the boy turned to see a giant man with dreadlocks, a face with a shape that would make one think of a T-Rex, and clothes that pretty much screamed he was a thug had appeared by Tatooine Station out of nowhere. "Whoa, that's one huge villain," Midoriya said, looking excited. "Out of my way," the thug screamed. He swung his arm, causing bystanders who had begun watching the scene to gasp as debris to fall towards them. However, before it could land on and hurt anyone. "No, you don't," someone shouted. Rushing under the debris in question, a man held up his arms and then jumped to catch it. He had a square jaw which jut out a notable amount, small eyes, and short white hair that spiked out behind his head. His hero costume consisted of a cyan cardigan, which exposed his muscular chest and pectorals, dark blue pants with white stripes down each side, and plain black shoes. The real theme behind his outfit, however, came from the large headband with a yellow and black striped caution pattern, along with matching wrist guards and a belt around his waist, which had a square and a triangular decoration sitting in its center. "All right, way to go, Death Arms." A nearby police officer soon saw a rope of water pass by, with some parts of it taking a wheel shape with an X shape inside as another hero arrived. "Please, stay back. This area's far too dangerous," he warned. The man in question had a hero costume based on a firefighter, from the yellow jacket down to the red fireman hat, with his hero identity defined by the white mask, with a single orange bead embedded in the center. A thin cannon was strapped to his left shoulder and attached to a red water tank on his back, showing where the water from his quirk was coming from. "Whoa, the rescue specialist, Backdraft, is here. He'll keep us safe." Seeing the two heroes gathered before him, Izuku moved to the front and grabbed his notebook, taking out a notebook labeled Hero Notes V15 on it. As he opened it, preparing to write down anything he saw during this fight, another hero swooped in from overhead. 𝗵𝗲𝗄𝗎. Many girls squealed. The man they cheered for was shown to be a hero, whose costume was a dark blue bodysuit mixed with wood, along with a mask that made him look like a humanoid tree without any leaves attached to it. He jumped off a light post and jumped near the ledge of the tracks, making the villain swing one of his arms at him. 𝗵𝗲𝗄𝗎 was quick to dodge, making the villain growl and look towards him with a strong glare. "Get away!" the villain screamed. 𝗵𝗲𝗄𝗎 stretched out his arms, which began to stretch out. Using his quirk, he swung himself onto another part of the track and situated himself there for his next move. "Wow, he may be new, but he's already making a big name for himself," Izuku cheered. Writing notes quickly, the end of his pencil started smoking. A man standing by him with plus-shaped horns on his bald head let out a chuckle after hearing that, looking at Midoriya with a knowing expression. "That dopey grin is enough to tell me what you are. A fanboy," he stated. "Yeah. Sort of," Izuku admitted. "But I'm also going to be one, so I'm watching and learning." The seemed amused. "Shouldn't you be in school?" "Nah, I'm actually homeschooled and in college." Jumping ahead, 𝗵𝗄𝗎 stretched out his arm again to try and restrain one of the villain's arms, only for the thug to roar and toss him around before 𝗵𝗄𝗎 released his grip and fell onto the nearby terminal's rooftop. "Assault, robbery, and illegal use of your quirk during rush hour traffic. You are the incarnation of evil," he stated. Part of his arm stretched out, which made many recognize his next move. "Here comes his special move," Midoriya exclaimed, pointing towards him. "Lacquered chain prison." The villain soon felt his entire body constrained by wooden binds, seemingly defeating him, until his angry expression visibly strained itself to the point everyone saw him go from enraged to furious. "If that's how you want to play, then I'll break you, toothpick," he roared. His skin gained a red tint as his size grew even larger, and his eyes became fully white. 𝗵𝗄𝗎's eyes widened as the binds of his special move were ripped apart, and the villain threw a right hook towards him. Canyon Cannon. Only for something noticeably, but not that much larger, to kick him in the face, knocking the thug off the track as his size regressed. Midoriya and the man next to him, along with Death Arms and Backdraft, immediately turned to look at what 𝗵𝗄𝗎 himself was now staring at. "You he stuttered. Landing next to the villain, the giant object was revealed to be another hero. This one being a voluptuous young woman who had purple eyes with white pupils and long, creamy blonde hair that reached to her waist and two shorter strands that framed her face. Her costume, which easily showed off her curves and beauty, was a purple and pale tan-colored skin-tight bodysuit, which is accented with orange stripes. It was paired with purple gloves and boots that both cut off in a deep V shape by her elbows and thighs respectively. The suit's top also had 3 peculiar orange diamond-shaped dots under her chest, and a purple domino mask with protrusions shaped like ox horns on the sides. Money shot. Money shot. Money shot. Izuku turned as he heard multiple men with cameras repeated that while taking photos of the heroine, making shake his head in disappointment. Another fame-hungry fake endeavor, Captain Celebrity, and now this woman. Izuku scowled, and the man beside him who called him a fanboy frowned. "Not a fan of show-offs, huh?" The man flinched at Izuku's dark glare. "And that is how a new hero should make their debut," the heroine stated. She soon turned to the male crowd that was still taking pictures of her. "Hey there everyone, you can call me MT Lady, the world's next hottest hero," the newly revealed MT Lady greeted, winking at the end, and Izuku's eye twitched at her sentence. More men began taking pictures. 𝗵𝗄𝗎 continued. The police soon apprehended the villain, all while MT Lady stood beside him and waved to the crowd. This all happened while Izuku flipped through his notebook, showing a page for 𝗵𝗄𝗎 as he opened to a blank section and began sketching MT Lady onto it, soon followed by information. In no time at all, details on her quirk, her fighting style from what he saw, her strengths and possible weaknesses, had all added to its pages while he mumbled to himself. Her gigantification may or may not have a set limit. While she would be good for fighting larger villains or preventing the collapse of large structures such as buildings, she could easily cause damage if she isn't careful when she grows larger, or depending on how she navigates. Perhaps she'll see more work outside of cities. Midoriya continued thinking to himself. His mom helped him get out of the muttering habit, so he wasn't as weird anymore when writing notes XXXXXXXXXXXXXX in another part of the city, just a few hours after the scene above. The sound of a woman screaming was heard. From outside a store, a villain that was a walking mass of green slime with yellow eyes and teeth like a shark ran as the woman in question was guarded by her shield quirk. with her purse on the ground as money was shown to be stuck on parts of the villain's body. "Hey, get back here!" the store owner shouted, running outside. "Someone, help! That man robbed me!" the woman screamed. The villain laughed in response. "Both of you yell all you want, but this cash is mine now," he laughed. He then dove underneath a nearby sewer lid. "Dude, where are all the heroes?" "Someone should have been able to stop him before he ran off," someone asked. "Maybe they're all busy with paperwork from that scene this morning," another person suggested, shrugging slightly. At that moment, someone left a nearby market. "Remember when we didn't have to worry about randos with quirks all the time? Either way, I guess there's no stopping him now." The first person sighed. "Yes, there is." Hearing that voice, everyone turned around and then smiled at who they saw. "Because I am here." The one who spoke ran towards the sewer lid and dove in at lightning speed, with the villain immediately turning around to see who was chasing him. "Shit, gotta hide," the villain thought, turning as he tried to buy himself some time. Sometime later, Izuku had finished his training in the local gym and went through a short tunnel that had a sewer lid, which slowly began to rattle. "Huh," Midoriya blinked, turning around. Once he did, he quickly wished he hadn't. Rising from the gap between the lid and the surface, the sludge villain from earlier slowly reformed, making Midoriya's eyes widen and his face pale. The villain's eyes opened up as he saw the young boy before him. "A villain?" Izuku thought, regretting not bringing anything with him. "Yes, you'll make the perfect skin suit for me to hide in," the villain smirked. Izuku turned and started to run at top speed. The villain reacted only seconds later, moving 3 times as fast, and capturing him, but barely, since Izuku was very fast. The villain started forcing some of his slime down his mouth. Izuku's notebook fell out of his hands and clattered onto the ground as the villain began to cackle. "Oh, don't worry, kid. I'm just going to take over your body. It'll be easier for both of us if you stop struggling, since you won't feel anything soon enough," the villain stated. I can't breathe, and I can't pull him off," Midoriya thought, trying to claw off the villain in vain. Since the villain's body was made of a flexible sludge, it was like trying to grab a fluid. There was nothing he could do to escape on his own. Worse was, even if he could pull him off, Midoriya was already feeling himself getting weaker. "Thank you, kid. You're a real hero to me. Now I'll be able to get out of the city before he tracks me down," the sludge villain said, his eyes squinting in selfish joy. As he began to choke, Izuku growled in anger at this annoying slime villain. "This can't be the end. I won't die to this scumbag," Izuku thought, furious, as started to struggle even more, moving left and right, waving and swinging both his arms and legs. The sewer lid shot up, making the sludge villain pause, then slowly turn around before his eyes widened in horror. "No, he already found me," he panicked. "You don't need to worry anymore." The man who had been chasing him was crouched down from having just left the sewer, covering him in the tunnel's shadow. But then he stomped onto the ground and was slowly revealed by the light peeking through as he stood up straight. An incredibly large man with an equally muscular and well-defined physique that easily resembled the typical Western comic book superheroes of old. His hair was short and blonde in color, and swept backwards with 2 distinct tufts that stick up above his head, leaning slightly to each side like a giant V on his forehead. While his face had a bright smile and blue eyes that were unseen, due to being shadowed by his strong expression. Right now, he wasn't in his hero attire, wearing nothing more than a white shirt, green khakis, and plain brown shoes, while holding the same bag of groceries from earlier, though none of it reduced the awe he emitted. "Because I am here," All Might exclaimed. The sludge villain panicked and swung his arm like a sideways whip at the #1 hero, only for All Might to duck under it, and then dash towards him. The villain then tried again with his free arm. All Might stopped himself with his left foot at that moment before pivoting himself on his right, then threw back his right arm, Texas, which he immediately shot forward, creating wind pressure around the incoming punch. Smash! And slammed it right into the villain's arm. The sludge villain's eyes widened at the overwhelming power, which continued until it struck his own body and started to send his sludge flying. "I can't hold together," he grunted as panic surged through him. He let out a powerful scream as his body fully broke apart, which freed Izuku as he slowly began to fall towards the ground. For a brief moment, his blurred vision looked at All Might's heroic form, with his mind struggling to register the sight. Is that?" he mumbled. Right as he finished saying these words, he fell to the ground. Izuku sat up and started coughing until All Might came to his side. Izuku's eyes widened from the shock of seeing All Might, his idol, standing right before him, in the flesh. For a moment, he thought he might be dreaming, but the lingering pain in his throat acted as the wake-up pinch he would have otherwise given himself. All Might, he screamed in both shock and joy. Looks like you're moving around all right, All Might stated, relieved he rescued Midoriya without lasting injuries or worse. He let out a playful chuckle. Sorry about back there. I didn't mean to get you caught up in my justicing. Usually, I pay more attention to keeping bystanders safe, but it turns out this city's sewer system is pretty difficult to navigate. He apologized. He then let out a playful laugh, all while Izuku just stared with his pupils having turned into small spirals. Anyways, you were a big help. Thank you for keeping him busy with your struggling. All Might thanked him. He then held up a pair of cola bottles now containing the villain's slime, and presumably the bit that was what remained of his main body, which he had gathered while Izuku was coughing, but he wasn't finished, so Izuku helped him fill them. The evildoer has been captured, he continued. The most amazing hero in the entire world, All Might, is standing right before me. In the flesh, Izuku thought, feeling his mind racing 1,000 miles per second. As he watched All Might, who was still in his pose, the hero's shiny white teeth flashed. He looked so much cooler in person. His mind screamed loudly enough to wake the dead. Izuku started looking for his notebook. I have to get an autograph. Please, don't leave just yet. Let me just find my notebook and grab a pencil, said Izuku, excited. All Might held out his notebook to him. Oh, thank you, Izuku thanked him. He let out a scream as his eyes saw the next blank section he opened to, where All Might's autograph was already present. He even drew a picture his eyes and eyebrows next to it for added flair. This young man's notes on heroes are terrifying, but why does he look familiar? Thought the N1 hero in confusion. You already signed it, Izuku exclaimed happily, and immediately bowed his head to his idol, who chuckled in amusement. Thank you so much, Izuku said happily. All Might simply gave him a thumbs up in response. Welp, I've got to get this guy to the police so they can take care of him, so stay out of trouble, he stated, holding up a hand as his wave goodbye. Izuku gasped, realizing the chance he was about to lose. Hold on, just a second. I have a question I'd like to ask. He put his hand on All Might's shoulder at that moment, who then jumped right into the air, then screamed as he was forced to grab All Might's leg before he was slingshot across the sky. All Might soon felt the unexpected weight and saw Izuku holding onto his leg. Hey, what do you think you're doing? Let go. All Might shouted in shock. I can't. We're flying right now, so if I let go, I'll fall to the ground and die. Izuku replied, his eyelids and mouth flapping in the wind. All Might paused as he realized that. Oh, right. That's a good point, he said, slightly embarrassed. I didn't mean for this to happen. I wanted to ask you a question and tried putting my hand on your shoulder to ask you to wait. But then you jumped, Izuku apologized. Relax, it's fine. This mistake is on me. Now please, close your eyes and mouth until we land, All Might replied, feeling the liquids of both splashing onto him. Izuku gave a slight nod, then closed both. All right, now to find out, All Might thought. He soon felt an uncomfortable and unfortunately familiar sensation in his throat. Cough. He brought his hand to his throat, right before coughed out a bit of blood onto it. Shit, All Might thought worriedly. Their flight ended as All Might finally landed on a building rooftop with a door leading inside. Once Midoriya finally felt the lack of wind hitting him, he let go of All Might's leg and showed his face, which now looked like it had all the life sucked out of it. My whole life just flashed before my eyes, he mumbled while trembling. And that there is why heroes always keep the civilians who watch them fight villains in a safety area. Even though we may be heroes, we're just as capable of hurting people if we aren't careful with our quirks, All Might warned. Midoriya, who was still regaining his bearings, nodded in understanding. You said that you had a question, right? I'll let you ask it, but make it quick, All Might continued. Hearing that, Izuku snapped out of it, and then hit his chest to regain some of the air his lungs lost from all the screaming he did during the first part of the flight. All right, what I want to ask you is, he began. The words had trouble coming out, as he remembered some of the things that had been said to him by others as a child. Part of him was afraid the man would say no. If you have nothing to say, then I have to go now, All Might said, turning around. Is it possible to become a hero if I don't have a quirk? Izuku asked with a loud shout. At that moment, All Might, who had been ready to leave, froze in place as those words echoed through his ears, almost like they hit close to home, and he remembered the boy, young Midoriya from 𝐎𝐴LDRA. It's been years, so he didn't recognize the boy, and then there was a poof of steam, and All Might shrunk. Izuku looked to see a man that looked like a skeleton. Before Izuku could panic, the blonde hero explained everything about his injury, and the boy didn't seem as shocked as he should. So that's why your presence was getting more rare, muttered Izuku in disbelief. You knew something was off. I had my suspicions. All Might didn't know what to say to that. Yagi Toshinori, the symbol of peace, looks at the boy on the rooftop in front of him. A boy who just wants to save others. A boy without a quirk. A scrawny, untrained twig of a child. And Toshinori sees himself. He thinks back to his childhood, the pitying glances he received, and the laughter that accompanied discussion of his heroic aspirations. He thinks of how he never could have become a hero until Shimura Nana took a chance on him and offered him a sacred torch. He thinks of the monster who tore out his stomach and lung, of the gnarled flesh stretching across his side, where he's lifted his shirt to show the boy. And Toshinori knows what he should say. Without power can one become a hero? No, I should think not. It dies on his tongue. Minutes ago, he had seen the boy's tattered notebook, hero analysis for my future, scrawled on the cover. He had gone to sign it while waiting for the boy to awaken when the contents caught his eye. Each page detailed a hero, their quirk, fighting style, costume, equipment, everything you could possibly analyze. As All Might, Toshinori never needed much help with analysis. Few villains could rival One for All. Even so, Toshinori had seen the work of analysts before. Toshinori trained his body to compensate for his lack of quirk, a choice that served him well when he received One for All. This boy clearly trained his mind. Were the boy a few years older, his work would be called unfocused and amateurish. But for an untaught middle schooler, it was highly impressive. Untaught, huh? Thinks Toshinori. Don't I still have some paperwork to fill out with Nezu about my upcoming employment? Perhaps he would be interested. My boy, he says. What is your name? The boy's green eyes dart up to meet Toshinori's for a moment before darting away. It's, Midoriya Izuku. Young Midoriya's knuckles are white in his lap. Young Midoriya, you can be a hero. It's a short, simple phrase. It's all Toshinori wanted to hear growing up. And, seeing the tears flowing freely from the crouched child in front of him, he is not alone in that desire. Please, All Might, the boy chokes out. Don't lie to me. Please, tell me you mean it. Young Midoriya pulls his head up to look at him. Please don't just say what I want to hear. And doesn't that break Toshinori's jaded heart? Has the world grown so cruel that a child would think having his dream reaffirmed was a mere platitude? What symbol of peace allowed such a world? I mean what I say, young Midoriya. You said you wish to be a hero like me, who saves everyone with a fearless smile. Toshinori pauses. And you are mistaken. On 2 counts. He kneels in front of young Midoriya. The reason I smile as All Might is to stave off the overwhelming fear that comes with being a hero. You're afraid? Always, Toshinori nods. If not for myself, then for the civilians whose lives are in peril. Heroes risk their lives every day. My smile is not fearless at all, young Midoriya. But it is reassuring all the same, don't you think? He grins at the boy to prove his point. And despite being in his emaciated civilian form, it seems to cheer young Midoriya enough for him to return a wobbly smile of his own. And the other thing? You should not be a hero like me. Young Midoriya gasps inaudibly. Shakingly, the boy stands. I see, thank you, All Might. Young Midoriya turns to the door leading inside the building. Toshinori sighs quietly, ignoring the taste of blood. It would seem he was not delicate enough. The scorch marks and waterlogging on young Midoriya's prized notebook tell an unpleasant tale, and his reaction to reassurance wasn't much better. You should be a hero like you. Young Midoriya whirls so fast, he nearly falls over. Toshinori holds in a chuckle. Think of the other heroes, my boy. Is Endeavor a hero like me? Is Hawks best genist, perhaps? He walks to the trembling young man and gently squeezes his shoulder. No 2 heroes are alike. Do not think that being a hero means you must be the next me. Not that being me was enough against All for One. Being the #1 hero has put me on a pedestal. I am still but a man, young Midoriya. Learn from me. Take inspiration from me by all means. But do not try to be me. You will be a much greater hero as yourself than as an imitation. Young Midoriya's whole body is racked by his sobbing. Toshinori gently pulls the boy in, rubs circles on his back, lets him clutch at his chest, and tuck his face into his oversized shirt. Young Midoriya's breath hitches, but his eyes have dried. Toshinori's gentle reassurances have done their job, and he pushes himself away from the hero. I'm sorry about your shirt, he mumbles, wiping his face. Toshinori chuckles. Nonsense, my boy. What hero would I be if I could not comfort a child in front of me? He gives the boy a soft smile. This boy said himself that he wants to save others because he's picked on by his peers. He called saving others the greatest thing someone could do. And he was denied because he wasn't born right. Such pointless cruelty, hurting this boy for wanting to help others. Toshinori Yagi, the symbol of peace, thinks, but he won't be hurt again. Because I am here. Izuku walks home in a daze. He clutches his phone so tightly his knuckles are white. His vision focused on the screen where All Might is written above a phone number in his contact list. Holy shit. Not only did the All Might tell him that he could be a hero, but he complimented Izuku's analysis hobby. And he was apparently going to talk to Nezu, the principal of his dream school, about it, and then exchange numbers so he could schedule a meeting. Izuku had to be dreaming. He never woke up after the sludge villain nearly drowned him. There's no other explanation. A low booming sound drags him out of his thoughts. He pales. Izuku knows that sound well. Katsuki. Izuku darts down the street towards the explosions, turning a corner and nearly running smack into a crowd of gawking civilians. Izuku spots Mount Lady at the back. She can't control her gigantification enough to get through the buildings. Is that a limit of her quirk or her training? A pro hero whose weakness was allies. Incredible. He weaves through to find Kamui Woods and 𝗵𝗃𝗄𝗏 keeping civilians away from No, it can't be. Izuku instinctively covers his mouth, the feeling of suffocation fresh in his mind. Because the sludge villain that nearly killed him not an hour before is right there. And now he has Katsuki. This is my fault, Izuku says to himself. If I hadn't grabbed him, if I hadn't needed to ask, if I hadn't wasted his time. He said you could be a hero. Well, with the heroes on site as a comparison, it didn't seem that hard. Put on a costume and stand around doing nothing. Not the time. Izuku. Focus. What does he have on him? His pens would make for a weapon in a pinch. He could throw his bag or notebooks, but blunt force won't do much to the villain's body. Only the teeth and eyes look solid. Huh. That's an idea. Okay. This is the dumbest thing he'll ever do. My smile is not fearless at all. Izuku smiles. He pushes past the crowd, ignoring the heroes yelling at him, yanks his bag off his back, and hurriedly reaches around the front pocket for his pen. Izuku doubted he would get more than one shot at this, so he'd have to be closer. He was still 20 steps away. 15. It's that kid, the villain spits. 10 steps. Izuku, 5 steps. Now. Izuku flings the pen directly at the villain's exposed, solid eye peering out from above Kaken's ear. The villain roars and Izuku grabs Katsuki as the slime recedes. We're clear, he yells, dragging a sputtering Katsuki off to the side. Izuku glances back in time to see Kamui Woods' preemptive binding. Lacquered chain prison create a wooden cocoon around the villain. TCH. That won't hold the bastard with a body like that. Katsuki glares past Izuku at the villain. He can't fit his eyes or teeth through, though, Izuku mumbles, more out of habit than a desire to contradict the explosive blonde. Katsuki scoffs, but doesn't dispute him. The two sit there in silence until the paramedics arrive to check on them. There was absolutely no need for you to put yourself in danger, 𝗵𝗃𝗄𝗏 rants. Yesterday, Izuku would have apologized for getting in their way. Today, All Might told him he could be a hero. He watched as a gang of pro-heroes sat on their hands, and his adrenaline high hasn't waned yet. You're right, Izuku says, voice ice cold and stutter-free. I shouldn't have had to run in there at all. He narrows his eyebrows at the strong-armed hero. I threw a pen at the villain's eye. Why didn't you? There's enough rubble to use lying around. He turns to Kamui Woods. Why didn't such an up-and-coming hero think to move around the villain to where Kaken wasn't exploding? Or come from above? You could have pulled him out easily. Backdraft. Putting out the fires didn't matter because Kaken was making more. You should have focused on the villain to prevent more fires in the long run. Izuku sighs. He dusts off his pants as he stands, unable to see the look on Kaken's face. Mount Lady, if your quirk makes you too big to maneuver in streets like this, you should have learned how to evacuate citizens at your normal size. Izuku walks past them to where the paramedics are checking on Kaken to make sure nothing got in his lungs. Where are you going, kid? 𝗵𝗃𝗄𝗏 says. Seeing as this villain nearly drowned me, like half an hour ago, I'm getting myself checked out. Izuku is too busy shooting a glance at the heroes and misses Katsuki jerk at his words. Well, the paramedics think he'll be fine. Nothing got in either of their lungs, thank God. They gave him some antibiotics to be safe and told him to go to a hospital if he got sick. At least someone there was competent. So, for the third time today, Izuku is on his way home. Maybe this time he'll actually get there without, "Hey, Izuku," yelled Katsuki. "God damn it. That bastard. He really attacked you too?" Katsuki asks. Well, that's not what Izuku was expecting. "Yeah," Izuku says slowly. "Jumped me under a bridge. All a hero saved me." It's probably for the best that Katsuki never find out he met All Might. Katsuki scoffs. "Next time you try to save someone, make sure you got your equipment first. Auntie will kill us both if something happens to you," said Katsuki as he turned and stomped off. "A spirited young man," says a familiar voice behind Izuku. He turns to see All Might in his emaciated form. Izuku straightens, then bows. I'm sorry," he says. "If I hadn't grabbed you earlier, the villain never would have, and he got Kaken and I—" "No," says All Might sharply. He takes a breath and starts again, gentler. "I was careless. I was too focused on my time limit instead of securing the villain. Even if you hadn't hitched a ride, I would likely still have dropped the bottle. As I said, my boy, I am only human." Izuku flails his arms, trying to think of a rebuttal, because there's no way All Might made such a serious mistake. All Might raises a hand to stop him. "I was in the crowd, you know. My time limit was up. So I didn't act even though I told you pro heroes risk their lives every day. I'm just as bad as those heroes you chastised earlier." "Oh my god, I told off heroes on live TV," Izuku mutters. All Might laughs, but there's no malice. Most of the top heroes show signs of greatness, even as children. Many of them claim that their bodies simply moved before they could think. "That's what happened to you back there, yes." Izuku shakes his head rapidly. "Actually, I was thinking about what you said on the roof. About how your smile wasn't fearless. How you liked my analysis hobby. So I smiled and tried to analyze the situation." Izuku clenches his fists. And quirkless me saved someone's life. Today I wasn't a weak, worthless, pathetic Deku. I was a hero." He beams at All Might even through his tears. All Might smiles back. "You certainly were, my boy." Toshinori would offer him one for all. But not now. Not when this clearly means so much. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXX. Anyone who knew the Midoriyas knew that crying ran in the family. So it comes as no surprise to Izuku when his mother bursts into tears at the sight of him. He reassures her that he really is fine, going over what the paramedics instructed him for if he got sick. His mother listens along and suggests he stay home and not train tomorrow. Izuku doesn't need any convincing. Today has been exhausting, physically and emotionally. They sit down to dinner about an hour after he came home, and Izuku feels collected enough to talk about what happened. "I met All Might today." He takes a bite of katsudon. His mother's eyes widen. "I didn't see him on the news," she said, surprised. "It was before the villain got Katsuki. He attacked me first." Seeing his mother's alarm, Izuku raised his hand in a vain effort to wave off her worries. "It's fine. All Might saved me before anything could happen." Izuku smiled. He said I could be a hero." "Of course he did." Izuku's mother smiles sweetly. "How could anyone think otherwise?" She ruffles Izuku's wild green hair. "You're smart and kind. Of course he saw your potential." Izuku beams. "He wants me to meet Nezu, the principal of UA." Izuku hums in agreement. "He thinks he'll like my analysis." And isn't that a wild thought? All Might was impressed with his little hobby and thinks the world's smartest ferret, badger, chimera person would be too. Surely, he couldn't be that impressive since it was basic things from his online courses. His mother must notice something from his spiraling thoughts, because she gently runs a hand down his face and pulls him back to the present. "Your mind has always been your greatest weapon, Izuku. All Might has the experience to recognize it for what it is. And I'm certain Nezu will see it too." The corners of her mouth pull a little further up her face. "Do you have a time when you're supposed to meet him?" Izuku shakes his head. "All Might has my number though. He promised to let me know soon." Izuku explained and his mother nodded. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXX. "What a pleasant surprise, All Might," says Principal Nezu. "I expected you to put off your paperwork for another few months." Toshinori laughs awkwardly. "So did I, to be honest." Nezu waves him in, a cup of tea sitting at the empty seat across from Nezu's chair. Toshinori sits and cradles the teacup in his hands. Across the desk, Nezu happily sips from his own cup, ensuring the silence went on just long enough to be uncomfortable. "I actually wanted to discuss something with you." Toshinori breaks the silence. "Oh? The young boy you've chosen as your successor, yes?" Nezu grins. His reputation preceded him, and yet Toshinori is always surprised by just how much he knows. 𝗫𝗬 opens a file sitting out, and Toshinori recognizes the picture of young Midoriya on the first page. With his school uniform on, finding his information was child's play. Let's see. Name, Midoriya Izuku. Age 14. These records are from the end of last year, of course. Quirk, none. If he takes one for all, we'll have to change that at some point, but I can handle that paperwork. 𝗫𝗬 looks up. So, you've chosen an intelligent young man, whose bravery we have on record. 𝗫𝗬 tilts his head. What is this really about? All Might. He asked me if he could be a hero without a quirk. Having seen his analysis, I said yes. At the time, I had not chosen him to inherit one for all. I thought then that it might be beneficial to see if you would be able to help him with his analysis. And now, 𝗫𝗬 pauses for a moment. Did you offer him one for all yet? I planned to, right after he saved his classmate. When I caught up to him, he took great pride in being able to save the other boy without a quirk. I didn't want to imply that his achievement was lesser because of his quirk status. 𝗫𝗬 smiles. While you're here, you can finish your employment paperwork. Toshinori stifles a groan. A genius mentor and a prodigy student. It's Sunday, when 𝗬𝗧 has no classes, and Izuku has arrived at 𝗬𝗧 to meet with 𝗫𝗬 about Izuku's analysis notebooks, and to see how he should plan on his training for the remaining 10 months. Izuku stands awestruck outside the gates to 𝗬𝗧 High School. The main building dwarfs his apartment easily. 4 massive towers, one for heroics, support, management, and general education, connected to each other through sky bridges about halfway up. The result looks like an English letter H from every cardinal direction. This is his dream school. Now that Izuku thinks about it, it's also the only school he's planning on attending. Might be a good idea to have some backup schools when they reject him. Don't think like that, Izuku. You will get into 𝗬𝗧. All Might said he could be a hero, and Izuku believes him. It certainly is bigger in person, Izuku muttered in shock. You get used to it after a while, drawls a tired voice. Izuku jumps. Standing just inside the gate is a tired-looking man with unkempt black hair and dark, baggy clothes. A white scarf is loosely draped around his shoulders. An underground hero then. He seems familiar, but I don't recognize him. Izuku Midoriya, yes. Not waiting for confirmation, he pulls out a set of plastic cards and holds them out for Izuku to take. Guest pass. Izuku looks over the pass as he and his follows the hero into 𝗬𝗧. Holy shit. Izuku knows, logically, that there won't be many people here on Sunday, the one day 𝗬𝗧 takes off, but the halls still feel empty. At least it makes it easier to look around. The hero leads through the winding hallways to 𝗫𝗬's office. The rat's waiting for you, the hero says, gesturing to the imposing office door. Thank you for taking care of us, Izuku bows, and the hero huffs. It was only logical, Midoriya. The man nods, then turns and walks purposefully down the hallway. Izuku takes a breath and raises his hand to knock. The door swings open before his knuckles connect, and Izuku stumbles back in surprise. Not immediately seeing anyone, Izuku looks down and sees a grinning white animal in a suit. Am I a dog? Am I mouse? Am I bear? Who cares? I'm the principal of you. 𝗫𝗬 stands aside and holds the door open, gesturing. Would you two care for tea? That would be wonderful, thank you. Izuku follows the principal the room, taking stock of 𝗫𝗬's bookshelves and framed awards. The principal shuttled Izuku towards his desk, where 2 chairs sat across from 𝗫𝗬's own. As the boy took his seats, question. Why do you look so fidgety? To be fair, sir. It's you, sir. From my knowledge, you have a tendency to be completely unpredictable, even to people who've known you for years. So I have no idea how this meeting is going to go. 𝗫𝗬 promptly cackled. Well then, it seems I'm doing something right. The dog/bear/mouse, said amused Izuku, graciously accepted his teacup from the principal. From how warm it was, Izuku suspected it was fresh, though he didn't see where 𝗫𝗬 had prepared it. The person in question simply sipped his tea. All Might spoke highly of your analysis for the future notebook. May I? He asks. Izuku pulls the battered notebook out and placed it in 𝗫𝗬's expectant paw. 𝗫𝗬 handles the book carefully. His eyes dart around the page. I'm sure he was just being polite, Izuku mumbles. It's just a hobby, so I'm not that good. On the contrary, the fact that this is merely a hobby makes it all the more impressive, 𝗫𝗬 says. It's certainly more professional grade. I've seen quirk counselors with inferior analyses after being taught the subject. Said 𝗫𝗬, and Izuku perked up. What made you so interested in quirk analysis? Well, Izuku fidgets. Since I'll never get a quirk of my own, I thought I could make up for it by learning from how pro heroes use their quirks. Curiosity is a great thing. And you aren't wrong about learning from how established pro heroes operate. It would certainly be among the subjects I would like to teach you. A moment passes before the words process. Pardon, Izuku sputters. I am offering to tutor you in preparation for the UA entrance exams before and after you get in. I'm aware of your diplomas too. I appreciate the offer, 𝗵𝗃, sir. But I can't believe you'd. What'll you be teaching me, Izuku asks. What I'm offering is to nurture your analytical skills and your strategic mind, young man. I saw how you took down 𝗲𝗲 with nothing but intelligence and I laughed for days while watching the interview on the NNN. So what do you think? Asked the principal, already knowing the answer. Sir, you're one of the smartest beings in the world. I would be honored to become your personal student. Izuku finally replied, taking 𝗵𝗃's paw and shaking it. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX in an empty UA classroom. An ugly yellow sleeping bag shot up in a sudden panic. I can feel my sleeping hours, he teasing, said the man within the bag in horror. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXX in an undisclosed location. A quirk-loving man with no face suddenly shivered. I have a bad feeling about this. It feels like the devil himself is after me. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXX in the Endeavor Hero Agency. A large, flaming trash bin suddenly looked up from his paperwork in anxiety. Why do I hear boss music? He muttered in alarm, wiping a bit of cold sweat from his brow. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXX. In a Yakuza base, a brown-haired man with a mask that resembled a beak felt an impending doom nearing him. XXXXXXXXXXXXXX. Why me though? Asked Izuku. To be honest, it is because you remind me a lot of myself and my students. You are driven, intelligent, and observant. But you are also unsure of yourself. Afraid. I became principal of a hero school to help children who felt that way. So, I am offering to help you. 𝗵𝗃 smiled. One of our heroics teachers is currently bereft of classes and would be capable of physical training. Aizawa shouted. You met him at the gate. Ah, the man in the baggy clothes. Now I heard about your gear that you built. Can you tell me what you made so far? I took inspiration from a hero in a video game. Basically, I have a grapnel gun, glue grenades, explosive discs, electrical discs, a remote explosive gel spray, smoke pellets, and a gliding cape, said Izuku with stars in his eyes. The principal stayed silent for a few seconds before he chuckled. The chuckle turned into a loud cackle that disturbed Izuku. You truly are something, young man. 𝗵𝗃 was impressed with the kid's creativity. 𝗵𝗃 smiles. I do believe it is time for lunch. After that, Aizawa will begin your physical training. Izuku gets lunch rush's autograph that day. XXXXXXXXXXXXXX. Izuku fidgets in place. He's wearing workout clothes. 𝗵𝗃 suggested he bring some. Standing on the dirt field outside the physical education grounds on campus. Across from him is Eraserhead, or Mr. Aizawa as he requested to be addressed during training. Once you're done stretching, Mr. Aizawa says, I'll get a baseline for your capabilities. You'll be running through a handful of exercises like the ones you're supposed to do in your gym class. He's right. They are the exercises he's used to. 50-meter dash, grip strength, standing long jump, repeated side steps, ball throw, endurance run, seated toe touch, and sit-ups. Standard stuff, really. Izuku puts his best effort into the exercises, and he does an impressive show with all of his scores. Mr. Aizawa concurs. About excellent to above average on every test for your age group. Most hero hopefuls will have some level of physical training. If you don't want to be left behind, you'll need to stay better than them. Izuku nods, wiping water from his bottle off his lips. Mr. Aizawa grins, his mouth stretching ear to ear. Luckily, 10 months should be plenty of time for you to build some good habits on the ones you already have. 𝗵𝗃's already planning a daily workout routine for you to help get you in an even better shape. We'll be doing these tests again every week, in addition to sparring. Now, how well can you throw a punch? Very well, it turned out. It's a cycle after a while. Mr. Aizawa orders him to attack in some way, watches Izuku make a good strategy, and almost land a hit, but Aizawa dodges and corrects Izuku's mistake. By the end of it, Izuku is exhausted but beaming. Mr. Aizawa grunts at the end of the drills. Good effort for it today. We'll start sparring soon, but 𝗵𝗃 is including drills like this in your daily exercises. You have potential. Don't waste it. Izuku doesn't remember the last time he's cried tears of joy so much in one day. A week later. It's strange, being the age of a middle schooler and attending UA, even though he is in college and has 3 degrees. Occasionally one of the high school students stop and ask him if he's supposed to be here. Izuku does look his age. He ends up explaining that he meets with 𝗵𝗃 daily to 5 different students on his way to the office. Even so, Izuku wouldn't trade this opportunity to learn from 𝗫𝗠 for the world. "Good morning, Midoriya," 𝗫𝗠 says, opening his office door just before Izuku can knock. Izuku snorts, used to the principal's habits by now. "Good morning, sir. What are we doing today?" He slides into his chair, a cup of steaming tea already on the desk for him. 𝗫𝗠 turns his monitor so Izuku can see it. "Quirk analysis," he cheers. Izuku brightens. This is what got him this opportunity in the first place. "I'll be showing some archived footage of the some crime scenes and villain fights, and I want you to write down as much as you can about the different quirks you see." The principal pulls some blank paper from a drawer and hands it to Izuku. "Ready?" "Ready." 𝗫𝗠 taps his spacebar and the video plays. Izuku looks, and it's a mass battle. From the chaos that breaks out instantly, Izuku can see quirk use on other competitors was allowed. His eyes dart between the various competitors. The student in first has a flying quirk. No, he's got something under his arms. He's carrying himself. Telekinesis. Control of a specific material. That student, the one who keeps throwing rocks. It looks like trajectory manipulation. But he keeps hesitating. Trajectory prediction. That girl, anyone she touches freezes over. Where does the ice come from? The water in the air, or her own body? Izuku spots movement ahead of the crowd. His eyes snap ahead, but he can't see anyone. Except there. A ripple in the air, like heat. Too noticeable for invisibility. Camouflage? Izuku continues voicing his observations like that for the rest of the video until 𝗫𝗠 stops the video. "Most impressive, Midoriya. I only noticed a few quirks you were wrong about. That student you thought had a weak telepathy quirk in fact possesses a psychometry quirk, among a handful of other similar instances. Of course, by the entrance exam, I'll have you analyzing faster and more accurately." 𝗫𝗠 claps. "Now, how would you fight villains who use the quirks you've described?" Izuku sets a thumb to the corner of his mouth. "The easiest way to beat any of them is with an ambush. If I don't give them a chance to use their quirks, they don't matter. If I was forced into a direct fight, that would change things. The students with contact-based quirks, I'd target their hands. The metal manipulator, I'd try and rust or destroy the metal they brought with them. Maybe use electromagnets. The one who can predict how things move could be tricky. If I ambushed him from range, his quirk might alert him. So I'd need to attack from close range, or overwhelm him so it doesn't matter where he dodges." Izuku continues rattling off ways to counter the various quirks 𝗫𝗠 displayed for him, while the principal himself nodded along. "I am sure you have noticed I am a firm believer in hand-on experience," 𝗫𝗠 says when Izuku finishes. "So, now that you're warmed up, for your next assignment you will be solving a cold case." Izuku sputters while 𝗫𝗠 laughs, pulling a large manila folder out from a desk drawer. "Not a real cold case, of course. I have written up for you a simulated unsolved crime based on an actual incident that was recently resolved." He slides the folder to Izuku, who opens it cautiously. "Ready. Ready. Begin." You won't hear those vultures in the media discussing it, but one of the most important aspects of heroics is mobility, Mr. Krill, Aizawa says, leading Izuku towards ground beta, where Izuku sees modern buildings rise above the outer wall. "If you can't reach people in danger in time, you'll never be able to save them." Mr. Aizawa swipes his faculty ID on the scanner next to the massive gate. The door to the training ground swings wide, and Izuku sees just how large the simulated urban environment truly is. Whole city blocks stretch into the distance, office buildings, apartments, and skyscrapers lining the streets. For how detailed the buildings are, it's empty for a city. No buses, or bikes, or pedestrians. There aren't many quirks well suited to covering long distances quickly. Mr. Aizawa continues as Izuku follows him through the gate and into the grounds. "Most heroes have to find some other way to compensate. I use a mixture of Parker and my capture scarf." "So, you're going to be teaching me, Parker? I already know the basics. First, I'll be demonstrating. I won't have an amateur running around an actual city until I make sure you have the basics down." Aizawa runs at a wall, effortlessly stepping up the flat surface until he can reach a handhold and pull himself up. He springs upward to another handhold and again, jamming his scarf into the wall when he needs to, until he's on the building's roof. "Parker," Mr. Aizawa says, lowering himself back down with his capture scarf, is originally based on military obstacle course training before it expanded into a wider skill set. It is a way of seeing your environment in a different way and interacting with it to move from point A to point B as efficiently as possible. I don't teach freerunning here. Fancy flips look great on your own time, but they'll get you killed in the field. Thankfully you seem to know the basics, said Aizawa, seeing Izuku actually following him. Slower, but still following him. Later. I'm home. Izuku calls into the house. He's tired and aching but beaming. Welcome back, Izuku. Rest a little, we're going to the Kiyoshi Mall, his mother calls, and Izuku Nachimiko Toga. Izuku stared in fascination at the huge mall in front of him. The Kiyoshi Mall is easily one of the biggest malls in all of Japan. The mall was a huge open building with two sides separated in the middle, where people could hang out and shop. The mall was filled with shops of all kinds, from fashion to food service to arcades. Izuku walked with his mother looking around the shops. So Mom, are we going to see Katsuki and Auntie somewhere specific, or are we searching for them? Asked Izuku, and Inko smiled. Well, I'm going to meet Mitsuki in a tailor's shop. Katsuki is waiting for you in the arcade with his friends, explained Inko, and gave Izuku a curious look. Didn't you invite Kaminari-kun to join in the hangout? Izuku nodded. Kaminari is a boy he met in a small mall back in his town, and they became instant friends. The way they met was interesting. Flashback. A 13-year-old Izuku was passing by a local park, and he noticed a boy passing by him. He had a bright yellow hair with a lightning bolt mark on his hair. What caught his attention was that he holding the phone in his hand, and had the charger that's connected to the phone in his mouth. A bit of electricity was visible in his teeth. What an interesting quirk. Electricity quirks are usually the most versatile. I wonder how strong is it? Can he shoot outwards or maybe enhance his body with it? So many possibilities. The boy looked a bit weirded out, but not too much. Izuku face-palmed and looked at the blonde boy apologetically. I said that aloud, didn't I? The boy nodded hesitantly. Sorry if I creeped you out, I just like quirks a lot and feel curious about them. I'm Izuku Midoriya, by the way. The boy grinned and waved it off. Denki Kaminari's my name and no problem. I actually never thought of using my quirk that way before. You think you can help me with my quirk? Kaminari waved his hands frantically. You don't have to if you don't want to. Izuku smiled and gave thumbs up. I'd love that. Wanna be friends? Kaminari grinned. You bet. Let's go to the arcade. I know a close one not far from here. Kaminari dragged him to an arcade. Since then they started hanging out and Izuku helped Kaminari with both his quirk and studies. Flashback, and ever since then they started hanging out, they became best friends. Kaminari knows he's quirkless, but doesn't care. He even was one of the few people who believed Izuku can be a hero, and Izuku was very thankful for meeting the blonde. Izuku introduced Kaminari and Katsuki and his friends, and it went better than Izuku thought, and at that day they all became great friends even if Katsuki tried to deny it at first. Izuku walked on the way to the arcade shown on the map, until he heard someone calling him. Midabro. Over here. Izuku turned to see his friendly blonde friend. Izuku waved and Kaminari caught up to him. Izuku smiled, and they fist bumped. So Midabro, are we meeting Bakubro and the others? Yup, in the arcade. Cool. I wonder how are they doing? XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX Katsuki sighed, as he told his friends about how Izuku berated him for starting another fight in school. So you're telling me that after fighting a bunch of students, almost getting suspended, and getting home late, you didn't expect that your mom would be angry that Midabro would lose it? Kirishima asked. Kirishima Ijiro was one of few persons Katsuki could call a friend. After changing school he decided to be alone, and stay out of trouble. So he thought that if he didn't have friends, he will have the time to train with the nerd. But Kirishima had other plans. 2 days in his new school, and apparently Kirishima decided that they would be friends. At first Katsuki was reluctant, but pretty soon he understood that having Kirishima in his life was not a choice. So he went with the flow. And now here he was 6 years later with the best friend he could have asked for beside Izuku. If you say it like that, it sounds pretty dumb, Kirishima, Katsuki muttered angrily. Both were walking through the mall into the arcade. It is pretty dumb, Bakubro. What I don't understand is why the school didn't call your mom. I begged them not to. I actually begged. Imagine the ruckus my mom would do on the school. The principal's pride and dignity is still wounded from last time she came. Katsuki snapped, and the redhead chuckled. Well, I admire your skill, Bakubro. You have an amazing quirk and more flashy one, while mine is lame. Katsuki scowled, and smacked the redhead on his head. You'll be an amazing hero, shitty hair. Not like me, but good one. You don't need more flashiness to be one. And one simple fight won't put me ahead of you. Remember, I may become the best, but you will be the wall that protects them from harm. Kirishima grinned happily. In his mind he was grateful to have someone like Katsuki by his side. Someone that always reminded him what he could become. And above all, you'll protect your beautiful pink princess, right? Katsuki smirked smugly. Now Kirishima regretted ever meeting this mischievous blonde traitor. Putting Katsuki in a headlock, he started to mess with his hair, playfully getting revenge after Katsuki's remark. And at the same time trying to hide the bright blush on his face, but got hit hard on the ribs. I don't know what you're talking about. Your imagination is getting really out of control, you explosive blonde. He rubbed Katsuki's head and got hit on the ribs again. Oh, what do my yellow eyes see? A bully, stop that 𝐒𝐻𝐢𝐫. A pink blur appeared by their side, scolding Kirishima playfully that ended redder than before. Out of instinct, he lifted his arms in surrender. Shitty hair, you know how hard it is to control my hair, why would you do that? Katsuki scowled, then turned to greet the new person. 𝗓𝗏𝗄 from the other class on his year was the pink princess he was talking about, and the other person Katsuki considered a friend. She was the only girl that really approached him with the intention of friendship. Not saying anything about the rest of his classmates, all were really good people, but he never connected with anyone besides these two. Raccoon eyes, thank you for this vicious bully from my wrath, Katsuki said in a loud, smug voice. He really liked the personality of 𝗓𝗏𝗄. Someone that stopped the bullies every time she saw one. Was someone he was happy to have in his life and helped him out of trouble. No problem, Bakugo. That's the job a hero, she said, putting her hands on her hips, doing a hero pose. After all, you're seeing the next #1 hero in the world, Alien Queen. Are you still going for that name? I thought Midoribro made you change your mind, Kirishima said with a much less red face. Just a small blush dusting his cheeks. Well, Midori does put up some really good points. But I like the name, and when villains hear my name, they'll have so much fear that they'll surrender before my acid. Ashido exclaimed while making weird acid noises. I also tried to change her mind, Kirishima, but her head is harder than your quirk. I can only do much, and for the record, I'll be the next #1 hero in the world. The three friends keep walking to the arcade, bantering and laughing between each other when Kirishima looked at the gate with a raised brow. It's too crowded, he mumbled, and Katsuki scoffed, hey guys. The trio turned to see the two remaining members of the group running up to them. After a small greeting, they went inside and started playing multiple games. They won a bunch of tickets and used to get Ashido a stuffed animal, and SH gave each of the boys a kiss on the cheek. Kirishima almost fainted, and the 3 other boys burst in laughter as a thank you from her. After they were done playing, they went to a restaurant to eat and started chatting. They spoke about multiple topics. You say I'm antisocial nerd, you're literally interacting with much less people than me. Live a life and get a girlfriend, said Katsuki, smirking. The 2 other boys winced and Ashido giggled. Oh, if you know about girls, then what's the perfect partner for you? Katsuki smirked. Well, she must be a good fighter, cute, and have the ability to scare the shit out of people. Oh, and she must be hot as hell. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXX. Somewhere else, a girl with ash blonde hair tied in 2 messy buns and has yellow slitted eyes sneezed. Someone is talking about me? I hope I can stab them. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXX. The trio had a lot of fun, then decided to go meet up with the 2 mothers. I swear to God, Katsuki, it's like you do it on purpose, said Izuku. No, the extras in school are bullies and need to know their place, Katsuki argued. And I have to save you from being suspended or expelled, Izuku shot back. The other 3 watched the 2 bicker and sighed in amusement. What do you mean, save me? They both froze when a pair of arms wrapped around their shoulders. You 2 are really cute. A voice that was disturbingly cheerful to Izuku cooed. But you know what? I think you 2 would look even cuter covered in blood. This is why I hate malls. Izuku thought. XXXXXXXXXXXXXX. Himiko Toga. Izuku muttered. There was a gasp, and the arms around Izuku and Uraraka tightened. You know who I am. Toga's voice was giddy and cheerful. That makes me so happy. I think the police have been keeping my face out of the news, which is so mean. How am I going to give people my love if they don't know who I am? Midori, do you know her? Ashido asked nervously. Ashido, don't panic. But this girl is a serial killer. Ashido's face paled as Toga's arms tightened around them once more. Wah hey, that isn't fair. Toga whined before pushing them both, Izuku and Katsuki, away. I haven't killed anyone. Maybe the thought crossed my mind a few times. But I swear I only leave non-fatal wounds. Just enough to cover them in blood and get my fill. I don't know why the cops keep saying I'm a murderer. Izuku got a good look at her face and saw that she looked genuinely upset. She hasn't killed anyone. That's good, Izuku thought. Toga-san, a question. Do you really want to hurt us? I'm not hurting anyone, silly. I'm giving them all my love. She reached into her sleeve, pulling out a knife. I want to give you 2 all my love too. Katsuki prepared for a fight, and the other 3 looked pale. Nerd. The F*** are you doing? Katsuki barked. Why though? Why are you so insistent on giving people your love? Not everyone will want to love you back. Doesn't matter, she cooed. I'll be happy knowing that they know I love them. So this is how you tell people you love them. Your parents must find your methods very interesting. Izuku knew he had hit a sore spot when her cheerful grin became a grimace. He just needed to keep pushing. What's with that face, Toga-san? Haven't you given your parents your love too? Enough. Stop talking. What's wrong? It's just a simple question. Surely what your parents said on the news, after you attacked that boy in your school, was just a mean joke, right? Surely they don't truly think you're a monster. Nerd. Don't antagonize the serial killer, 𝐎𝐸𝐽𝐽𝐻 squeaked. She flinched when Toga jerked her knife threateningly. I told you I haven't killed anyone. Toga-san, your parents never loved you, did they? Because your quirk made you crave blood, right? So they forced you to suppress it and tried to make you normal, right? Shut up. How do you even know that? I know a lot of things, Toga-san. Things I probably shouldn't know. I have a tendency to stick my nose where it isn't needed. He leveled a flat stare at her. Have you ever heard of blood starvation, Toga-san? Her confused glare told him she hadn't. A lot of blood quirks alter their users' bodies in a way that they need a healthy diet of blood in order to remain healthy. Going long periods without consuming proper amounts of blood can lead to psychosis and a violent nature. That's what happened to you. Your parents forced you to neglect your body's needs, and it caused you to snap. Honestly, I'm impressed you managed to hold out for so many years, considering most victims of blood starvation go crazy within a year. Why are you telling me this? Because I want to help you, Toga-san. You may not realize it, but you're sick. I don't need help. I'm perfectly normal. Izuku noticed her shifting about to attack. Did you know that a lot of stores sell blood for people who need it in their diet? Your parents probably knew this, but never told you. You're a victim, Toga. That's why I want to help you. Nobody's ever tried to help you, have they? Not your parents, not your school, not your quirk counselor. I never had a quirk counselor. And that's another way your parents have harmed you. Quirk counseling is required by law, you know. So by not taking you to one, you weren't able to understand your quirk very well. I want to help you. I don't need help. She lunged at him, face contorted in anger as she swung her knife wildly, Ashido screaming as Izuku effortlessly dodged the strikes. Anger had made Toga sloppy. What's your problem, huh? Why are you so insistent on prying into my own matters, huh? Why do you even know so much about me? Izuku caught her arm, holding her still as Toga struggled. Because I care. Toga's expression turned from anger to shock as she stopped struggling. Your parents never cared for you. The people at your school couldn't see that you were suffering. You act like someone who enjoys hurting others for the sake of love. But deep down you're just a lonely, confused girl who was dealt a bad hand in life. That's why I want to help you, Toga. Because I've suffered too. I know what it's like. You don't know anything, Toga snapped, pulling out a second knife and trying to stab him with it. Izuku caught that hand too. I do. I'm quirkless. Toga froze, staring at him wide-eyed. For all my childhood, I was told I was worthless. I was bullied, abused, and cast aside for something I had absolutely no control over. Just like you were. That's why I want to save people who are suffering like I was. That's why I want to help you now. Because what kind of hero no? What kind of person would I be if I just stood by and let you suffer? You're not a monster. You're a human being who deserves better than what you were given. So please, Toga, let me save you. Toga stared at him, her eyes overflowing with emotions. Why you don't? Her eyes began to brim with tears as her knives clattered to the floor. Help me. Himiko whimpered. Don't worry, I will. Footsteps caught the three's attention as 𝐭 and Mitsuki finally appeared, looking confused. Did we miss something? Asked 𝐭. Izuku watched solemnly as Himiko was placed into the police car. 𝐭 and Mitsuki was in the process of herding the other kids home. Don't worry, I'll see what I can do about getting her help. Tsukachi explained. She's got no deaths under her belt, so she'll be just fine. She was adamant that she didn't kill anybody. Izuku explained. Excuse me, I have something to say. Katsuki began, before swatting Izuku on the back of the head. What were you thinking? Who the hell antagonizes a knife-wielding psychopath? Someone who knows there's hope for them. Izuku answered. Tsukachi nodded. Noble, but I wouldn't recommend doing that again. The detective stated. You're gonna end up getting yourself seriously hurt or turned to dust or something. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXX. A man in desperate need of lotion on his face sneezed, accidentally dusting his glass of cranberry juice in the process. That was my favorite glass. The walking cloud of mist tending the bar lamented. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX. But we'll definitely be pursuing her parents at the very least. He turned and walked off. Katsuki sighed. We should go find a train home before we have to test you for some kind of danger magnet quirk. Honestly, with all the stuff I go through, it wouldn't be that surprising. Izuku mused. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX. Toshinori sighed as he walked up to Tsukachi, having just heard about the mall incident. Honestly, I'm starting to wonder if young Midoriya has some kind of danger magnet quirk we don't know about. Maybe so. 𝗧𝗏𝗄𝐻 chuckled. Need anything, Toshinori? Young Midoriya is plotting the downfall of the Togas, the detective paled. So we better get them first before he does anything extreme. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX. Luckily, it took the effort of, but Toshinori helped to calm her down, who had accompanied Izuku and 𝗵𝗃 home. Still, 𝗵𝗃 strictly forbade Izuku from training for a week and a half to make sure he would recover before treating them all to a home-cooked meal. Toshinori couldn't help but glance at 𝗵𝗃 more than once. She really did look like his old master. She's truly beautiful, Toshinori simulated before slapping his forehead at the thought the two adults got along, and 𝗵𝗃 actually started flirting, much to Izuku's displeasure with Toshinori, and he almost got a heart attack. But as the night progressed, the two got along more and more. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX. I'm always amazed by how fast you can arrange these things, Yagi, Toshinori says. 𝗧𝗏𝗄𝐻 looks up from his phone to smile mischievously at him. If you want to make it up to me, you can try filing some of your own reports for a change, he says. Now that's not fair, Toshinori says. I've been handling young Himiko's case by the book, and you know it. The two of them are in the back of a nondescript van. Toshinori bulked up into his All Might form. 𝗧𝗏𝗄𝐻 meanwhile has long finished setting up all of the equipment hidden in this back part of the vehicle. You always had a bleeding heart for kids, 𝗧𝗏𝗄𝐻 says fondly. He pats Toshinori firmly on the back. I've just gotten all the confirmation we need. If they were willing to say that. 𝗧𝗏𝗄𝐻's face shrivels in disgust. That bullshit about their daughter to the press. They'll probably throw themselves at your feet and assume you're on their side. Toshinori shudders at the mere thought of being the kind of person who would treat a child the way those despicable people have. Fortunately, his long career has given him a decent poker face when it counts. He'll restrain himself, and he'll do this right, no matter how much he wants to Texas smash the smug looks off their faces. The Togas may not be legally villains, but it's rare for criminals to incur such wrath from him. Perhaps 𝗧𝗏𝗄𝐻 has a point about him and children. Everything's ready, 𝗧𝗏𝗄𝐻 says. All Might takes a steadying breath, steps down out of the van, which shifts without his weight pressing it down, and strides with purpose to the front door of the Toga estate. The conspicuous wealth on display makes his blood boil. They clearly had the funds necessary to secure the necessary provisions for their daughter, and chose not to. He knocks, once, twice, 3 times, careful not to shatter the door. As it is, the door rattles in its frame enough that someone who isn't used to his control over his strength might worry. Exactly 74 seconds later, the door opens, revealing a sleazy-looking man in an equally sleazy suit, poorly fitting beneath the various pins and cufflinks. All Might, says Mr. Toga. What a surprise. To what do I owe this honor? I am here to speak with you regarding your daughter, he says, keeping his voice even. Mr. Toga rolls his eyes. That thing is no daughter of mine. Come in, come in. Toshinori nods, stepping through the doorway, his large size blocking out the early morning sunlight. Strikes 1 and 2 in a single moment. He's almost impressed. I can't imagine what went wrong with her, Mr. Toga continues, leading Toshinori down the hall towards a sitting room. We were so careful to ensure we had a proper child. Not that, demon. Toshinori forces himself to unclench his hands. So you didn't feed her any blood? Heavens no. We wanted a child, not some blood-crazed hellspawn. Disgusting wretch. She should have listened when I told her to throw the thing out, or better yet smother her, prevented this whole mess. Toshinori has lost count of how many strikes he has against this man and his wife. But he isn't going to put up with another minute of this drivel. He reaches for his hidden earpiece, disguising his push of a button with him fixing a loose strand of hair. Seconds later, there's another knock at the door, just as fierce as Toshinori's. This is the police, someone says. We have a warrant, Mr. Toga startles, paling. He turns to Toshinori with confusion in his eyes. You, sir, Toshinori says, no longer hiding his venom, have confessed to me multiple forms of child neglect and abuse, including knowingly starving your daughter. All of which has been recorded. I suggest you come quietly. Mr. Toga opens his mouth weakly, but under Toshinori's glare, he closes it again in a shocking display of self-preservation. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXX. The first thing Himiko noticed when she came to was how clear her mind was. She vaguely remembered the graduation ceremony, but her head had been killing her for months by then, and everything after that is fogged over. She thinks she remembers Sato covered in blood somehow. Then just flashes of blurry city streets. The last thing she remembered was the red man who smelled like blood, and the pretty woman he was with. She wondered if they were all right. If her head was clear, that meant she must have taken blood again, and she doubted it was a bird this time. Then she noticed she was lying in a bed. Not a great bed, but better than wherever she'd been before, she was sure. There's something beeping off to her side. Everything smelled like the nurse's office. Wait. Himiko looked around properly. She was in a hospital. A hospital. She must have been caught. Now they were going to throw her in jail forever. Like her parents said she deserved. That's fine. She was tired of pretending to be like other people. She can live a normal life on 𝐒𝐴𝐲𝐽. Thank you very much. She reached for the Roman 4 in her arm when the door opened. I wouldn't touch those, said the man in red as a doctor followed him into the room. You're still pretty malnourished. You need those. So, whoever she fed on wasn't that guy then. Himiko moved her hand away from the tubes. Now that the fog in her head has let up, she recognized his outfit as a hero costume. She wasn't going anywhere while he's watching her. Oh Himiko, did you attack a pro hero? Monster freak, and every other snide remark her parents ever made bounced around Himiko's skull. This is it. She's going to jail. No, Tartarus. Are you feeling better? The hero asked. What a stupid question. It doesn't matter how she feels. Apparently, the hero could see some of that in her face because he sighs. I should introduce myself. I'm Ken Sekijiro, the pro hero Vlad King. He took a seat in the chair beside Himiko's bed. My quirk is called blood control. Himiko's eyes widen. That'swy, he smelled like blood. I got a lot of grief for my quirk growing up. Now that I'm a hero, I try and find kids who are going through what I went through so I can help them. Himiko couldn't help it. She scoffed. Mr. Ken raised an eyebrow. No one wants to help me, Himiko explained quietly. I want blood. I want other people's blood. I want to see people covered in their blood. I don't want to be helped. I don't want to be normal. I'm sick of pretending. Silence hung in the air between them. Normal is pretty subjective, Mr. Ken said at last. That's not what Himiko expected. And you never got a chance to find your normal what? She'd been normal since her quirk came in and her parents told her how to act, to behave. You've been forcibly suppressing your own quirk, and the parts of your biology it affects, Mr. Ken said. That method of quirk control was outlawed decades ago. It just makes things worse. Your urges, for instance. They're probably more extreme because you've been denying them. What? Mr. Ken wasn't serious, was he? Then, just when Himiko was certain her day couldn't get stranger, the doctor produced a vial of blood and handed it to her. Then, just when Himiko was certain her day couldn't get stranger, the doctor produced a vial of blood and handed it to her. Drink slowly, the doctor said. Too fast and you'll end up throwing it up again. They actually wanted her to drink blood. No, this had to be a trick. And then they would call her a demon child and throw her away. But that blood did look tasty. And if they were going to lock her up anyway, what's the harm? Himiko took the vial and stuck her fangs on it slowly. The blood started being sucked, keeping her eyes on the hero and the doctor. Good, the doctor said, surprised by her way of ingesting blood, but didn't comment. We'll be giving you some blood with every meal for the time being. Once you're no longer starved of the stuff, we'll slow down your intake to once a day. I'll look into getting you some blood-based foods as well. Blood-based foods? Himiko hadn't heard of those. The doctor nodded. There are a handful of options for people who need to regularly consume blood for their quirk. The most popular is protein bars made with blood. But Himiko tried to articulate the storm she's feeling. How everything that's happened since she woke up hadn't made sense. Toga, the hero said. All Might had your parents arrested. She gasped. Like I said, forcing someone to suppress their quirk is illegal. And just based on how they talked about you, I could tell they weren't good parents to you. He slowly moved his hand onto her shoulder, telegraphing his movements. She managed not to flinch, but just barely. What they did to you was wrong, and me and the doctors here do care about you. We aren't going to throw you away because of your quirk. Himiko doesn't say anything. She never dreamed something like this would happen to her. That was 2 weeks ago, and now she was going with Mr. Ken, who said he'll foster her for some time. It was hard to believe, but for once she felt safe. She didn't remember much after the graduation ceremony, until meeting the green-haired boy and that handsome, scowling blonde. Wait, handsome. 10 Months of Hell Part 1. It's strange. Being the only middle school student learning at 𝐸𝐴. Occasionally one of the high school students stop and ask him if he's supposed to be here. Izuku does look his age. He ends up explaining that he meets with Nezu daily to 5 different students on his way to the office. Even so, Izuku wouldn't trade this opportunity to learn from Nezu for the world. Good morning, Midoriya, Nezu says, opening his office door just before Izuku can knock. Izuku snorts. used to the principal's habits by now. Good morning, sir. What are we doing today? He slides into his chair, a cup of steaming tea already on the desk for him. 𝗵𝗃 pulls a fine portable chess board out from under his desk and sets it on the table. 𝗵𝗃 places the last pawn into its starting position. Black or white? White, please. Izuku smiles nervously. He's going to play chess with the smartest person in Japan after all. Izuku swallows and moves a pawn forward. How's Himiko-san? 𝗵𝗃 moves a pawn of his own. Oh fine. She's now living with Vlad for the past week, and she's happy in her new home. He's good at picking fakeness, so he's helping her be herself. Izuku moves another pawn. I want to destroy her parents, sir. They're monsters, and I'm going to cage them. 𝗵𝗃 moves another pawn. Well, All Might and Detective Tsukachi already got them the day after you found her. We didn't tell you because I wanted to see if you prepared something already. Izuku frowns as he moves a bishop. Really? Such a shame. I went out of my way to find all of her parents' illegal activities in business like bribes and corruption, and all the evidence on negligence and abuse. Oh, can you give me the file? The more evidence the better. 𝗵𝗃 moves a bishop to take Izuku's rook. Izuku moves his horse to take down 𝗵𝗃's rook and hands a file. Well, I have a request. I want to personally be Himiko-san's quirk counselor. Really? Why? 𝗵𝗃 moves his pawn to take one of Izuku's. Izuku takes 𝗵𝗃's pawn with his horse. I think her quirk has more to it than we think, and I think she wouldn't trust normal counselors. I promise to help her, so please let me. 𝗵𝗃 takes Izuku's horse with his rook. Why wouldn't she trust counselors? She never went to one. Izuku growled as he took 𝗵𝗃's bishop with his queen. She went to one as a child, but he called her a demon child. I gave Tsukachi-san the evidence. The fraud should be getting arrested as we speak. 𝗵𝗃 cackled as he took Izuku's bishop with his queen. Granted? And you seem to be good at getting evidence. You made Tsukachi's job much easier. He'd love to have you as his partner. Izuku smiles and moves his knight to take 𝗵𝗃's bishop. We'll work together officially when I graduate, but for now I wouldn't mind helping him as a side job as long as I'm paid, Izuku says half-jokingly. 𝗵𝗃 moves his rook down. Check. And I do believe, mate, 𝗵𝗃 says cheerily. Izuku sees it now. The bishop was a trap to draw his knight away from the king. You did wonderfully, though. I enjoyed myself. Izuku nods. It was expected to lose. This is 𝗵𝗃 after all. What did you learn from our game? 𝗵𝗃 asks once Izuku has calmed down again and rehydrated. I lost focus on the greater picture, Izuku mumbles. I wanted to take your pieces instead of put you in checkmate. 𝗵𝗃 nods. Self-reflection is good, Midoriya. Do not let it become self-flagellation. Would you like to know a simple trick to help you strategize in the future? Izuku nods, wiping his forehead with his hand from focusing. I ask myself, what is the single worst thing that my opponent could to do my plan? And then preempt that. What about the second worst thing? Izuku says, and 𝗵𝗃 grins predatorily. It feels safe, for some reason, as though 𝗵𝗃 is turning that grin against Izuku's enemies. You're learning, 𝗵𝗃 cackles. Yes, you are left vulnerable to a suboptimal play by your opponent. But never assume your opponent will make a mistake. Capitalize on them should they appear, but always assume your opponent is doing exactly what they mean to do. And with experience, you will find you usually have everything you need should your opponent attack you in a different way than you were preparing for. 𝗵𝗃 pushes his chair back, hops down, and walks around the desk to Izuku. Well, young man, you're coming along nicely in our strategizing lessons. But I wanted to inform you that you'll be seeing Power Loader for the design of your gadgets. I know you have your own workshop, but feel free to visit Power Loader if you need a special or material, 𝗵𝗃 said, and Izuku bowed. Thank you, sir. I can't thank you enough for helping me. Nonsense. I enjoy our lessons as much as you do. It's my pleasure to help nurture that potential of yours, and Aizawa feels the same way. Izuku started tearing up. He wasn't used to being told he was talented by anyone except his mother and Bakugos. Katsuki too in his unique way, but it still counts, and pro heroes were complimenting him. He will make everyone that believes in him proud, and that's a vow. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXX. At the lunchroom, Izuku was sitting with the teachers. He was sitting with pro heroes. Since it'd be weird if he sit with students older than him. So how was your lessons with 𝗵𝗃 Green Bunny? Asked Midnight, who's sitting on his left in a teasing manner. Yes, tell us, listener, said Present Mike with enthusiasm. We played chess and did quirk analysis. I never got to do that with anyone. Izuku smiled and the teachers frowned. Midoriya, didn't you have anyone to do things with? Asked Snipe with a frown that the rest of staff mirrored. Well, I tried to play chess and other games with my friends and loved ones. But I win too quickly. Mom, auntie, and uncle seems always more amused than bothered by losing. My friends gave up on winning and Katsuki throws a tantrum every time he loses. The teacher laughed at the explanation. He seems like a lively one, midnight cooed. More like a problem child, Izuku sighed, and Eraser raised a brow and asked why. Well, he keeps getting into fights with kids in his district. Mostly high schoolers, and I have to save his reckless ass from being suspended or expelled. I mean, do you have any idea how many people I have to blackmail every time he gets in trouble? The teachers looked at him blankly. How long have you been doing this? Asked Snipe, afraid of the answer. 6 years. The table became silent. This kid blackmails an entire school district to protect his friend since he was 8 years old. The teachers made a note to not get on his shit list, since he was the one to doom his old school for getting on his nerves. So, young man, Nezu told me you need help designing some tools. You have the blueprints? Asked Power Loader, and Izuku held designs that he definitely didn't bring with him, and the teachers wondered where he got it from. Power Loader looked at the prints and smiled wider and wider with each page, until he was grinning ear to ear, which unnerved the rest of the staff. You're a genius, kid. Most third years aren't this good in designing. There's a couple mistakes, but I can show you how to fix it. Izuku smiled and nodded. Great, come to my class after school, so we can discuss the details, Power Loader said enthusiastically. Where did you learn building support items and quirk analysis, little listener? Asked Mike, and Izuku looked confused. I never told you. The teachers shook their heads. Well, I never went back to school. Instead, I took online courses. The teacher's eyes widened at the realization. Someone this smart taking safe-paced lessons means he's in college. So I got a degree in electrical engineering, programming and quirk science, Izuku explained, and the teachers looked in disbelief and shared one thought. Great, the rat is getting a minion. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXX. Izuku stood with Aizawa in training ground beta for a new training session. But today he was carrying his grapnel gun with him, so Izuku could guess what they're going to do. Obviously, Parker, using his traveling tool that he designed, Sand Aizawa would supervise him. But they just stood as if waiting for someone. And what confused Izuku was that a boy with purple hair and a similar scarf to Aizawa-sensei walked to them. The kid was the same height as Katsuki and himself. He wasn't too muscular, but was obviously athletic. He looked like he needed a nap. Izuku's mind already started making assumptions. He wasn't a conspiracy theorist, but he couldn't help it since his detective persona was a part of his personality. You're late, Hitoshi, said Sensei, and Hitoshi sighed. Mom kept me until she made a dinner box for you. She also sent you this. Hitoshi held up a bento box and a sleeping bag that seemed cleaner than Sensei's. Probably the same one, but washed. Aizawa accepted the excuse and turned to Izuku and sighed. Midoriya, this is Hitoshi. He'll be your training partner for the next while. Izuku nodded. Hey, I'm Hitoshi Shinso. Izuku smiled, and they shook hands. What's your quirk, Shinso? The boy looked uncomfortable, but Sensei gave him the okay to talk. Brainwash. If someone responds to me, I can control them. This quirk is villainous, I know. Perfect for a hero. Shinso looked at Izuku like he was crazy, and Aizawa smirked. You can end hostage situations quickly and make villains surrender peacefully. Whoever told you it's villainous are fools, believe me. Shinso looked showed but regained his composite. What's your quirk? I don't have one. Shinso choked on nothing but didn't comment. He didn't look judged, just surprised, which made Izuku happy. Also, Izuku says, I'm suing your quirk counselor. Shinsu's eyes widened. What? Why? Asked Aizawa, who was intrigued because Midoriya is the quirk expert here. Brainwashing involves altering someone's way of thinking, usually over a long time. Your quirk is more like hypnosis, or, more accurately, possession, he says. Calling it brainwashing does have some pretty negative connotations. Is that why you didn't get along with your classmates? Shinso sighed and nodded. You remember I'm quirkless, right? Izuku says. I've seen quirk discrimination my whole childhood. It sucks. The other two scowled at that. Izuku felt happy. They were mad for him. After that, Izuku and Hitoshi stayed using Parker and their own gear to navigate through the fake city, with Aizawa giving instructions and pointers on how to do better. Izuku found himself competing with Hitoshi, and they actually started a friendly rivalry on who does better. Aizawa picked up on that and encouraged it. Izuku and Hitoshi also became sparring partners, and even though Izuku was the better one, he helped his partner in sparring to improve. So by the end of the day, they became friends. Prev 12. 10 Months of Hell Part 1. Next 10 Months of Hell Part 2. 8 months. Until the entrance exam, Izuku was standing in Trading Ground Delta with Himiko, who looked nervous and weary of him. He felt sympathy for the girl, so he decided to gain her trust first before they could work on her quirk. Do you remember me, Himiko-san? Yes, you're the kid who said will help me? I'm grateful to you for everything you did. Izuku nodded. Yes, but didn't you recognize me? We knew each other from before that. Really? Himiko looked intrigued. Of course. From the internet, Himi. The girl's eyes widened. Cute little munchkin, is that really you? Izuku nodded with a smile. Himiko looked at him and recognized him from the Aldra interview. She cackled in her school while watching through her phone. She always spoke to him in the internet, so how didn't she recognize him? Now I want to speak about your quirk and how train it. I think it's more than just transform, to be honest. Really? What else can I do? Well, let's find out, shall we? Himiko nodded and Izuku smiled wider than before. Alright, let's start from square one. What do you know about your quirk? Himiko thought for a second. Well, if drink someone's blood, I can turn on to them. Izuku nodded. Any mutation you got? Himiko shrugged helplessly. Just those sharp fangs that I used to suck blood. Izuku raised a brow at that part. And then he got an idea. Himiko-san, do you put on sunscreen? Himiko looked at him surprised. Well, yeah. How did you know? I have a vulnerable skin to the sun. It gives me nasty burns. Izuku nodded and understood a bit more about her quirk. I think I know what your quirk is. It's not what you think, Izuku said, and Himiko looked surprised. Huh? What is it? You have a vampire quirk, Izuku said, and she paled. Before she could respond, Izuku interrupted her thought process and put his hand on her shoulder. She looked at him to see him smiling at her. You have a strong quirk. You probably can do much more than you think, so how about we try few things out? I don't know what I'll do from now on. My parents said be normal, but I don't know what I want now. Izuku hummed in thought. What was always your dream? I always wanted to be a hero to save people. What about you, Himiko? She frowned and thought for a second. I want to help people like me, but I also wanted to be a model as a child. Can I do both? Izuku grinned. Yup. Now you got a goal. You just have to follow it. Himiko smiled. Thanks, cute little munchkin. Anytime, Himi. Now let's see if you can fly like actual vampires. Himiko beamed at the thought of flying after a couple hours of trying. Turns out she can, but she needs more practice to not fall. At least she learned to not go upside down while in the air. After some time their time was up and Vlad came to pick her up. Hello, Midoriya, said Vlad, and looked around. Hello, Vlad, sir. Izuku beamed. Where's Himiko? Asked Vlad, confused, and Izuku pointed up. Confused, Vlad looked up to see Himiko floating in the air and waving at him. The hero looked baffled and Himiko laughed at his expression from above. How's she flying? Asked the hero, and Izuku decided that he should calm the guy down. Well, we discovered that she has a vampire quirk, so I suggest you keep her away from garlic, Izuku explained, and the hero nodded. Himiko, come down. We're going home, so come on. Vlad called and Himiko came down. Okay, Vlad, Dad, Himiko said, causing the hero to blush and Izuku to laugh. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXX. Izuku was standing across from Kaminari, in a forest away from anyone that could see them. Izuku was going to help his friend with his quirk. Okay, Kaminari. There is something that has been bothering me since day one, Izuku said while throwing a jab toward the blonde who barely dodged it. He then sent an AO attack, which Izuku avoided by jumping back. That's not it. Why do you keep relying on area attacks? Kaminari raised an eyebrow. Why, that's how my quirk works, Kaminari asked uncertainly. Izuku looked weirdly at him. You can also channel your electricity all over your body, right? Kaminari nodded slowly. Then why are you not focusing on close-quarter combat? One good hit charged with enough electricity could knock out someone easily. Come on, throw a punch at me. The blonde obeyed and threw a punch at Izuku, who effortlessly evaded it. I don't know how to fight. Okay. Kaminari proceeded to sit on the floor, hugging his legs. The moment I discovered I could just throw lightning around me, I decided to focus on that. It works most of the time. I just have to be cautious to not short-circuit myself. That's another thing. How is it that you short-circuit yourself? Well, I don't really know. I guess a lot of electricity travels through my brain, and I just fried for a bit, Kaminari explained. A little self-conscious about his quirk's limitations. That just can't be healthy. Kaminari, Izuku said, worried. Show me how you do it. You want me to short-circuit myself right now? Izuku nodded quickly. Kaminari sighed but complied. Okay, you better take care of me. Izuku saw how the energy traveled along Kaminari's body for a few seconds. Stop. Kaminari quickly stopped his quirk and raised an eyebrow. I'm a little woozy, but I'm not short-circuited yet. Midoribro, Kaminari. You're not grounded, Izuku stated simply. What? I mean, I'm not exactly humble, but I don't consider myself. Izuku interrupted him. No, not like that. Your electricity is moving around your body over and over again. Of course, it would mess up with your circuits. I don't get it, Izuku groaned. Take your shoes off and your socks. Kaminari was confused. But Izuku looked him straight in the eyes. Trust me. Kaminari nodded slowly and complied again. He was now barefoot on the ground. Now short-circuit yourself. Kaminari scratched the back of his head and nodded. He took a deep breath and started to channel his high voltage, preparing himself for the dumbness. After a couple of minutes, he fell to the ground exhausted. There it is. Are you happy? Kaminari asked while gasping for air. He then turned to Izuku, who was smiling. What is so funny? Kaminari's mind grasped the situation. He was talking while short-circuited. But he wasn't really. How? The excess of electricity left your body instead of keeping circling around you until your internal circuits put you in timeout. Izuku saw Kaminari's eyes widened in surprise, and a smile blooming on his face. I'm never using shoes again, Kaminari said, excited. You can always use shoes that conduct electricity or something. Never using shoes again, I said. Kaminari jumped, and Izuku had to admit that his happy energy was contagious. I'm really pumped up, 𝗵𝗃. Let's try that close-quarter combat you mentioned. 15 seconds later, Kaminari was knocked out by Izuku, who was apologizing profusely to the unconscious boy. When he finally regained consciousness, he quickly forgave Izuku, and later that night, he threw his shoes into the fire pit. Izuku and the others always joked about it since then, and Izuku gave Kaminari a bunch of shoes that conduct electricity. 5 months until the entrance exam. Nedzu wasn't the only one who picked up the pace of his training. Mr. Aizawa, true to his prediction, started sparring with Izuku. The first few fights lasted a few seconds, but now Izuku can almost hold his own. Sometimes Mr. Aizawa would bring in US students as sparring partners, just to make sure Izuku didn't develop habits from fighting only him. Izuku was hesitant at first to take time away from actual students, but Mr. Aizawa assured him that Nedzu, or the rat, as Mr. Aizawa called him, offered extra credit to anyone who sparred with Izuku. One of the most frequent students to take up that offer was Tagada, who Izuku remembered from the second year's sports festival. Tagada had improved in leaps and bounds since then. By mid-July, Izuku had a decent shot against several of the first-year hero students, and even the second years weren't instantly destroying him. Very few third years ever joined him, which is fair, Izuku figures. He can't exactly give them a good fight. You're doing good, kid, Mr. Aizawa says, and Izuku flushes with pride. I'm home, he calls, slipping his shoes off at the apartment entrance. Izu, Himiko calls, bounding down the hall to pull him into a quick hug. I know I said it this morning, but happy birthday. How was your day, sunshine? His mother asks from the kitchen. Izuku smells her katsudon, and his grin widens. He follows Himiko over to where his mom is cooking. Mom, Izuku says, that's a lot of katsudon for just the three of us. His mom laughs. I got a call about a week ago while you were at UA, she says. Toshi asked if he could come by with 2 of his friends. Izuku perks up. All Mighty's visiting for his birthday. Yeah, only he knows that, but still. Then Izuku noticed his mom calling him Toshi, but decided to ignore it for now. Did he say who his friends were? Izuku asks. Nope, his mother says. Izuku steps back out from his room into the main halls. He just changed out of his unofficial school clothes into something more comfortable. He doesn't really have a uniform since he wasn't officially a UA student. Yet, hopefully. He makes his way to the table, where his mom finished setting up for 6. Do you know when Mr. Yagi and his friends will get here? He asks. It should be soon, Mom says. Sometime in the next half hour or so. Naturally, it was that very moment someone knocked on the door. His mom ushers him his seats before hurrying down the hall. Izuku cranes to see who's at the door, but at his angle he won't be able to see anyone until they're halfway to the table. It's a pleasure that you came, Toshi, his mom echoes down the hall, and he could hear Yagi flushes. The pleasure is mine. All might, Mr. Yagi says. I wish we had met sooner. Izuku hears more voices, but he can't make out what they're saying. They must still be in the hallway outside the apartment. His mother returns, followed by Mr. Yagi and 𝗵𝗃𝗃. See, Papa? You have a fan, says a tall, blonde girl as she moves her bangs out from in front of her glasses. Izuku hadn't noticed her come in. She must be the other guest. Mr. 𝗏 laughs. I did tell you young Midoriya was quite knowledgeable, Mr. Yagi says, before turning to Himiko. Hello, young Himiko. I don't believe we've had the pleasure of meeting yet. I'm Yagi Toshinori. I'm acquainted with several members of staff at UA. Himiko nods and Mr. Yagi gestures for his guests to introduce themselves. As Midoriya said, I'm 𝗵𝗃𝗃. I'm a scientist at Island. This is my daughter, Melissa. The younger 𝗏 reaches out a hand as Izuku goes to bow, both halting at the same time. It's nice to meet you, Miss 𝗏, Izuku says, accepting the handshake. Midoriya Izuku. Please, just Melissa is fine, Melissa says. Yagi, you never told me your friends were so famous, his mother says. Mr. Yagi chuckles. I hope you didn't go too out of your way. Not at all, ma'am, Mr. 𝗏 says. Toshi is a long-time family friend. I'm just glad we managed to get time off this week to meet Midoriya for his birthday. He's practically my uncle, Melissa chimes. Young Midoriya is truly something else, Mr. Yagi says, taking his seat. The 𝗏s follow his example, and his mom sets to serving katsudon. Papa says you want to be a pro hero, Melissa says after everyone's finished eating. Izuku nods. I know being a quirkless hero is going to be hard, but it's always been my dream. Melissa smiles wistfully. I was afraid I'd have to give up my dream when the doctor told me I was quirkless, Izuku freezes. But Uncle told me that I could be someone's hero through my support equipment, the way Papa is for All Might. Melissa's blue eyes meet Izuku's green. If you're going to do this, you need gear. I wouldn't want to impose, Izuku says, but Melissa shakes her head. It's your birthday. Besides, she leans in slightly as though sharing a secret. We quirkless need to stick together. So, what can I do for you? Izuku places a thumb to his lip and thinks. Mr. Aizawa told me that mobility is one of the most important parts of heroism. I also like his capture scarf as a way to apprehend targets, but I'm not sure that's the right tool for me. Melissa lights up. Papa, what about the cat's cradle, right? Mr. Shield says. Melissa nods enthusiastically. Cat's cradle? Inko asks. Like the string game. Exactly, Mr. Shield pulls out a small metal disc from his pocket and sets it on the table. He types something on his phone, and the disc lights up, projecting a hologram of some kind of gauntlet. It's something I designed, Melissa says excitedly. It's still in the prototype stage. The concept is a pair of gauntlets which house special cables you manipulate with your hands. You can use them to maneuver, restrain, or any number of things. It sounds perfect, Izuku breathes. Mr. Shield hums thoughtfully. Wouldn't they pair well with the jet boots? Oh, Melissa claps. That's brilliant, Papa, she turns back to Izuku. The jet boots use bursts of compressed air to launch you. We hope to have a gliding function someday. Well, I have a cape that lets me glide in the air, so no problem. Well, happy birthday, Midoriya, Mr. Shield says. We'll get to work on your first set of gear within the week. A stunned silence falls on the family. Thank you all so much. After that, the Bakugos arrived and his friends and Hitoshi. Yes, his friends know about his sessions with Nezu and seemed encouraging, even Katsuki did by scoffing and saying his notebooks finally paid off. What's up, brat? Hello, Izuku. Hey, Midori. Hey, Midabro. Hey there, dude. What's up, nerd? Hello, Midoriya. Izuku smiled to see his friends coming to visit him. Izuku introduced Yagi-san and the Shields to his friends, and they all got along really well. The doorbell rang again and Izuku went to open it and grinned to see that Himiko came to his birthday party. Hey, cute little munchkin. Am I late? Not at all. Come in. They both entered the living room and his friends tensed from seeing Himiko, except for Shinso who didn't know her. Thankfully, he told his friends about Himiko's life story, so they didn't judge her, but were still weary. Hi, my name is Himiko. Nice to meet you all, exclaimed Himiko, and everyone relaxed. After that, they started chatting and playing games until Izuku and Katsuki started playing Hero Smash Bros. And things became heated a little. After that, they went to the cake. Inko went to serve, but Himiko stopped her, and much to everyone's surprise, Himiko used her quirk to cut the cake, get everyone a piece. A black smoke came out of Himiko's body and bats came to life. Some grabbed plates, some brought a knife and started cutting the cake, and some others picked the plates and served the guests. Holy shit, that cool, exclaimed Kaminari and Kirishima at the same time. Inko and Yagi-san clapped for Himiko, while Mitsuki whistled in amusement. Is that your quirk? Asked Ashido. Well, my quirk is called Vampire. I can do anything vampires can. I can even fly. Wow, that's cool, manly. She gave a scary grin that creeped everyone. I also like blood. Katsuki stared at the scary girl in front of him and looked her up and down. He one thought in mind. This girl is hot later. Everyone was preparing to leave and Izuku was happy since this was practically the best birthday he had. Hey girl. Himiko turned to Mitsuki, who called her after hanging up the phone. She was talking to the company she and Inko work for. Yes, ma'am, asked Himiko. Well, I was on the phone, and I want to know, Mitsuki grinned. What size do you wear? Izuku and Katsuki paled. Himkafang's run. The two yelled, but it was too late. Mitsuki dragged Himiko to her house and made her do some modeling. Katsuki never wanted to mention the topic, but Izuku had a feeling his childhood friend liked what he saw. The recommendation exam. Izuku walked into like he does every other day. But this time he's not here for training or learning, but to take the recommendation exam. Yes, recommendation exam. Principal Nezu and All Might recommended him. He was walking in with a huge smile on his face. Ever since the defeat of the MLA, Izuku became prouder of his status as quirkless. He never felt ashamed anymore, and he knew that the quirk didn't make a person special. His mom said that, his friends that, the teachers and you said that, and even All Might said that, so Izuku was sure of it more than ever now. He walked with his head held high and his smile wide. People were looking at him curiously because of the big bag he was carrying with him. The bag had his support gear and Izuku was sure coming prepared. Izuku walked in until All Might appeared as his sponsor. And everyone laid their eyes on him. Ha ha ha. I am here to watch my young apprentice. Everyone looked at Izuku and All Might with shock, and the boy face-palmed. Thanks sensei, now I'm everyone's target, said Izuku with a deadpan, and the hero's sweat dropped. Sorry young man. It's just a habit to announce my arrival. Izuku sighed in exasperation as the two walked into the auditorium together, gaining the looks of everyone in there. They were led by Present Mike. Right this way everybody, the blonde man announced with his way too loud voice. Do you know what I might be doing today? Izuku asked. Don't you want a surprise? I do, but I am too excited, he said a bit loudly. Love the enthusiasm from the kids this year. Hisashi up front had heard Izuku. No flash photography please. All will be explained in the auditorium. Izuku guessed he could wait until the auditorium to find out. They were only not even a minute away from it anyways. Once everyone beside him and his mentor, because they were the last to come, had taken a seat, Izuku looked around to see if he recognized any other pro heroes. He saw 𝗬𝗵𝗲 with a teen who had no lips and ash blonde hair. Midnight had brought a teen who had a really mischievous green hair like his own. Both kids looked at him, then All Might, and their jaws dropped as well as everyone else in the auditorium. Izuku stood in the entrance awkwardly until his mentor made his announcement. Ha ha ha. I am here to watch my young apprentice. Izuku groaned as he could feel everyone glaring at him as the main target. As they sit down, Izuku glared at his idol, who noticed and chuckled. Don't give me that look, my boy. As a hero hopeful, you must show everyone that you're as capable as all of them. But I hoped they'd think low of me, and I used that to my advantage. Well, good thinking, but I want you to show that you're going to be the best with just your mind and hard work. I believe in you. Izuku felt warmth from his idol's word. The man who he came to see as a father in the past year, and he saw the man wiping his face. Izuku then realized he was crying from the praise. Out of everything he learned to improve, he could never stop the crying part of him. He was a Midoriya after all. Before anything else could happen, the principal of 𝗂𝗲, a mouse and bear hybrid-looking animal in a suit named Nezu, spoke from the stage. Hello everybody, the mouse said happily. Thank you for coming to the recommendation exams this year. As usual, we have 3 different parts, the first of which is naturally the written test. Round 2 is actually a unique take this year, but we will get to that after the written test. Each of you have a number on your seat that will say your test number, as well as a packet that we would like filled out before we get into the written test, which is taking place here after we have gathered all if the forms. The pro heroes who have brought a recommended prospect are allowed to be in the seats on the base floor up until we are ready to pass out the tests. When that happens, you all can take to the lounge and wait until round 2 is ready to begin. Izuku pulled out his form, but his hand was still uneasy from all the attention he was receiving. Izuku shook his head, trying to shake off his worry. All Might entered the lounge where some of the heroes were waiting, while their students were taking their tests. Izuku was in a definite good mood when he left, and that part made him happy. The blonde hero was about to take a seat until someone blocked his way. 𝗵𝗲, my friend, how are you? Almighty, 𝗵𝗲 said in his gruff and grumpy tone, and everyone tensed. How can I help you? Tell me about the boy you're recommending. What's his quirk? 𝗵𝗲 was actually curious, even if he looked irritated, and the blonde hero's smile widened. You never anyone before, so he must have a very strong quirk for you of all people to sponsor him. All Might laughed boisterously. Well, this might be shocking, but my student is quirkless. There was silence until every hero except the staff shouted what, and 𝗵𝗲 looked downright furious. Are you a fool? What in the world possessed you to bring a quirkless to this prestigious school? Quirkless are the weakest, even weaker than normal civilians. They can't be heroes, you moron. Everyone looked at the flame hero in shock at his low opinion of quirkless. It was known that after the fall of the MLA, the treatment and opinion about quirkless was changed, and they were treated much better. But to hear the number 2 hero speak so lowly of them was truly shameful. The heroes noted that the staff 𝗬𝗵𝗲 and Midnight were glaring at the flaming man and plotting something like murder. Then the room was flooded with killing intent. Everyone looked and shivered in fear, seeing the ever-smiling All Might scowling. 𝗵𝗲, I would appreciate if you keep your quirkiest crap to yourself. Everyone gasped at the malice in his words, and 𝗵𝗲 glared back. Even though he downright terrified, this boy has the heart of a hero, and his mind is a stronger weapon than any quirk. He was tutored by Nezu himself and trained in combat by me, and taught the skills necessary for a hero by Eraserhead. He our pride, and if you ever speak badly about him. All Might glared further. I won't hesitate to Detroit smash that smug face of yours. The symbol of peace turned and stormed off, leaving an intimidated flaming trash, a stunned group of heroes, and very pleased teachers. Hello everyone. The written test is now over, and we will be meeting outside of door 4 before part 2. All Might got up and left for the meeting at a decent pace, not wanting to be near 𝗵𝗲 any longer than he had to. If he found Izuku, he knew he would calm down enough, so that was his goal at the moment, so he wouldn't smash 𝗵𝗲 through the walls of 𝑢. As he regrouped with the other heroes, they all flinched to see him still mad. Just to be petty, he shot 𝗵𝗲 a death glare that made him back off. Izuku noticed that his master seemed a bit tense and really pissed off when they saw each other again. His test felt really easy, so it left his mind completely. "Are you okay?" Izuku asked as they began to go to where Nezu was walking in front of buses. All Might's response was to hug Izuku really tightly once he was within reach. It bothered the hero so much that this sweet, pure-hearted boy was abused by his peers and teachers in such horrible ways for something as petty as a quirk. "Sir?" Izuku asked in slight confusion. Everyone looked at them bewildered. "You're a good kid." All Might didn't let go of the hug for a few more seconds after speaking. Izuku was still confused before, so he asked, "What's wrong?" All Might scowled. "𝗵𝗲 spoke bad about you for being quirkless." Izuku rolled his eyes. "And? That's not new for me. Normal, even so it's fine." "No, it's not fine. You're a good kid, and I'll be damned if I let some grumpy egoistical scum speak all about you." Izuku teared up at his master's protectiveness. "So what did you do to him?" Izuku was curious. "Oh, I told to shut up. I cussed him in front of everyone and threatened to Detroit smash him through the school, then stomped away." Izuku gaped. All Might threatened 𝗵𝗲 for him. He didn't see that coming at all. Nezu interrupted the moment unknowingly by starting the announcements about the second part of the test. "Hello again, everybody." The mouse had a positive energy. "The second round will take place in multiple sections of our simulated city, with the adults watching from viewing rooms, so you can see your students' progress. Now I will explain what the students will be doing. You will all be split by your numbers onto the buses that will take you to your zones. While on the way there, you will be partnered up by the proctor of your zone into groups of 2. The goal is simple." He held up a gold-painted box. "Both members of your team must put a hand inside of this locked box, which is hidden in the zone. First team to have both team members put their hands in the box wins, and will go to the third and final part of this exam. There are 8 zones, so 8 teams will be making it to the third round. I would explain more, but the proctors all have agreed to explain the rules a bit more." Nezu stepped off of the platform he was using. "The red buses are for the adults, and the blue buses are for students." The animal principal began to direct numbers to buses. Izuku ended up on a bus heading to the 7th zone. His proctor was the teacher and pro hero 𝗧𝗵𝗲, who had guided the kids to seat in the double-seated bus. 𝗧𝗵𝗲 didn't start talking until the bus began to move. "Okay, students, I am going to start off by explaining how I am choosing your teams. Honestly, just look to whoever you are seated next to." Izuku looked at the kid next to him, who was a silent teen with red and white hair that was split down the middle. He also had what looked like a burn scar surrounding his left eye. The kid had an apathetically look, but did at least acknowledge Izuku. "You can eliminate the other teams by putting them into a spot where they can't fight back. While I do want you all to behave like this isn't just a test, but an actual real situation, I don't however want you to injure each other too badly. I will be watching, and if I see it as a clear loss on one side, I will say so through the speakers. I will try to give you kids the benefit of the doubt, but will make calls if I think they should be made for your safety. There is a time limit of 1 hour for this test, and I will guide each team to a separate entrance to the zone with my clones. Do not enter the zone until I announce that the match has started." He finished saying the rules. "Any questions?" "So just to make sure," a pink-haired guy said with a raised hand, "both members of a team have to place a hand in the box, correct? The box is locked, but can be unlocked in one of 2 ways." He pressed a button, and the screen at the front of the bus showed a gold key that looked bigger than Izuku's hand. This key that is hidden in the central building of the zone. It's the one with a large garden around it, or a combination that is also hidden pretty much in every building, but isn't clear on if it is the correct combination or not. Either one will get the box open. A girl covered in black scales raised her hand. "Do we have to get the box if every other team gets eliminated?" The proctor shook his head. "You can eliminate all of the other teams, and it will count as passing this trial. The box just ends the trial early, and even if the team that doesn't eliminate anyone opens the box, but instead sneaks around for it, puts their hands in the box, they win." Izuku raised his hand now. "What if one person gets eliminated on a team? Do we both get eliminated, or can that one person still go on and get the box?" 𝗧𝗵𝗲 looked at Izuku and answered, "Both of you will not be eliminated as a whole when one person is eliminated. And you can still win as one person if you eliminate the other teams or get the box." If your teammate is eliminated, and you get your hand in that box, your team wins with that one hand. If our quirks are destructive, do we have to show restraint? A girl who had obsidian-looking skin asked. 𝗧𝗵𝗲 thought for a second. Nezu did give all of the proctors permission to let this be on their call. Treat it like this is an evacuated city that is about to be bombed, and that box has a code to stop that bombing. So just a little? A guy with a mohawk of fire asked. Enough that you guys don't topple whole buildings or kill each other. 𝗧𝗵𝗲 would have clones on standby, of course, if the kids got carried away, but he did want these kids to have the chance to go all out. It was the recommendation exams after all. Only 4 students of the hundreds there would pass, so this was something they would want to give their all to. All right. The obsidian girl got pumped up. The bus stopped and 𝗧𝗵𝗲 made clones that filtered off of the vehicle. Everyone follow a clone, one team to a clone, and I will give the okay when the trial starts. Izuku was excited to do this now. He was eagerly following the 𝗧𝗵𝗲 clone, while his partner followed quietly. All Might looked and saw 𝗵𝗲𝗏 walking to him. Hello, 𝗵𝗲𝗏. All Might said with a glare, but 𝗵𝗲𝗏 remained calm. It seems our two have been partnered up. 𝗵𝗵𝗏 indicated to a screen where Izuku and 𝗵𝗵𝗏's son could be seen. The audio wasn't on yet, but the two were seen at entrance 17 to Zone 7. Oh, I didn't know you had a son here this year. All Might didn't like that look 𝗵𝗵𝗏's son had. It was too negative. He isn't much for being public. The flame hero stated. Your student seems enthusiastic. The man was watching as Izuku was looking around excitedly. He has been working hard for this. All Might couldn't help but smile from Izuku's mood. I think they will be a good team. 𝗵𝗵𝗏 remained silent, afraid of making a comment that would piss off the Tower of Muscle, but wondered why that boy of All Might's looked so familiar, like something he hasn't seen in years. Izuku had about 12 different plans already made for how they could do this. He wasn't just bouncing in his feet excitedly. He was ready to go. However, he should still talk to his teammate because teamwork makes the dream work. Hi, I'm Izuku Midoriya. The green-haired teen held out his hand to the dual hair-colored teen next to him. The teen gave Izuku's hand a look before slowly shaking it. As much as he thought he didn't need this Izuku, he should still make sure the green-haired kid wasn't complete dead weight. Shoto Todoroki. Todoroki? Izuku suddenly remembered 𝗵𝗏𝗏's family name. Oh, you 𝗵𝗏𝗏's kid? Shoto frowned. Yes, Izuku scowled, which surprised the dual-haired teen. Must suck to live in the same house, as that burning pile of trash. Shoto had to make double take to make sure he heard the other boy right. Pardon. Shoto hoped he heard right. I said must suck to live in the same house, as that burning pile of trash. Shoto looked at him bewildered before he burst out in laughter. You're the first person to ever call him that. The stoic teen was cackling manically and Izuku joined in. Well, it's the truth. His looks are that of a flaming trash bin. His personality is as bitter as black coffee and his arrogance, so big the human race can't measure. Shoto was laughing so hard his stomach started to hurt. I'm gonna kill that disrespectful little brat. 𝗵𝗏𝗏 roared and All Might glanced at him. Move and it'll be weeks before you leave 𝗓𝗏𝗏's infirmary. 𝗵𝗏𝗏 yelled in anger, but stayed seated, and the other heroes in the room were laughing their hearts out. After they were done laughing, Izuku asked, Do you want to discuss our plan for the match? Shoto wanted to shrug him off as a habit, but Izuku actually was interesting to him. What is your quirk? It would be easier to make any plan with quirk knowledge. Oh, I'm quirkless. Well, damn. This kid was going to drag him down, but then the green kid grabbed his bag and pulled out some gear that Shoto was actually impressed with. What are these? Are they allowed? Izuku nodded. Well, since I don't have a quirk, I was allowed to bring any support item I created. You made these. Shoto was actually impressed. After that, the green kid explained all of his devices and his skills, and Shoto was reconsidering his opinion. What's your quirk, Todoroki? I can create ice from the right side of my body. Shoto did not plan on using his left side, so what was the point of mentioning it? Izuku looked at the teen. It would be weird if Shoto could only use just his right side in his quirk. Izuku looked at Shoto's hair and saw that it was split down the middle, and his eyes were different colors. He had white hair on his ice side, so was the red hair on his left for a different element, like fire. Do you control fire with your left? Izuku asked. Shoto actually got surprised again. How was this guy that quick to figure out Shoto's quirk? I can, but I won't. Izuku was going to ask why, but Shoto had a look when he mentioned the fire that said enough. Something made Shoto not like his fire. Okay, man. Either way, we got this. You don't care about my not using his side. His side? Izuku got confused. My father's. Shoto wasn't going to go farther into it than that. Izuku thought that Shoto maybe had a bad father too. so he was avoiding that side out of spite. He understood that, but still said something about it. That's your thing, Todoroki. Dads can suck. But don't let his terribleness keep you down. But I thought you liked your dad? My dad. All Might Izuku chalked and looked to see the boy serious. No, he's just my mentor. My dad's left me and mom because he was ridiculed in work for having a quirkless son. Then after divorce we kept in touch. But when I told I'm going to try for heroics, he stopped calling. Todoroki looked surprised at that. Shoto looked at the ground. Why was he even talking about this with a kid he would only know for all of the next hour or two? Izuku had a point though, he supposed. Let's focus on this test for now though. Izuku stretched his hands, then shoving it to our dads. Shoto actually gained a small smile. He kind of liked the plague mask wearing Izuku. The emerald-haired teen gave off a pleasant energy. Why not both at the same time? Even better. Izuku grinned. The trial begins now. Ectoplasm's voice came over the speakers. What should we do? Elimination or box? The emerald-eyed teen turned to his teammate. Shoto though for a second. Box, but can you open it? I have a cryptographic sequencer that can be used as a remote hacking device, so yes, I can open it. Shoto looked astonished. You really came prepared, huh? Well, go big or go home. Partner Endeavor was actually surprised. The audio started after Ectoplasm started the trial, so he only heard their plan. It was smart, and he was now curious about that boy who has a tool for every scenario he could think of. It also surprised him that Shoto was being cooperative with someone. The boy was too rebellious against him and everything in existence, but apparently not that kid with green hair. All Might was grinning because he loved the plan and how talking to Izuku for all of 4 minutes actually made that Todoroki boy lose his scowl. Izuku did have that effect on some people. He actually had a thought that he had a quirk that wasn't a real quirk, where he just was a very positive influence on people. Now wouldn't that be ironic? Izuku stuck his arm in front of Shoto to stop the teen. They both could hear the sounds of fighting around the corner. How do we feel about combat? How many? Izuku peeked around the corner. From what I see, 3 different people fighting, but none of them look to be teammates. So 6 at the least. I could throw a flash grenade then stick them with glue grenades. Then we knock them out quick and sneaky. You think you can do that? Izuku rolled his eyes at the boy's doubtful look. Just try to keep up, you do your plan. I'll distract them, got it. Shoto turned the corner to be able to see everyone properly. He saw the pink-haired guy, the girl made of obsidian, and a guy with water all fighting. He needed them all to stop for a second, so he shouted, "Hey!" All 3 got confused looks and stopped to face the emerald-haired teen in confusion. Then a wall of ice shot at them and pushed them into one spot when they dodged. It was a mistake since the second they jumped away, a flash bomb dropped on them. They yelled in surprise, then shooting between the walls like a ping pong using his jet boots. Izuku kicked them one by one in the back of their heads, knocking them out as shot between walls. He did it before they could even react, and Shoto looked dumbfounded. All Mighty laughed loudly, and the other heroes gaped. Nezu was cackling and Eraser was grinning widely in pride. Looks like I was right in calling Gran Torino a few months ago to help him with the jet boots, Nezu said with a smile. Well, I'm the one who taught him Parker, so it's me he should thank, said Aizawa. Well, thanks to my training, he became strong enough to knock them out with just a kick, so I'm the one to thank. The 3 glared at each other and started bickering. The heroes in the watched with a sweat drop, the 3 heroes bickering like kids over who's the best teacher. Participants 73, 79 and 80 are eliminated. Ectoplasm spoke through the speakers. Let's go. Shoto was impressed. Izuku was fast and skilled. Shoto doubts he could have blocked if he was one of them. Got it. Izuku walked with Shoto. You got the next one? I do. The dual-haired teen nodded. We should break the key as soon as possible. If it is in the central building, more than likely it isn't somewhere hard to find. I don't even think the box is hidden too well, just enough out of the way that it takes a second to find it. I actually expect it to be on a roof. Last place to look if you go through a building. Izuku got an idea. What if it is? The buildings in our area are at least 10 floors as a minimum. How way do they expect us to search all of this in 1 hour? A roof would be a good place to leave it, since while you could see from one roof to another, that still makes it take a while to go up and down buildings. That gives flying quirks an advantage. But those flyers might be too busy flying to go get the key. Someone else could get the key or a combination. We have an extra advantage then, Shoto said. We can go to the rooftops now and not need to go up and down buildings. We also don't need the combinations or key. Can you use your ice to move through the air? I can. Cool. Let's go up this one first. Izuku grabbed his grapnel gun and smirked at his partner. How about a race, friend? Shoto nodded and Izuku grabbed him and took to the top of a tall building, and Shoto was a bit dizzy from the quick move through the air. That was something Shoto said, a bit dizzy, and Izuku chuckled. You get used to it, dude, Izuku said, while patting the other boy on the back there. Shoto pointed to a building with large glass windows. Second floor from the top, corner room on the right. Izuku looked where he was pointing and saw the gold box gleaming from the sun. It was sitting on a table. Nice eye. Let's both use our abilities to get to it as fast as possible. Race you, Izuku offered. Shoto didn't know why, but he nodded. Let's go. Izuku started their race once they both got to the edge of the roof. Shoto moved in a wave of ice made from his right foot, and Izuku used his gun to grab into the buildings and shoot himself off of it quickly using jet boots. The two admittedly got into how nice it felt to move like that, and both, despite being smart enough to get into the recommendation exams, forgot that glass was something that can hurt when you impact with it at a high speed. They were too busy racing to consider their point B drove them through windows, both of them crashing through the glass and into the conference room with the gold box. Ah, that hurts. Izuku groaned because he landed on some glass. That was reckless. Shoto felt like an idiot. He couldn't even think of what his father was going to lecture him on first because of this. All Might knew he shouldn't have, but what just happened to his decimal was funny. So he actually snorted in laughter. Aizawa, however, was annoyed at the boy's recklessness, and Nezu was chuckling. Endeavor, however, didn't find it funny, wondering why his son was making a fool of himself. Now let's open this thing. Izuku went to the golden box and pulled what looked like a small long phone with a couple buttons in it. In few seconds the bow opened. This was too easy, Shoto remarked as they both touched the inside of the empty container. A team has opened the box. The trial is over for Zone 7. Ectoplasm was impressed. That was actually a new record for the trial. Will participants Chisaki and Todoroki please move to Entrance 1 for instructions? It's weird because normally when someone says something was too easy it gets hard, Izuku added as he made the box close. Yes, but it can't anymore since we passed. True? Izuku nodded. Want a race to Entrance 1? Our last race resulted in us both recklessly going through a window. Is that a no? No. No to the race or no to the question? I'm starting now. Shoto jumped out the window and slid on his ice to Entrance 1. Hey! Izuku shouted as he used his grapnel gun to catch up to Shoto, who had a smirk. At Entrance 1 both heroes were already there, the viewing room being right next to it. Good job, my boy, Almighty exclaimed. He didn't care about what the others thought and have Izuku a pat on the head and ruffled his hair. He was too proud of him breaking a record. Don't go through a window like that again though. But it was fun. Izuku didn't think it was fun as much as it was funny that he was so smart, but forgot about windows and stopping before you go through them face first. Hello. Nezu was on Ectoplasm's shoulder. It's actually surprising that you both passed this quick. It's a record, and you both get to go to the third part before the other 7 teams. Neat. What is it? A small tournament. Nezu held up a board that showed 16 participants, all of the spots from the second part of the exams. There will only be 2 rounds. The first round will take everyone from 16 to 8, and the second round will take it down to the 4 students who will be the recommended students this year. Izuku noticed how the board was split. Our first match is against each other. It is. Nezu nodded. At Gym Gamma, Shoto and Izuku looked at each other. As much as they both wanted to pass, they had quickly taken a liking to each other. The window mishap definitely helped. Now they would have to eliminate each other. Endeavor actually thought his son might lose to the kid, unless he actually used his fire and stopped his ridiculous rebellious phase. The boy was quick and strong, his strikes were sharp, and he was obviously experienced with his weapons, so he shouldn't be underestimate him. The 2 teens were silent up to Gym Gamma. Both were too busy thinking about how they had to fight each other. Even if they had just met not even an hour prior, it was still something they didn't like. However, they still had to do it, and were now facing each other in a ring at Gym Gamma, made by 𝗵𝗃 to be elevated just off of the ground. The rules are simple. Ectoplasm spoke from a side. Step a foot off of the platform, you lose. If it becomes one-sided, I will call it. You can knock each other out, but I don't recommend it. Don't try to kill each other. Right. Both guys nodded. All or nothing, Izuku asked, hoping Shoto would know he meant their quirks. Izuku would want to fight someone at their best, and Shoto, not using half of his quirk, would not be his best. Izuku wanted to win the exams, but he also wanted to have respect for Shoto's skills. If Shoto didn't want to give it his all, then Izuku wouldn't give his. He would use only enough speed and strength to keep up and nothing more. Izuku wanted Shoto to use his best potential. Izuku really wanted everyone to do that, because it took him years to build up his confidence to use his, and it would be wrong of someone to not give their all in what they do. Shoto looked at Izuku, the teen who had actually gotten something out of Shoto somehow in the past hour. He saw that determination Izuku had, the drive to give it his all. Shoto knew he should respect that and give his all as well. Shoto, use your flames. Endeavor said like it was an order from the side. Your ice isn't enough. Something went down in Shoto's mind, hating hearing his father say that. Couldn't the bastard just leave him out of his delusional goal? Izuku saw that almost completely hidden look of pain on Shoto and took a breath. He already made up his mind right there immediately about what was going to happen in the match. Shoto was going to win with his ice and shove it to Endeavor. Izuku was going to throw the match. Izuku didn't like how he set his mind on it. He worked hard to get here, and he is just willingly deciding to throw that all away. He could always take the regular entrance exam the following weekend. This decision was all really based on Shoto's look when his father spoke. The look of someone who wanted to prove something wrong. He had to show Endeavor that he doesn't need that fire, and that Endeavor wasn't in charge of Shoto like that. Of course, Izuku wouldn't just up and say I quit. No, he had to play this off as Shoto beating him with the ice, and make it realistic. Okay, begin. Ectoplasm announced the start of the match. Shoto wasted no time and sent a wave of ice that can be described as a glacier at the emerald and gold-eyed team. Izuku acted on his reflexes and jumped to the side with the help of his jet boots. Izuku was about close to being hit with a wall of ice, but he threw an explosive disc that destroyed the ice glacier. Izuku destroyed more ice with another disc and saw a pillar come up below him. He didn't think it would actually knock him out of the ring, so he dodged it, and he pushed the jets to the max power and started shooting around in the air from a place to another. Izuku was shooting all around Shoto and striking him with kicks from left to right. The ice user lost his breath and almost fell over, but used his ice to prop himself up and sent ice from 6 directions at Izuku. Izuku found the one piece of ice that would hit him out if bounds and ignored it, using his explosive gel to make an explosion that'd block all but one of the ice attacks. He got hit by the winning ice attack, it hitting him with enough force to put a crack on his right arm and push him out of bounds. Todoroki has pushed Midoriya out of bounds. Ectoplasm announced the results. Endeavor had an irritated look. Shoto beating that Chisaki kid with just his ice ruined Endeavor, trying to make Shoto realize he can't just ignore his fire. Izuku was smiling. Hey, good match, Todoroki. He offered a fist bump. Shoto looked at Izuku for a second. He felt that with what Izuku has made clear about his own abilities, that the green-haired kid should have beaten him. It was okay. Your dad looks mad. Izuku had his smile as he said that quietly to Shoto. The ice and fire user understood exactly what just happened. Izuku threw the match. Hell, he must now have even been trying hard. All for what? So Shoto can make his dad annoyed. Why would he do something so stupid? Why? Your ice beat me, duh. He wanted those flames, and clearly you only need ice to beat me. Izuku played dumb on the true meaning of Shoto's question. All Might approached them. You gave your all, my boy. Yep, he had a happy grin. It might not have been effort into winning for himself, but that was good effort. Todoroki, Recovery Girl is in the locker room if you need any healing before your next match. For you too, Midoriya, if you need it. Ectoplasm said. Izuku nodded and started to leave with All Might. Shoto was still thinking hard. Izuku wasn't even trying to win, and he still gave Shoto trouble. He was leagues above Shoto, and just gave up a spot that out of the two of them he clearly deserved, for something that didn't involve him. It wasn't right to Shoto. He wouldn't just drop out because Izuku clearly made a conscious choice there, and it would be wasted with Shoto doing that. The ice-using teen then made his own clear choice. Midoriya. The ice and fire user said to get the other teen's attention as he was leaving. Izuku turned to look at him. What's up? The ice and fire user wasn't after power anymore to prove his father wrong. He didn't care about that after seeing Izuku's actions. He now wanted what Izuku had. That will, that drive, to do what he believed was right. He found a rival in Izuku, and not an antagonistic rival, but hopefully a friendly rival. One who understood his problems and was there to help. Izuku gave up something that he worked hard for, and Shoto was definitely not going to let that be the end of their relationship. Next time it will be my all, Shoto stated. He was going to catch up to Izuku and have a proper rematch. Izuku gained a large grin. I can't wait. With that, the friendship of two of the greatest heroes of the next generation was born. The entrance exam as Izuku and All Might went back to Izuku's house. Everyone was ready to congratulate him, but he laid the news flatly with the story of the exam. The people were only his mom and friend group since the Bakugo's were busy. The loss to Todoroki was a bit of a surprise to Izuku's friends. Katsuki was pissed off to the point he almost blew up as he started throwing a temper tantrum about helping others, until Kaminari pointed that it's Hiro's job anyway, but Katsuki wasn't convinced. Until Himi, as she insists to be called, teased him about to the childish behavior. "You look cute when being childish, Baku-kun tilde," Himiko giggled as Katsuki yelled out. "I'm not childish." He threw the 𝐵 match to help Endeavor's little clone. Himiko rolled her eyes. "Don't ignore Fangs." "Well, stop being a little shit." "What did you say?" "Ah, are you gonna cry, boom boom boy?" "Well, at least I'm not a Batgirl, arrogant dick. Spoiled bitch. Fuck you. Fuck you. Fuck you. Fuck you." Katsuki yelled, startling everyone, and Himiko looked at him blankly, and Izuku felt something off about the look on her eyes. It was predatory. Until she whispered something Izuku wished he didn't hear, and will never forget, "My apartment." 8 p.m. And Katsuki seemed to actually consider it. And great, a new power couple was born. Good thing Ashido didn't hear, or it would have been a disaster. And after an awkward staring contest, which Izuku suspected was a date arrangement, everyone had dinner together and talked about the exam happening in a week from now and possible things in the test, which Izuku suspected would test both combat ability and heroic spirit. All Might, looking nervous about that one, confirmed it. Then they settled for a small chat. Was it worth it to throw the match Medabro? Kaminari looked sad that Izuku didn't pass, and it made Izuku happy. "Yup, look at Endeavor's face." Izuku showed his friends a picture of Endeavor having his face in the ugliest scowl ever, and everyone burst into laughter. Katsuki was cackling, so Izuku won the argument. "So what'll you do for the week, Midori?" Ashido asked, and Izuku smiled darkly, making everyone flinch. He grinned in a predatory way, and his friends started shivering when he started to cackle. "I'm going to destroy Endeavor," Izuku answered simply, no longer cackling, and Himiko, being the second scariest in the place, decided to ask why. And to answer her question, Izuku pulled a recorder that Izuku used to record Shoto's confession about Endeavor's sins and abuse. By the end of it, his friends looked both horrified and disgusted. "Show him hell, nerd," Katsuki said simply, and Izuku nodded. The of the exam came, and Izuku was excited to see Hitoshi since the guy couldn't come last week. "Out the way, Izu." Katsuki passed and pushed Izuku lightly. In another time Izuku would have punched him, but he was just excited, so no big deal. He walked ahead until he tripped and started to fall to the ground. Izuku prepared to catch himself, but he was floating in the air. "Since when do I defy gravity?" Izuku asked with a raised eyebrow. "Since I used my quirk on you." Izuku looked to his side to see a cute girl with short brown hair in a bob and a permanent blush on her cheeks smiling at him. "Sorry, I used my quirk on you, but it would have been a bad luck to fall now." She smiled and released her quirk. "Well, that wasn't very heroic of him." The chiming voice of the girl said. Izuku examined her secretly and noticed the pads on her fingers. A 5-finger touch to cancel gravity. Impressive. Izuku examined her brown hair and her plaid scarf covering her chin. "This is nerve-wracking enough as it is," Izuku sighs with a sad smile. "He's always been like that, unfortunately." She laughs. "Sounds like a history. Well, good luck to both of us." She runs ahead with a small wave, which he returns. Izuku hopes she passes. She seems kind. Izuku takes his assigned seat, right next to Katsuki. He sighs quietly. He didn't mind but hoped to see Hitoshi. "Ah, whatever, it's no problem." "Hello, listeners," Izuku snaps to attention. At the podium on the large stage is Mr. Yamada. No, he's on the clock. He's the voice hero, present mic. "Everybody, say hey." Silence. Everyone must be too nervous. "That's cool, listeners. I understand exam jitters. I'm here to present the rules of your practical. Are you ready?" "Yeah." Silence. Izuku idly wonders if he's ever been in a more awkward call and response. Probably not. Present Mike clears his throat. "So, here's how the test goes, listeners." He gestures to the screen behind him, which displays a simple diagram of 7 different exam sites branching off of the main building. You'll be performing a mock villain cityscape attack. You're allowed to bring anything with you, provided you get it approved. After this presentation, you'll each head on over to your assigned testing location. Izuku looks at his exam card. Ground Beta Site B, it reads. That's basically cheating. I know the whole city. Unless they rearranged it. Nedzu would pull something like that. Katsuki elbows him. He must have been muttering. He only does that when nervous, tch. I wanted to see who could smash more robots. Izuku doesn't bother reading Bakugo's card. He just told him all he needed to know. They're at different sites. Each site is filled with a variety of faux villains. Taking them down awards you with points according to their respective difficulties. Use your quirks to disable the foe villains and earn points. 𝗵𝗃 pauses dramatically for effect before holding a finger in front of his face like he's telling a secret. But there's a catch. These foe villains are robots unleashed by an evil mastermind. If your team can stop the mastermind, you automatically end your exam. That being said, the mastermind is an optional villain. The screen behind him shows silhouettes of various robots and their point values with a shadowy human figure posed dramatically, arms wide, behind them. May I ask a question? A broad-shouldered student asks, standing up. He points to his handout. You have only presented 3 of the foe villains, but this handout features 4. Such an error would be unbecoming of the top academy in Japan. Furthermore, you declared we would be in teams, but have not explained anything further on the matter. He suddenly turns to point at Izuku. And you, with the curly hair, you've been muttering this whole time. It's very distracting. If you cannot bring yourself to focus on this exam, please leave. Izuku clenches his fist and stands up himself. I'm more distracted by you standing up and shouting questions. He probably just hasn't gotten to that information yet. If you can't handle waiting and can't focus if someone nearby is thinking aloud, how do you expect to keep your cool in a fight? Katsuki looks at him with something akin to amusement on his face. Izuku ignores him, maintaining his glare at the other boy, who flushes under Izuku's accusations. All right. Take a deep breath, listeners. 𝗬𝗵𝗲 111. You are correct. I haven't talked much about the other villain or the teams. 𝗬𝗵𝗲 12645. You're also correct. I was just getting to those. Izuku nods and sits back down. The other boy bows at a perfect 90 degrees. Thank you, sir. I apologize for the interruption. The 4th foe villain is the mastermind's 𝐒𝐻𝗵𝗲. There's only 1 per sight, but it rampages at close quarters. It's worth 0 points, so you're better off avoiding it. There's more to it than that. Nezu would never introduce an obstacle just for the sake of there being an obstacle. As for teams, you'll be grouped up with up to 4 other examinees randomly chosen from your exam site. Your team will take the practical together. Working together is encouraged, but you each pass or fail as individuals. That's all from me. I'll leave you listeners with our school motto. Napoleon Bonaparte once said, "True heroism consists in being superior to the ills of life. In whatever shape they may challenge us to combat." Izuku whispers the rest of the quote under his breath. Plus ultra, break a leg, everyone. The looming cityscapes of ground beta tower over the examinees. Izuku hears other examinees' awestruck discussions of US resources. You get used to it. From on top of the observation tower, 𝗵𝗃 calls out a series of examinee numbers. The 5 examinees step out from the crowd and take their positions in front of the city. Izuku watches the group run into the city, the moment they're given the go-ahead, barely sharing a glance. He clicks his tongue. They hadn't said a word in the few minutes they had before 𝗵𝗃 told them they could begin. He's not surprised that not everyone wants to play along with the teamwork aspect of the test, especially when 𝗵𝗃 announced that you pass or fail as individuals. But it's no less disappointing. Eventually, he hears his own number called and steps up next to wait. Did he call 𝗬𝗵𝗲 111 as part of my team? He did. The tall boy strides out from the crowd next to him. Great. He doesn't know how, but he's certain Nezu is responsible for this. Oh, he has engines on his leg. Must be related to 𝗬𝗏𝗏. A familiar voice draws him from his thoughts. Wow, we're on the same team. Oh, the girl from the entrance, Izuku says. She smiles. What's in the bag, 𝗏𝗏, says another member of his team. Her posture's a bit weird, and she has green hair like him, but straight, long, and tied. My support gear, Izuku says, pulling the cat's cradle gauntlets out of the bag as well as jet boots and his utility belt. I hope you got it approved. It would be unfortunate if you were disqualified for a simple oversight. Of course, Ida. Here. Izuku pulls the paperwork from the bag as well and hands it to him. Did I tell you my name? No, but your quirk is too similar to the head of Team 𝐸 to be a coincidence, Izuku replies. I was betting on you sharing the name. He fits the gauntlets on and moves to his jet boots. Oh, you're from a hero family? Asks the girl from the entrance. I don't want to be treated differently for it, Ida says. That's a lot of gear, drawls a tired voice. Izuku looks up at the purple-haired boy, and Izuku tries not to grin. Must be the last team member and just his luck. Wish I thought of that. I only got my capture scarf. Are you rested enough for this exam, 𝗏𝗏? Insomnia, is all he says. 𝗵𝗃 said we could bring anything we get approved. I probably could have shown up in a tank, Izuku replies. I'm Midoriya Izuku. It'll be easier to plan if we know what we can all do. What are your quirks? he asked the others more than Shinso. 𝐬𝐴, call me Tsuyu, Kiro. My quirk is frog. I can do anything a frog can. My kicks are really strong. My name is Tenya Ida. As you observed, I have engines in my legs that help me move faster. I'm Ochako Uraraka. She holds up her hands so Izuku can see the pink pads on her fingertips. If I touch something with all 5 fingers, I remove its gravity. The purple-haired boy rubs the back of his neck. Shinsu Hitoshi. Shinsu pauses, biting his lip and looking away. What's your quirk? Ida asked, and Shinso smirked, waiting to see their reactions. Oh, I don't have one, Izuku says flatly, fitting the jet boots on. Ida takes a step back. But I've always loved analyzing quirks. Fair warning, it's taking all of my willpower not to start theorizing about your quirks. He pulls the boot on and moves to the other one. The boots let me launch myself around at high speed for quick bursts, and the gauntlets house special cables I can manipulate. The utility belt has other gadgets. Ida looked at Shinso as if asking the same question. Oh, Shinsu says. I had some bad experiences with classmates at my middle school. They thought they were hot shit because of their quirks? Uraraka asks, frowning. Yeah, he says sheepishly. My quirk, it's not very heroic or useful to this test. Mental quirk could be useful against the mastermind. Tsuyu says. Shinsu sighs. It's brainwashing. If someone responds to me, I can make them do what I say. Not great against robots. And I started calling it hypnosis lately. That sounds useful, Kiro, says Tsuyu. If the mastermind is a person, you could defeat them instantly. Ida nods. Tsuyu puts a finger to her lip. Calling it brainwashing does have some pretty negative connotations, Kiro. Is that why you didn't get along with your classmates? Bullying someone because of their quirk is reprehensible, Ida says. Izuku snorts, barely suppressing a full laughing fit. This is no laughing matter, Midoriya. You remember I'm quirkless, right? He says. I've seen quirk discrimination my whole life. It sucks. Ida flushes. So, plan. We're probably on a time limit against the villains. At the very least, they don't want to have to completely repair the city after each team, so they'll probably call the test if enough buildings get destroyed. Early on, our focus should be the robots. They did say that catching the mastermind ended the test early. You're planning on finding them, Kiro, Tsuyu says. It isn't a question. He nods anyway. If the mastermind is controlling the robots, then we can narrow down their position by observing how they move. He puts a thumb to the corner of his lip. Tsuyu, Ida. You two will be our primary combatants. Uraraka, support them. I'll locate the mastermind and help where I can. Shinsu will take the mastermind. He looks up. Is everyone okay with that? Won't that mean only Tsuyu and Ida pass? Uraraka asks. They did say we pass or fail on our own merits, Tsuyu adds. Not quite. They said we pass or fail as individuals. But that teamwork was encouraged. Additionally, they never said that the points we earn from robots are our pass condition, or at least the only condition. Izuku explains. So, you think there's more to the tests than they're telling us, Shinsu says. And you want us to treat it like a real emergency. Uraraka concludes. Izuku smiles. Exactly, Izuku exclaims before they can discuss it further. President Mike's voice rings from the observation tower. Begin. There are no countdowns in real life. Go.